Bro got exiled for having a build mode ability in a world full of crash-out war addicts. Everybody out here unlocking Dragon Slayer powers while this man pulls up with Minecraft creative mode. The kingdom really looked at him and said, nah, this dude got farmer DLC installed. But hey, at least he got the ride or die employee who is also a part-time mommy with him. At the age of 12, chosen children receive a blessing from God called a gift, basically the fantasy world's version of a ranked character drop. Luke Albert looks out the window at the happy people in town, while his father reminds him that today is the day of his ceremony. Everyone expects Luke to receive a powerful combat gift and become the next great lord of House Albert. No pressure or anything. The royal family has become weaker over the years, causing many lords to fight each other for land and power like grown men beefing over monopoly property. Since Ludi is the son of a famous lord, people expect him to receive a strong fighting ability to help expand their territory. A person's gift is often connected to their parents. Lu's mother has the gift of swordsmanship, while his father possesses holy swordsmanship. His father became famous across the land because of his strength and bravery, rising from a viscount to a marquis in only one generation. Bro really speed ran the noble rankings. Because of this, he has high hopes for Luke. During the ceremony, everyone expects Luke to get something amazing, but Luke's gift is revealed to be village building, shocking everyone there like he just showed up to a war zone carrying farming tools. Luke is confused as hell and demands answers, but even the pop has no clue about the ability. While everyone is gossiping about the supposedly useless ability, his stepbrother Raoul quickly pushes him aside to receive his own gift. Nobody expects much from Raoul because he is the son of a concubine and his mother has no gift, so people basically treat him like an NPC side character. But to everyone's surprise, Raoul receives the gift of holy swordsmanship. The crowd immediately celebrates him as the future lord while completely ignoring Luke. The switch-up goes crazy. Luke looks toward his mother, only to see her silently watching her husband praise Raoul instead. Soon after, Luke is sent north to a barren and empty land, basically fantasy exile DLC, but nobody comes to see him off. Even though he already knew people only respected him because he was the Lord's son, he still feels lonely leaving everything behind. He is now headed north to the deserted wilderness of Albert Domain. This was Raoul's idea from the beginning. Since Luke's gift was village building, Raoul believed he should be sent away to restore the abandoned land, while Raoul would lead the territory during these dangerous times and no one opposed the guy. House Albert is known as a family of warriors, but Luke has always felt different from the rest. My guy really got the peaceful Minecraft build instead of the Demon Slayer starter pack. After traveling for a week, Luke finally arrives at the empty land. The area is filled with forests and mountains where dangerous creatures roam around freely, the type of place where horror music starts playing automatically. He believes he will have to survive all alone until his maid Milla suddenly calls out from behind him. She asks if he feels depressed, but Luke says there is no point crying over things he cannot change. Milla tells him that she promised to stay by his side no matter what happens, certified ride or die behavior. Although Luke is touched by her loyalty, Milla secretly has feelings for him because Luke is exactly her type. She really saw this unemployed exile and said that's the one. Someone throw this woman in prison. She gives him two choices. They can either build a new life in this barren land or run away together somewhere far from everyone else. Even though the second option sounds tempting, Luke decides to make proper use of his gift. As he moves his hand, a strange screen suddenly appears in front of him. Milla watches him stare into empty space and worries that he somehow noticed her hidden feelings. Luke asks her to move back because she is standing inside the screen. He quickly realizes that Milla cannot see it at all. The words on the screen are unfamiliar to this world, but Luke somehow understands them because he carries memories from a previous life. Bro just unlocked the Isekai admin panel. Luke explains that this screen is connected to his gift and decides to test it by building a village. The moment he selects the option, the land begins flattening itself automatically. He sees some more option and creates a small hut casually playing real-life civilization simulator. When Milla finds out that he can also create other stuff, she votes for a well since they need a water source. She does have ulterior motives. Luke is too small to understand and works his magic to make a well. Milla is delighted at first, but the well design is above her brain capacity, so Luke shows her how it works. Milla is delighted that they won't need to fetch water manually now, and asks him to make a field next. Luke is about to make her wish come true when he notices an option of taking Milla as a villager. Luke tells her the deal and she gives her permission, so she is registered as the village's very first resident, which rewards him with extra village points. Luke also notes that he is not counted as a villager and he does not have any plan at the moment, but Milla assures him that the two of them can live together forever. He finds the idea a little lonesome and our thirsty maid steps aside for once. That night, while resting inside the hut, Luke finally feels relieved. Unlike the combat gifts everyone admired, his power does not require killing people. For the first time, he believes he may finally live a peaceful life in a village he builds with his own hands, while the nobles back home are probably still crashing out over territory lines. He has already made up his mind to use this mysterious power to cultivate this barren land and build his own village. He thinks this way of living fits him better, but before that, he needs to get away from his creepy PDF maid who keeps sniffing him like a damn dog. A young lady named Solon told her father that she was leaving home. Seeing her father's confused look, Solon explained that she simply could not take it anymore because Raul was her final boss-level headache. Solon understood that nobles married off their children for political reasons all the time, but there was absolutely no way she was going to marry someone like Raul. As her father kept insisting that Raul would become Lord Albert's successor, Selene immediately chose the run-away-from-home route instead. When the guards tried blocking her path, Selene warned them that they would get hurt if they got in her way. The guards instantly folded because nobody wanted smoke with the Ice Princess. Meanwhile, in the barren land, Luki realized he seriously needed to build another hut because sleeping beside Milla every night was becoming impossible. Luke was surprised when Milla woke up at the exact same moment as him, like she had built an alarm clock powers. When Milla explained that waking up early for her master was part of her duty, Luke reminded her that she was now a villager, not a maid anymore. Even after hearing that, Milla still insisted on helping Luke however she could. Certified ride-or-die behavior. Seeing Luke's face reminded Milla of the day she first arrived at Lord Albert's castle. Milla was the second daughter of a low-ranking noble family, meaning life basically handed her the side character starter pack. Since she could never afford the blessings that rich nobles paid for, she only had two choices. She could either marry into another low-ranking family or work as a maid for someone powerful. That was how she ended up serving the Albert family, while they were rapidly climbing the noble rankings like they were speedrunning the leaderboard. But because Milla had zero experience as a maid, she constantly struggled with her work. One day, she accidentally broke Madame Isabella's favorite dish and panicked instantly because she thought her career was finished before it even started. To her surprise, Luke stepped in and took the blame for her. After listening to Madame Isabella's long lecture, Milla quickly cleaned up the broken pieces while staring at Luke in confusion. Luke then casually told her that his mother would not get angry if he took responsibility instead. Just like that, the 3-year-old Luke accidentally unlocked lifelong loyalty from 12-year-old Milla. After finally saving up 20 points, Luke became excited because he could now build a field. Milla warned him that farming work was harder than it looked, but Luke refused to sit around doing nothing because he wanted to build the village with his own hands. Watching Luke seriously work while trying his best made Milla completely lose focus. She was so distracted staring at him that Luke had to remind her about the seeds she accidentally tossed away. My girl was buffering mid-farming session. That night, Luke relaxed in the bath after spending the whole day planting crops and building the field. But when he heard strange noises coming from the forest, he realized they needed defenses because relying on luck in fantasy worlds is basically asking for trouble. Though honestly, he might also need those defenses against Milla at this point. But over the next few days, Louis kept building watchtowers, walls, and whatever else he could to improve the village. A few days later, Louis and Milla became excited after finally seeing the crops begin to sprout. Hearing the same strange sound again, Luke wondered if some kind of beast was nearby. When Milla tried looking down from the watchtower, she suddenly realized the angle might expose her undergarments to Luke. As her heart started racing while debating whether to let him see, she became slightly disappointed after noticing Luke was completely focused somewhere else. My guy was too locked in on survival mode to notice anything. When Milla finally spotted the source of the noise, she reported that a group of goblins was heading toward the village. With no other option left, Luke immediately rushed toward them. After realizing the goblins were slower than him, Luke became confident that he could handle the fight. He defeated several goblins one after another, but suddenly froze when he noticed one sneaking up behind him with a knife. Fortunately for Luke, Selene arrived at the perfect moment and instantly took the goblin down by throwing an object straight through its head like the cleanest anime save imaginable. The person who saved Luke from the goblin was Cullen Brada, also known as the Iceblade Princess. Cullen is the daughter of a count and was gifted with dual-wielding and live-in magic, allowing her to fight with 2 blades while using water and ice magic like a walking boss battle. Selene was also Luke's former fiancée. Luke asked why she suddenly showed up at his village, but Selene was more shocked at how much Luke had changed after not seeing him for 2 years. Luke became even more surprised after learning that Selene had literally run away from home. Luke could not believe that Selene completely cut ties with her family after finding out she was going to be forced to marry Raul. Honestly, Raul's personality alone is enough to make anybody activate escape mode. Hearing how determined Cullen was to avoid marrying Raul, even saying she would rather die than marry him, Luke became nervous because he never realized she hated the marriage that much. Cullen then became confused when Luke apologized for dragging her into the arranged marriage. She quickly explained that she never wanted to marry Raul, but she actually would have been fine marrying Luke instead. Just as Cullen was about to confess her feelings, Milla instantly interrupted by naming her and telling her to stop the private conversation. My girl entered like a jealous side character in a rom-com, but seeing Cullen completely confused, Milla introduced herself as the first villager, which somehow made even less sense. Milla then explained that this place was Luke's village, and she was officially its first resident. Selene became worried after hearing Luke was sent to a barren wasteland, but she was shocked when she saw the walls, watchtower, crops, and even a working well. By seeing how confused she looked, Luke decided it would be easier to just show her. The moment Luke built a storehouse right in front of her eyes, Selene completely lost it because an entire building literally spawned out of nowhere like Luke was running creative mode. Luke explained that his gift allowed him to build facilities, though there were still limitations to what he could create. Even so, Kellen became more impressed with Luke's gift than ever before. Luke then noticed a notification asking whether Kellen should become a villager, but he hesitated because he did not think this harsh land was a proper place for her. He also worried about how House Albert and House Badrada would react after the broken engagement. However, Cullen reassured him that the Alberts would not waste time attacking her family, because the Badradas were already surrounded by enemies and could not afford more problems. She also mentioned that her younger brother had just received a powerful gift, meaning her family would still be fine. After deciding she wanted to stay in Luga's village, Cullen suddenly became a villager automatically before Luke even pressed yes. Luke was confused at first, but his frustration faded after noticing that his daily village points increased to 12. Priorities immediately shifted from romance drama to resource management. Luke still pointed out that with Kaylin's powerful gifts, she could easily find somewhere much better to live than his tiny village. When Kaylin asked whether her staying would cause problems, Luke struggled to answer because he clearly had other thoughts in mind. Meanwhile, Milla suddenly released an invisible dark aura while glaring at Kalayan, even though the two had literally just met. Milla warned Kalayan that they did not even have proper showers or beds, so life here would be difficult for someone raised as a noble. But Kalayan refused to back down and pointed out that they also needed her strength to fight monsters like goblins. Realizing she had a point, Milla reluctantly accepted her, although she quickly reminded Cleland that as the first villager, she was technically the senior. Cleland immediately thought Milla was trying to establish dominance, but Milla calmly explained that she already felt sorry for Cleland because of her chest size. Bro started a whole war with one sentence. After getting roasted like that, Cullen desperately tried explaining the difference between being flat and having an actual cup size, but eventually gave up after completely losing the argument. Louis decided to walk away from the mess. Later that night, Cullen became shocked after seeing how closely Louis and Milla slept together inside such a tiny hut. Milla immediately glared at her and asked if she had a problem with it. She even suggested that Cullen should sleep outside instead. As the two girls started arguing again, Luke quietly regretted not building another hut sooner because this place was turning into a battlefield. Luke then suggested that he would simply sleep in the storehouse, but both Kellen and Milla instantly rejected the idea and kept trying to force the other girl to sleep there instead. Milla started projecting her lewd fantasies on Kellen, and Luke decided it was the perfect time to move to the storehouse. In the end, they all decided to sleep together inside the same hut. While both girls peacefully slept beside him, Luke stayed awake the entire night suffering in silence. My guy trapped in accidental harem mode already. Back when Clayne was 10 years old, she had the chance to visit Albert Castle. As her father reminded her that she would be meeting her future husband, Clayne honestly could not care less because arranged marriage meetings were basically fantasy blind dates. While walking around the estate, she suddenly noticed a rock flying toward her. After peeking into the bushes, Clayne spotted Raoul and assumed he was Luke at first. However, she quickly realized Raoul was bullying another kid who had been tied up like this man was already training to become a professional menace. Limited Pax Alarwas to Plager appeared to throw another rock directly at the kid's face. Clayne rushed over and demanded to know what he was doing. She warned him that he could seriously hurt the boy if he kept throwing rocks like an unhinged little goblin. But Raoul ignored her completely and still threw the rock anyway because apparently common sense never spawned in his inventory. Just before the rock could smash into the kid's face, Luke suddenly stepped in and blocked it with his own head. Clayne immediately rushed over after seeing blood running down Luke's forehead. Meanwhile, Raoul panicked and ran away instantly while yelling that Luke was not supposed to be the target. Bro folded the second consequences appeared. Later, Clayne found out that Raoul was actually Luke's younger brother. She also felt relieved after learning that the kind boy who protected someone else was actually Luke himself. A few years later, Clayne met Luke again and asked whether he had ever told his father about Raoul's violent behavior. But Luke refused because he did not want to ruin his brother's reputation any further. Luke understood that people already treated Raoul badly because he was the son of a concubine. Seeing how kind Luke remained even towards someone like Raoul made Clayne even happier that she was engaged to him instead of his crash-out brother. Back in the present, Luke finally saved up 50 points and became excited because he could now build a small house. Ever since Clayne joined the village, Luke had been sleeping squeezed between Milla and Clayne inside the tiny hut. My guy was fighting for his life every night. Hoping to finally escape that chaos, Luke quickly built the house. When everyone stepped inside, they were shocked to see that it already came fully furnished like somebody purchased the premium furniture pack. Both Clayne and Milla became curious because it was their first time seeing a modern kitchen. As Luke explained how everything worked, Milla became excited after realizing cooking would now become much easier. Luke then proudly showed them the bathroom like he was presenting legendary ancient technology. But after explaining how the toilet worked, Luke completely froze when Clayne casually asked where the waste actually goes. Bro discovered the true final boss question. Since Luke could not answer properly, both Clayne and Milla started creating theories and assumed servants hidden underground probably collected it somehow. After realizing they no longer needed to use the outdoor well every day, Clayne became genuinely excited. Meanwhile, Milla suffered emotional damage because she realized she could no longer accidentally watch Luke bathing outside at night. Luke then revealed another important feature of the house. Since there were now 2 bedrooms, everyone could finally sleep separately. However, both Kalain and Milla instantly rejected the idea because neither wanted to share a room with the other. The rivalry was getting stronger than the village walls at this point. Remembering how badly the two got along, Luke decided they would all just sleep in the same room instead. He planned to sleep on the floor while the girls took turns using the bed. But somehow the situation still became a complete mess because the 3 of them ended up cramped together on the bed anyway. Milla refused to let Luke sleep on the floor while Kalain was fine with the floor itself, but refused to sleep beside Milla. With no other options left, the 2 girls reluctantly agreed to share the bed. Meanwhile, Luke was getting crushed between them like the world's most stressed sandwich, and eventually had to squeeze his way out because he literally could not breathe comfortably anymore. Time flew for Luke as it had already been a month since he developed the barren land. Thanks to his gift for village building, the development proceeded without any problems, and our guy was basically speedrunning civilization like a cracked Minecraft player with admin commands. Kalain surprised Luke with a boar and explained that she had hunted it down in the northern forest. Luke was concerned, thinking that the north was a dangerous place, because every fantasy forest north of something is always trying to delete somebody's save file. Kalain agreed, but mentioned that if one doesn't go too deep into the forest, it's fine, which honestly sounds exactly like famous last words before a side character gets folded by a monster bear. After informing Luke that she could make food last long using her ice magic and boasting about obtaining more meat, Kalain glanced at Milla with a condescending look like she just dropped the hardest flex of the century. Milla, on the other hand, didn't back down because the beef between these two was honestly becoming more competitive than ranked lobbies. She pointed out that she had been preparing the food and insulted Kalain for not knowing how to cook and butcher meat while trying to prove she knew how to butcher meat. Kalain noticed something that caught Luke's attention. Kalain shared that she heard a voice coming from a large group. Luke was amazed when they saw a group of people in the distance. Luke assessed that the people might not be a threat since they were mostly women and children. Seeing their exhausted looks, Luke remembered a recent battle and assumed they might be refugees, knowing that other than his village, the area was a wasteland with no fresh water or food nearby. Luke, compassionate, couldn't ignore the worn-down refugees and welcome them to his village because our boy physically cannot mind his own business when suffering people appear. The frail man named Burlette was surprised to learn that Luke was the head of the village. He introduced himself as the leader of his group. Seeing they looked like they were about to faint, Luke offered them water from the well. The people were happy and grateful for Luke's kind action. As Luke demonstrated how to use the village well, they were astonished as it was the first time they had seen that type of well. Acting like Brid just revealed alien technology. Feeling the water in their hands, the group immediately drank and replenished themselves. Noticing some were still waiting for their turn to drink, Luke decided to build another well. When Luke called their attention, the people were surprised as they hadn't seen the well earlier. And honestly, Luke pulling structures out of nowhere probably looked suspicious as hell. Luke then whispered to Milla to prepare the boar that Milla had hunted earlier. As the group finally sat down and rested, Burlette revealed that they had left their village behind. Most of their men were drafted, and the older folks stayed behind, insisting they'd be an extra burden. Burlette's father, the village head, insisted on staying and placed Burlette as the leader. They wandered with nowhere to go until Burlette and the others found themselves in the barren wasteland. It was a stroke of luck when they happened to spot Luke's village just as they were about to run out of food and water, because another 5 minutes and this would have turned into the world's saddest camping trip. Learning of their dire situation, Luke wanted to offer them lots of food, but the crops weren't ready to be harvested yet. Luke instead offered them delicious meat from the boar Kalain hunted. As the freshly cooked meat was placed and prepared, Burlette and everyone else ate and cried, finally able to enjoy something delicious. Seeing how the group he was leading was now happy and had survived their journey, Burlette couldn't hold back his tears and expressed gratitude to Luke. Luke knew that Burlette's group hadn't yet reached the end of their hardships, as it was impossible for them to survive in the wastelands. Luke took a leap of faith and offered Burlette and everyone else to live in his village. Luke shared that they lacked people to help in field work. Burlette was worried since there were too many, mostly women and children. Understanding Burlette's concern, Luke knew that with their current supply it would be difficult to feed everyone. Luke shared that he had been relying on wheat and seeds from the castle. Since the 3 of them hadn't done enough to survive in the wasteland, Luke asked for Burlette's help. Seeing how genuine Luke's eyes were, Burlette closed his eyes and accepted Luke's offer, because at that point saying no would have been financially irresponsible. While the others were enjoying their rest, Luke was surprised when multiple notifications flashed behind him. When Burlette's caravan of 51 people became Luke's villagers, Luke received a bounty of benefits from his gift. Initially scared, Luke was surprised when he could no longer see anything but screens. Bro basically getting hit with the fantasy version of 50 Windows pop-ups at once. Skimming through the layers of notification windows, Luke was surprised and wondered about the skills shown in the window. After gaining more villagers, Luke later realized that he had earned a bunch of points. As the area of his village increased, Luke saw a skill notification and wondered what those were. When he tried moving his finger, he was shocked to learn that he could move the facilities so easily, which he found very useful. Bro basically unlocked creative mode and immediately became a city planning addict. Luke felt relieved as he no longer had to worry about arranging the facilities. He then noticed Burlet trembling and realized that he was now scared as he saw the buildings move on their own. Thinking that he had gone crazy from exhaustion, Burlet ended up passing out, because imagine surviving the wasteland just to watch houses start drifting around like haunted furniture. Cully and Luke then tried explaining that what Burlet saw was his gift. Luke's new villagers were impressed by Luke's gift, as it was the first time they had ever seen one. Luke realized that common folk do not get to see gifts all that often. It was a first for Luke to be treated so kindly after how people were towards him at the castle, so our boy was probably taking emotional damage from basic human decency. As he shared his gift with the kids, Luke felt a little down after hearing the kids wishing they'd get the gift of holy swordsmanship. Luke was no longer surprised, as the gift of combat was pretty much what everyone wished for, because nobody grows up dreaming about becoming the legendary zoning permit manager. Making homes for his new villagers, Luke decided to build a row house that had 5 living spaces, each containing 2 rooms and a dining area. One room alone was huge enough for a family of 5. Since the rooms did not come with baths, Luke planned to build them one. However, it was not listed in his facilities. Luke apologized and informed them that they'd have to use one of the wells to take a bath, which probably killed the luxury apartment vibe instantly. Realizing that one row house could fit 25 people and cost 80 points, Luke decided to make more of it. After expanding the crops and building walls for the part of the village, Luke was immediately exhausted, as his village point was now at 214. As the villagers were amazed at how huge the crops and houses were, Luke informed them that they could just begin tomorrow, as he had to rest. Relieved that his new villagers looked nice, Luke remembered that he had a skill called Assess Villager. When he tried using it, he was surprised when a window showed up in front of him, showing the information of that specific villager. My guy really pulling up fantasy LinkedIn profiles in real time. Feeling guilty for looking at private information, Luke noticed a gift in the notification and asked the villager if he had a gift. The villager responded that he had none, since there weren't any churches around that would give them blessings. Luke wondered if the man received a blessing. Would that blessing be his gift? When Luke shared his skill with Milia and Kalain, the two were happy that Luke had such a skill, but unsure how that works. When Kalain asked Luke to try the skill on her, Luke informed Kalain of her stats. Confused, Kalain asked what village loyalty was. Luke explained that it is the sense of loyalty and pride toward the village. Villagers with low village loyalty are prone to committing crimes and rebelling, which caution was advised, so bro basically unlocked the Who's plotting nonsense detector. After learning how the Assess Villager skill works, Kalain suggested using the skill on everyone, since they were going to need the manpower to keep their large community running. Luke did not want to impose his skill on those who wanted to keep things private. Kalain tried making Luke realize that his ability may be vital in keeping the village safe, and that he did not need to tell them that they were being assessed. When Kalain suggested for Mila to also get checked out, Mila was getting nervous and asked if the skill could read minds. Noticing that Kalain was curious about what was on her mind, Mila left the room as she did not want to reveal her secret to Luke. Thinking that Mila may be just tired, Luke visited Burlet and asked him for his personal information. Luke explained that he was collecting references so that assigning them jobs would be easier. After sharing his personal information, Burlet then introduced his younger brother, Burlet. One by one, Luke gathered and saw all of the villagers' personal information. After gathering the data of all the people that lived in his village, Luke never thought that he would find 4 people with potential gifts like Barlote. When Kalain checked up on Luke about his assessment, she got excited upon learning that there were 4 people who have a gift. Kalain informed Luke that only the church or someone with an oracle gift could bestow one upon another person. On top of that, they had no money to donate, which frustrated her, because apparently unlocking your own talent tree came with a paywall now. Back at school, Luke was taught that 50% of the nobles had gifts, while the commoners only had less than 1%. However, in the village that mostly consisted of commoners, they had 4 people with gifts. Thinking that if what they discovered was not just a coincidence, Luke wondered if people were led to believe that most commoners do not have gifts. The large monetary donation needed to get a gift prevents the commoners from ever knowing that they possess a gift. Luke could only theorize the corruption between the church and the nobles. Wondering if he was getting ahead of himself, Luke's attention was called by Mila and was surprised when he saw her dump a bucket of water all over herself. Claim. When Luke asked what was wrong, Mila ripped her clothing and told Luke that he may now inspect her as she was no longer carrying dubious feelings. Confused by Mila's action at first, Luke ended up agreeing and used the skill on Mila. Kalain thought that it would be funny and asked Luke to read the information aloud because she was absolutely farming chaos at that point. After reading Mila's status out loud, all of them were surprised to learn that Mila had the gift of an oracle. 3 days had passed since they gained new members in their village. Even though they learned that Mila had the gift of oracle, it still lay dormant since there was no way in the village for her to receive a blessing. Luke heard rumors that people end up receiving gifts after years of praying at the church, which honestly sounds like the longest gacha grind imaginable. The problem was that they didn't even have a church. Burlet called Luke's attention and informed him that the vegetables Luke planted were almost ready to be harvested. Burlet was surprised at how big the vegetables were, as he had never seen anything like it. When Burlet guessed that it may be because of the soil, Luke smiled as he remembered that the field he made had the benefit of good quality soil. As they harvested the vegetables, Burlate was very impressed at how many they were able to gather. After thanking everyone for helping with the harvest, Luke heard others talk about how delicious the vegetables were. Luke decided to hold a celebration for the new villagers and the harvest. When Luke and Clan offered to help with the cooking, Milla was touched by Luke's actions. Even though Luke has the highest rank in the village, he was still so eager to help with menial tasks. Bro really out here being the most hands-on mayor in fantasy history. As Milla was about to compliment Luke, she immediately asked him to stop since he was cutting the vegetables incorrectly. After suggesting to Luke to just wash the vegetables, Colleen did not want to be left out and showed her slicing skills. However, she ended up slicing the whole table, which annoyed Milla because apparently her cooking style is just collateral damage. While Luke and Colleen did their part in the kitchen, Milla had already served the food for their celebration. The villagers were so excited as they couldn't remember the last time they had a feast. Noticing that the other villagers were looking at him, Luke wondered what was that about. The villagers then requested Luke to give their celebration a toast. After thanking everyone for helping with the harvest, Luke initiated the celebration by giving a warming toast. Berlut's eyes glowed as he very much liked the food. Berlut and his brother had no idea that good quality food could be grown on barren land, because they were basically eating depression meals before this village arc started. As they complimented the facilities Luke made, they also shared their worries after first hearing about Luke's gift. Luke's attention was again called by the others as he was informed that a group of people was approaching the village. After seeing the refugees from the watchtower, Burley immediately noticed a familiar face and called the man out. When Luke became curious about their identities, Burley introduced them as citizens from another village with whom they often interacted. Noticing that they were all very worn down, Donga explained that there was no longer anything they could do other than leave the village. When Donga mentioned how impressed he was with Barrelite for managing to resettle on a wasteland, Barrelite corrected him and revealed that they just arrived a few days ago, introducing Luke as the village head. Donga was confused at first, but eventually shook Luke's hand and introduced himself as the refugees' leader. Seeing how tired Donga's people were, Luke told them that they can discuss details later after they enjoy themselves with the food and the party. Though others were shy to join them, Luke smiled as he insisted and told everyone that any friend of Burlette was also a friend of his. The day ended with everyone enjoying the celebration. Morning came and Luke was immediately greeted by his new villagers. Seeing how Burlette and Donga were working very hard, Luke guessed that they would receive another good harvest. After the party, Donga's group decided to stay and live in the village. They were very happy as they could now eat delicious food and have a proper place to stay, which was honestly a massive upgrade from wandering around the wasteland on survival mode. With the addition of 44 villagers, they now have a total of 97 people. Luke created more row houses and added 4 more fields just in case they were short on vegetables. Thanks to the quality harvest, Luke's village still had a surplus of food. The same with Burlette's group. Donga's group was also mostly women and children. Among them, 4 had potential gifts. Unfortunately, they could not use the gifts since they could not receive a blessing. Pleased that his village had grown so much, Luke's attention was called as he was informed that there was another group of possible refugees coming to the village. Guessing that the impact of war had spread so far, Luke asked how many people were there. He was surprised after hearing that there were about 70 people incoming, and at this point Bro's village was growing faster than a Discord server after a viral clip. Luke felt somewhat weird when he offered settlement for Baolate's group. He was not scared at all, but since their village was already occupied by 97 people, Luke was worried about extending help to another huge number of people as he would be responsible for everyone in the village. Luke was scared that he might put everyone's lives in jeopardy, because Bro went from random noble reject to full-time mayor, farmer, architect, and therapist in like 2 weeks. Seeing Luke standing in silence, Salon told Luke that they could no longer accommodate them as there were no longer rooms available. Salon explained that their village was already full. Giving help to the incoming refugees would only hurt them down the line. Salon made Luke realize that though his gift was great, there was still a limit to how many people he could look after. After informing Luke that he did not have to make the hard decisions, Salon offered to talk to the refugees herself. When Luke tried to stop Kellen, he was told by Burlite and Donga that Kellen was correct and to leave everything to them. Both Donga and Burlite ended up meeting with the refugees themselves. Milla comforted Luke as she reassured him that everything would be fine and that she would always be there to back him up. Seeing Kellen and Milla start another argument, Luke realized Kellen's point, because these two somehow turn every emotional moment into a ranked debate match. However, Luke felt like he would regret it if he turned them away now. Luke promised to try his best to make sure his choices won't cause anyone trouble. Knowing that his choices would also affect the people under him, Luke asked for everyone to back him up in case things go bad. Hearing Luke's words as well as his resolve, Milla and the others were now even more impressed with Luke as they promised to help him. Luke ended up meeting with the refugees who were known as Leon's caravan that consisted of 76 people. As another influx of people pushed Luke's village over a 100, their village level was now level 4. With the level up, Luke gained a bonus of 1,000 village points, more facilities, more village space, and a new skill called Facility Upgrade. With the extra village space, it gave Luke some room to move things around and added new row houses and wells. Knowing that each time the village leveled up, the land more than doubled, Luke wondered how big the village could get. Thinking ahead of himself again, Luke chose to focus more on another important matter, which was the ability to make a church. The potential benefit of building a church was huge because at this point, blessings were basically locked behind a premium subscription. However, as usually only people of the church could bestow blessings, Luke decided to build one since it was much better than having no church. After building the church, Luke felt a sense of nostalgia and remembered the time when he and Raoul received their gifts. After seeing the church Luke built, Milla mentioned that the feeling she used to get in a church was now much stronger. Seeing Milla moving around so much inside the church, Luke told her that she might end up receiving her gift because of her faith. Realizing the opportunity to help Luke out, Milla's eyes glowed with excitement and told Luke that she would pray from dusk till dawn. Girl instantly locked in like she found her life mission. Now, ever since building the church, Milla had been cooped up in the church. As for Luke's new skill facility upgrade, Luke tried using it to improve the storehouses and ended up giving him a few options. When he tried it with the fields, he also received the same options. Luke realized that they could save more space if they could harvest more. He then replaced the plaster walls with stone walls and changed the small houses to a medium one. A few days had passed and Luke wanted to check up on Milla. Luke was surprised at how Milla changed, because she looked like somebody who had been grinding religion XP non-stop for an entire week. Upon seeing Luke at the church, Milla immediately hugged him as she revealed that she had gained the gift of Oracle. Milla was very grateful towards Luke as she couldn't believe that she received the gift without a priest. Seeing how Milla was getting so close to Luke, so Luke felt that it was wrong to allow Milla to become a LWD priestess, because she was already acting way too affectionate for Salu's peace of mind. Luke then gathered everyone from the village and told them that they all have the potential to receive a gift. The village showed a hint of doubt since they only knew that nobles were the only ones who could receive the gifts. Luke shared that some families were more likely to receive one and that their status did not really matter. Luke knew that what he was saying might be difficult to believe, which he suggested that they at least try. When Milla called upon Baolitz and gave him the gift of swordsmanship, Baolitz felt a weird sensation. As the crowd became more excited, some even suggested making Baolit a sword out of wood. Bro unlocking a whole new class in front of a live audience. Luke offered Baolit his sword since he knew that it was more useful in Baolit's hands. Baolit, who had never wielded a sword before, felt right after holding one. Even though he was no longer young, Baolit was still grateful and promised that he would become strong enough to keep their village safe. As everyone became excited, Milla gave those who had potential the gift that was laying dormant within them. Some were a bit disappointed while others cheered since the villager Noel, who was only 13 years old, received the gift of holy swordsmanship. Out of the many people they had in the village, only 17 had a potential gift. Since 4 of those were only children, Luke decided not to grant them a gift yet, as it would take a toll on their bodies while growing up. As Luke and Milla gave them the gifts, Luke hoped that their food supply and defense would give everyone peace of mind. Seeing Piron and Baolit spar, Burlate and Luke were very impressed since they were improving at a really fast rate. Burlate was jealous as he realized now that the power of the gift was special. Knowing the power that the gift holds, Luke finally understood why his father wanted them to obtain the holy swordsmanship so badly. Salin was impressed by her students and decided that the next time she went hunting she would bring them along, which honestly sounded less like training and more like an advanced survival exam. Luke became jealous as well after learning that Salin had become a teacher even though they were of the same age. The women of the village encouraged Luke and pointed out that his title as the village head was just as cool as the others. Luke felt a little conflicted after being bombarded with compliments. My guy getting emotionally jumped by supportive villagers for the first time in his life. The ratio of women to men in their village was roughly 2.1, and most of those who were married had their husbands forcibly conscripted. Seeing how their village was becoming more lively, Burlate was grateful and thanked Luke for everything. Luke's attention was yet again called as he was informed that more refugees were coming. Noticing that the refugees looked terrified, Luke asked what had happened to them. A refugee revealed that they were attacked by a gang of thieves. They were able to escape, but the few who resisted were killed and a large number of them were dragged off somewhere. Selene understood that what had happened to them was awful. However, since they arrived in the village, it meant that it would no longer be just their problem. Because trouble in fantasy worlds always travels in giant ugly batches. Luke was confused when the refugees suddenly apologized, but upon learning that they may have led the thieves to the village, Luke froze as he did not know what to do. Bro finally realizing village management was about to turn into tower defense mode. Bro, a member of a gang of thieves, was annoyed since he received an earful from his boss. Bro's main job was to abduct refugees and sell them to slave traders. Bro literally picked the most villain NPC occupation possible. Thanks to one of the recent wars, refugee numbers were up and made their business increase. Unfortunately for Bar, some of the refugees escaped because of the little mistake he made. While following the refugees' tracks, Bar was surprised as he did not remember a village posted on the barren land. Seeing that there were only women and children, Bar felt like he hit the jackpot. Bar was sure that the village was easy to take down since it was run by refugees. There was another reason why the gang was able to work fluidly, and that was all because of Baolig's gift of telepathy. Baolig then used his telepathy and called for a man named Satan. When Satan asked if Balaj had found the escaped refugees, he shared that he did and revealed that he also found a village of refugees. As Balaj glanced over the village, Luke felt something weird and was notified that an intruder was in their village. When Luke informed Kellen that his ability alarmed him of an intruder, Salen became excited since Luke's new ability would be a big help in keeping their village safe. When Kellen was informed of the intruder's location, she assumed that the gang was probably scouting the area since the village was new. Learning of their location, Salen noticed the chilling silence and realized that they were concealing their presence. When Klenot asked Luke to stand back since they have no idea where their exact location was, she was a little dumbfounded as Luke pointed out the exact location. Bro casually pinging enemies like he had wall hacks enabled. Surprised that his location was exposed, Bro tried escaping. However, when he noticed that only kids had spotted him, he tried attacking them. Unfortunately for Bro, he was immediately frozen by Klennon. Bro only had been woken up by someone calling him out using his telepathy. As he was informed that the gang of thieves was about to head to the village, Bar became more confused with the place as it had a jail cell. When Selen asked Bar a question, Bar did not want to make more mistakes and lied to his colleagues that only children and women were at the village, which would be easy to take down. Out of nowhere, the old lady that Luke spoke to before asked them if she could handle Bar. After getting inside the cell, Selen warned the old lady not to get too close. After agreeing with Colin, the old lady asked Bar if he had a mother. When the old lady asked Bar to imagine her mother's face, Bar tried his best to hold his laughter and pretended to follow the old lady's request. When Colin warned the old lady not to be fooled by Bar's tears, they were surprised when the old lady suddenly struck Bar so hard in the groin, Bro immediately discovering new levels of pain and regret. The old lady's demeanor changed as it was revealed that her name was Nima, and her recommended job was a torturer. Nima then asked Bar to remember her mother's smile as she promised that once she was done with him, all Bar would ever think of was her mother's tear-stained face. As Nima's menacing laugh echoed throughout the jail cell, she suggested to Luke and Seelan to prepare for battle while she continued to interrogate Bar. The gang of thieves that Balos from finally arrived at Luke's village, and at this point the whole place was seconds away from turning into a fantasy raid lobby. A gang member sensed that something was off with Bala's responses as their conversation kept breaking off. Curious as to where Bala could be hiding, another member of the gang told him that Bala was just around slacking off, because apparently nobody in this group expected competence from each other anyway. When the gang member suggested listening in on the village first before they started their raid, the gang boss told them that all they needed was brute force to make them yield, and not overthink, Bro running purely on caveman patch notes. Knowing that the village gate would not be enough to stop them, the gang boss charged right at the gate and destroyed it easily with one attack. As the boss instructed his men to follow him, Luke immediately sensed that the gang of thieves was already at the village. The thieves found it weird that no one was screaming even though they made so much noise. Thinking that Bar may have screwed up, all of them were surprised when they suddenly fell into a water moat. When they heard a cracking sound, the thieves later realized that the water was freezing. Seeing that they no longer could move, Luke and the others showed up as they couldn't believe they took everyone down without getting hurt. These dudes really got caught in the world's nastiest surprise ice bath. After giving her students the task of handling the thieves, Sarlin froze as she heard the gang boss's voice behind her. Fortunately for Sarlin, her reflexes were fast enough to block the gang boss's sneak attack. Underestimating Sullen's prowess, the gang boss kept swinging his sword, making it difficult for Sullen to fight back. Seeing the fight between Sullen and the gang boss ensue, Luke noticed that the ice was melting and instructed the others to round up the thieves. Luke froze in fear as the thieves were already reaching out to his neck as all of the thieves had escaped from the water moat, and our boy instantly realized village management did not prepare him for getting jumped at melee range. As the thieves were about to reach Luke, Balat was just in time to save and protect him from the thieves. While Luke was becoming dizzy from being held by Balat, he noticed that his two villagers froze in fear. Luke realized that it was Perron and Lando's first real battle, and fighting the thieves would be their death. As the two froze in fear, they were then instructed to duck as Null came right on time to save them. Bro entering the fight like an emergency patch update. Satan was pleased after noticing that the villagers were now getting hysterical. Taking his eyes away from Bale and Luke, Satan was knocked off by Luke's double kick. Luke then instructed everyone to push the thieves back into the moat since their bodies were still frozen. Luke's words increased the villagers' morale as they used every bit of strength they had to fight off and push the gang of thieves into the water. Perun and Lando, who were no longer afraid, focused themselves on pushing off the thieves. Seeing how the other gang members were being thrown into the water moat, Satan thought of it as crazy and couldn't believe what was happening. Satan realized that the two were novices, but they were now strong enough to push the experienced thieves. When Satan noticed his boss's weapon being dropped, he was shocked to find out that their boss was already so worn down. Selen revealed that she had cut and frozen the boss little by little until he finally could not move. Selen complimented the gang boss's strength. However, he was not smart enough to notice that he was slowly being injured. My guy got debuffed frame by frame and still thought he was winning. Unable to believe that they were defeated by the village, Satan could only look down in defeat as they were all captured. The next day, after obtaining information from the thieves about the people they abducted, Luke and everyone else launched a rescue mission and saved them. It was a stroke of miracle that Luke and the others found them before they were sold off. It was all thanks to Nima's torturing skill that they were able to obtain vital information. And honestly, nobody in that village was ever looking at Grandma the same way again. They now only have one problem to deal with, and that was the captured thieves. Luke was sure that the thieves wreaked havoc on the lives of so many before them. Normally, Luke would hand them over to a nearby domain with proper laws and policies. However, considering the time and the recent influx of refugees, Luke does not think that any domain has the wherewithal to handle the thieves. Wondering what his next move was, a notification suddenly showed up in front of Luke, asking him if he wishes to turn the thieves into villagers. Knowing that the option would be too risky, Luke noticed that there was a rehab option. Luke then opened the notification and found that after building a jail cell, another perk showed up which could make criminals and miscreants reform. Villager was just a title Luke's gift can assign, and that doesn't mean that they would have to treat the thieves the same way. Luke planned to make the thieves villagers and then use the assess villager skill to check their loyalty and reform status. Luke knew that if he kicked them out, the thieves would end up doing more damage to other people again. Wanting to know the others' opinions about his plan, the villagers were dissatisfied with it as they could not forget how they were harmed and the thought of being harmed by them again. Barolet and Donga wanted to take things into consideration for the future crimes that may be committed in the village. Barolet planning to put the thieves in the rehabilitation center first and move forward after they got out. Luke still faced resistance from the villagers. A villager was shivering knowing that he would not meet justice for his family that was killed. After their talk, a few people left the village. As the number of villagers went down, Luke noticed that once a villager with low loyalty was away for a certain amount of time, they would be automatically removed as villagers. Nema shared that even though she feels for those who've lost friends or family, it could not be helped if they do not align with the direction of the village. Nema pointed out that their village was peaceful and everyone was cooperative. Others were not used to seeing so much chaos. Nemi's character suddenly changed as she warned Luke that the villagers would one day forget the good things Luke did for them and would absolutely go wild. It was human nature. Nema was quite fond of dealing with criminals and miscreants. Nema advised Luke to not hesitate and push forward, because Grandma really switched into dark philosopher mode out of nowhere. Agreeing with Nema, Luke stepped in front of the cell and allowed the thieves to become villagers. Luke's decisions exceeded 300 villagers, which made his village now level 5. When the rehabilitation center was built, Luke and the others tried to be optimistic as they didn't know how effective the center would be. To test the waters, Luke decided to put 5 obedient-looking thieves first. It was decided that Nema would be the one to look after those who were in the rehabilitation center, which honestly sounded terrifying for literally everyone involved. Luke only hoped that their plan would solve their thief problem. Seeing the thieves with their puppy dog eyes, Luke thought that they had already learned their lesson. But the second Luke saw their loyalty status, he immediately asked Nema to take them away. Bro saw those stats and instantly hit the emergency button. Next on Luke's task list was fixing the gate that the thieves broke. Planning on upgrading the gate so that it won't get easily destroyed next time, Luke wondered what other new stuff was available now that he had reached level 5. Luke received the ability called Facility Customization. This allows Luke to remodel facilities by spending village points. Luke planned to add roads and waterways in the village. Though they do not cost many points, Luke still needed to make sure to use his points wisely because our guy was starting to realize city planning eats resources faster than a gacha addiction. Overseeing his entire village, Luke was pretty pleased at how it all came together. Since the water moat Luke built to take care of the thieves had gone back to normal, wondering what to build next, Luke gathered everyone and announced that he had built a public bath where everyone can bathe. After informing the villagers of what to know about the bathhouse, the people were now eager to try it. After placing their clothes on the rack and testing the water, the men found it very pleasing. Luke then asked the ladies their opinion about the bath, which they enjoyed very much. Pleased that everyone liked the bathhouse, Luke's smile slowly turned to worry as the bathhouse became chaotic, because anime bath scenes legally cannot stay peaceful for more than 30 seconds. While Luke went towards the training area and talked to the other villagers, Seelan immediately noticed him and subconsciously whacked Barlet's sword away. While Karma asked about the status of the bathhouse, they suddenly heard a shout somewhere. Noticing that the sword was destroyed, Seelan apologized as it was the last training sword they had. They then informed Luke that they were only 2 of them who had real swords, and other than that, they pretty much do not have any weapons. They also tried bringing back some things they thought were useful from their hunts, but there's not much they could find in the wasteland. From Wertzi, the others tried to be very careful during training, but during actual combat, they knew they couldn't be very careful. When they proposed the idea of going much further in their next hunt, Luke was worried and asked if they had weapons to protect them. While the others brainstormed how they would obtain weapons to protect themselves, Luke was a little disappointed since all he could build were just facilities. While Bowlet lectured his colleagues, he noticed Luke's worried expression and reassured him that they will be safe as they've been to the forest plenty of times. Bowlet suggested that Luke use the gift for himself more, since he had already given so much. Gerd agreed with Bowlet and advised Luke to be more bold and selfish for once. He then pointed out that as the head of the village, Luke should at least live in a bigger house as huge as the bathhouse he had built. Kalen was very pleased with Gort's suggestion since she was also sleeping in that same house. Girl heard bigger house and immediately became the proposal's biggest supporter. Toro, Perron, and Lando called Gort's attention as steam was still coming off of them. The three then spread false stories of Luke and the accidental things he had noticed living with Milla and Celine. Annoyed at how the three accused Luke of being a pervert, Luke immediately used 50 of his village points and upgraded his home to a medium house. Bro upgraded his property out of pure embarrassment. While Celine and Milla sobbed over the changes made in the house, Luke, on the other hand, was very pleased, finding the process convenient as the upgraded version of his house was exactly what he had envisioned. Milla noticed Luke's bed was much larger and pointed out to him that it was fitting for the village head. She expressed her wish to sleep in the same bed with Luke as she couldn't sleep well on a bed she wasn't used to, which definitely did not help Celine's blood pressure. When Milla decided to sleep with Luke, Celine protested. Despite their protests, Luke decided to give the bigger bed to Celine and Milla while being content with just a single bed. After demonstrating his ability to adjust the size of the bed, Celine and Milla felt defeated and cried out bro really pulled out expandable furniture tech just to dodge the drama. While observing the stone walls, Luke had a good idea to add stairs behind the stone wall to make it easier for them to defend. After adding 8 sets of stairs, Luke had another idea and opened up holes in the wall to create embrasures. When Luke tested it, he peeked out of the hole he had made and realized the wall was thicker than he thought. Luke understood that the only weapon they could use was a spear or something long. He was surprised to see Donga's face on the other side of the wall. Curious about the purpose of the space, Luke explained that they could strike back from the open space if they were ever under attack. When Donga reached for Luke's hand and was reminded of the sandcastles he made as a kid, Luke realized it might be easy to reach them from the outside. Luke knew he had to address the lack of weapons, as he couldn't rely solely on Celine and her ice magic. He understood the sad reality that he wouldn't find the resources he needed in the wasteland. Luke then realized he could use his facility customization skill to alter parts of the wall. Luke manipulated the wood from the hut and made a wooden sword. However, he was surprised when the wooden sword suddenly broke, because bro basically crafted the dollar store version of a weapon. Luke noticed how fragile the wooden sword was and realized he couldn't make a sturdy weapon from just wood. Wondering what material he could use to make a good sword, Luke remembered there was iron in the jail cells. Visiting the jail, Luke was nervous as he was taunted by the thieves inside. Noticing that the iron bars did not budge no matter how the criminals kicked them, Luke walked towards the cell and realized the criminals would escape if he tried to get one of the bars. The criminal was surprised when another iron bar suddenly showed up in front of him. The thieves focused on observing Luke as he customized the size and length of the iron bar. After successfully creating a sword from the iron bar, Luke became more excited about what type of material he could use for the sword's hilt. The criminals were left in awe after witnessing Luke's skills, because at this point our boy was basically discovering blacksmith DLC through trial and error. Barlot and Celine were surprised when Luke told them he had made an iron sword. After explaining how he used his skill to customize materials and make items from existing facilities, Celine was still confused about how Luke was able to make a sword from just his gift. When Celine gave Barlot the sword, the two sparred and tested the sword. Celine complimented Luke's new creation, stating it was perfect, and immediately bragged about it to the others like she personally forged the thing herself. When Nema met with Luke, she reported that the first batch of thieves had been successfully reformed and were ready to go. Luke's eyes glowed as he saw that the loyalty status of the 5 criminals' village loyalty was high. As Luke found himself surrounded by the newly reformed criminals, Nema made it clear to them that their new leader was Luke and that they would do whatever he asked. Seeing how easily Nema controlled the former thieves, Luke was amazed as the criminals now looked like completely different people. Bro really witnessed Grandma run the most terrifying rehab program in fantasy history. Surprised at how obedient the former thieves were, Luke asked Nema what tactics she used to make the thieves become more compliant. Nema initially wanted to instill fear in the criminals' hearts. However, she noticed that as soon as they were placed in the rehabilitation center, they immediately became docile, requesting more criminals with greater audacity like she was asking for harder difficulty settings. She left Luke surrounded by his new obedient villagers. Luke still had doubts about the reformed criminals, but he couldn't ignore the fact that their loyalty was high and that Nema personally vouched for them. Wondering if the former thieves had truly been rehabilitated, Luke glanced at Barlot and instructed the thieves to help Barlot out. Nema continued to rehabilitate the thieves while the hunters kept an eye out for those who had left the facility. Even though they were still suspicious, they could not ignore the changes in their personalities. Seeing how excited Nema was with her work, Luke was pleased that everything had gone well, because somehow the village torture grandma became their most reliable employee. All of a sudden, Luke heard a voice out of nowhere. He was then informed of the identity that kept calling him. Luke remembered that there was a member of the thieves who had the gift of telepathy. The thief introduced himself as Satan, a former member of a well-known merchant family. Unfortunately for Satan, he was kicked out and became a thief just to survive. As Satan confessed the sins he had committed before, he tried begging Luke to set him free as he would atone for his crimes. However, Luke was not easily swayed as he could still tell that Satan was still mutinous, Brucker trying to fake a redemption arc before Season 2 even started. Satan couldn't believe how sharp Luke was, but continued to pretend that he had learned his lesson. Satan focused on himself and tried to find information that would point to Luke and everyone's weak spots. When Milla came into the facility, Satan was appalled after hearing Milla's thoughts. Milla was confused when she was suddenly accused of being a nasty woman. But when Nima told Milla of Satan's gift, she immediately became nervous and asked Luke to have Satan be rehabilitated immediately, because apparently Bro heard thoughts he absolutely was not supposed to hear. As Satan was being dragged by Nima into the rehabilitation center, Milla flinched when Luke suddenly asked her what she was thinking about. Curious as to why Satan looked awfully shocked, Milla lied and told Luke that she was thinking about cleaning the toilets later. Walking across the village, Luke felt something was off and asked Browlette and the others what was happening. Luke became nervous after learning that Xylin and their hunting team had not yet returned. After hearing that the hunting party had not yet arrived, a little girl told Browlette and Luke that it was because of the curse of Almirage. Confused, Luke asked what the little girl meant. The little girl explained that the Almirage is a type of giant aggressive rabbit that could grow to be over 1 meter large with a sharp horn on its head. On a good day, their hunters brought back a couple of Almirage, as it had useful materials aside from being tender food. When the little girl showed them the Almirage balls, she explained that they were much bigger than normal. The hunters came back with an Almirage like they always do. However, the little girl felt scared seeing the Almirage staring at the balls she was holding onto, because that rabbit was looking at them like somebody stole its entire bloodline. When the little girl wanted to check it out more closely, she was surprised that the dead Almirage that the hunters brought suddenly let out an awful screech. When Browlette threw out a couple of theories about what may have happened, the little girl threw the balls at Luke and Browlette as she insisted that the balls were cursed. When Browlette shared that some animals and creatures could emit their pheromones a few miles just to attract mates. Guessing that the hunters helped in butchering the Almirage, Browlette assumed that the scent would also be on the hunting party. Even if the hunting party had gifts, they would still be overpowered by a pack of Almirage. Sensing the danger, Luke was about to instruct Browlette to send out help, but his attention was diverted when someone from the watchtower alerted them to something unknown. When Luke and Browlette ran up towards the walls, they realized that it wasn't just the hunters who were in danger. They might be as well. Curious as to what the mysterious thing was, the little girl wanted to hand out the balls as some sort of offering, which honestly sounded like the worst possible peace treaty idea ever invented. But realizing that he was the only skilled fighter currently available, Luke instructed Browlette to get everyone to safety as he would buy them some time. While others suggested using the thieves for protection, Xylin heard the commotion and asked everyone what was happening. Luke and the others were surprised to see Xylin worrying that harm had befallen them. When they mentioned the creature seen outside the village, Xylin explained they had just hunted a couple of orcs. Orcs are ill-tempered creatures capable of laying waste to a village by themselves. For that reason, orc meat is rare and considered by many to be a luxury food item. So our guy went from preparing for death to suddenly hearing they secured premium DLC dinner ingredients. Surprised that they had even caught 2 orcs, Perron and Lando immediately asked Milla how long they had to wait to taste the orcs. Milla and the others responded that they would prepare it right away. As Milla and the others carved and butchered the dead orcs, Luke could not bear to look at how they prepared the meat. Impressed at how skilled their work was, it felt like being on a battlefield. After the food was finally cooked and prepared, Perron and the others were surprised at how appetizing the orc meat looked. When they finally tasted the orc meat, they couldn't help but roll on the floor as it was so delicious. Bro's villagers discovering Michelin star cuisine in the middle of the wasteland. When Perron and Lando fed Luke the cooked orc meat, he was surprised since it was so savory and chewy. Xylin explained that the reason why the orc meat was delicious was because it was still fresh. Orcs are only found deep in the woods or remote regions. The meat is then cut into manageable pieces and transported on a horse-drawn carriage. The journey takes a few days, and by the time they eat it, all that travel time affects the flavor of the meat. Sadly, Xylin's explanation was ignored as everyone was already busy eating the orc meat because nobody was trying to hear a TED Talk while feasting. Noticing the little girl's disappointed look, Luke asked Browlette what was wrong. The little girl was disappointed that the curse of the balls was not correct. After hearing the little girl, Milla offered her the orcish ball broil. Luke was surprised and ended up spitting out his food. Bro nearly experienced spiritual damage at the dinner table. When Luke asked Milla why she served that food to the little girl, Milla explained that the food is good for stamina and is chock full of nutrients. Browlette shared that he had won before with a bull or a horse, but was surprised at how someone was able to make that type of food using an orc. When the little girl tried tasting it, Browlette and Luke were uncomfortable at how she kept describing the food in a lewd manner. Half a year had passed since Luke created the village. Luke then noticed that the air had gotten a bit cold, to which the villagers responded that they should start preparing themselves for winter. Luke's attention was called by Browlette and the others. They then shared their wish to take a trip back to their homes as they were concerned about their parents. Seeing that they have plenty of rooms, Luke suggested to Browlette that they bring their parents into the village. However, Browlette was not sure if their parents would want to go on a long journey. Lulled by Browlette and Xylin joined in the conversation and offered to guard them during their trip. They suddenly turned quiet when the reformed thieves offered to help on their journey. Even though the reformed thieves offered to sacrifice themselves for everyone's safety, Luke was still hesitant to let them leave the village. Sulin favored having the thieves come along as they may need more muscle, and if they ever betray them, she would beat them mercilessly, which honestly sounded less like reassurance and more like a threat from a raid boss. Luke eventually agreed, though he still had doubts about the thieves. Donga and the others understood Luke's feelings since they themselves still get scared every time they see the reformed thieves. Donga, a few days had passed since the others left for their journey. Luke had an idea, and whenever this man says that, the entire village budget starts sweating immediately. Donga had repositioning the fields and adding some row houses. Luke finally created living space for the reformed thieves. To help everyone feel more at ease, Luke thought they could assist with the fields and defend the village. When the reformed thieves saw their new home, they were very grateful for how considerate Luke was. As Satan promised to handle any danger for the village, he gained a good reputation with his telepathy, Bro accidentally becoming the village Wi-Fi tower for danger alerts. Terror, impressed by Satan's gift, asked him why he became a thief. Luke also remembered that Satan had told him before that he was forced out of a merchant family. The Satan shared that others didn't think his gift was handy, but rather deemed it troublesome as he would be able to hear everyone's thoughts. When the priest gave Satan his gift, he immediately became nervous, worried that his thoughts could be heard. For Satan, hearing everyone's thoughts was hell. He found that the priest, who was supposed to be a beacon of ethics and virtue, was secretly beating his wife every night. There was also a girl who everyone thought was a saint, but was in fact preying on the needy. Satan was surprised after hearing his parents' worries, and that they were planning to get rid of him. He decided to run away when he later met his boss and his gang of thieves, because Bro basically unlocked Premium Depression DLC the moment his gift activated. Dedineth lectured Satan about the wrong things they had done, after which he dragged Satan to do more chores to atone for their sins. Satan willingly accepted the task and was about to head off when he was surprised to hear Milla's thoughts and ended up collapsing. My guy really got hit by psychic damage again. Milla informed Luke of the good news that Burlet and the others had returned from their trip. As the older people met with Luke and their loved ones, some were surprised that Nima, who has a talent for torture, had a husband. Honestly, that reveal probably shocked the village more than the thieves ever did. Orn seeing the older villagers safe and sound, Luke hoped that those who were conscripted were safe as well. Luke then noticed that the other men were wearing clothes that seemed familiar. Sulin explained that the men were thieves who had attacked them, and they later found out that they were leftovers from the gang they caught. The thieves were surprised when a reformed thief suddenly approached them, hinting that they would soon also change, which sounded way more threatening than comforting. At the same time, a few miles away, two men were walking in the wastelands, hoping to find a lord's son in the wilderness. The two men were father and son who had accepted the task of finding the son of a lord as they could no longer survive in their village. As they were walking, the father became enraged as he kept sharing his regrets of not being born into a wealthier family. The son then noticed something in the far distance, which made the father even angrier for thinking that his son was trying to change the topic. After describing to his father the stone walls he was seeing, the son excitedly ran towards the village. Later that night, the people were celebrating the reunion of their families and friends. Luke, who was observing them from his home, was very pleased seeing how happy everyone was. When he finally felt very tired, Luke told Milla and Sulin that he was going to sleep. As Luke was sleeping peacefully, Sulin and Milla suddenly appeared and squeezed their way into Luke's bed. Though the two slept peacefully, Luke, on the other hand, was becoming uncomfortable, trapped in the world's most stressful sleepover. Luke was surprised when he suddenly received a telepathic report from Satan, informing him of two men approaching the village. Luke then met with the two men and they introduced themselves as Mac, the chief of the village named Mao, and his son Manta. When Luke introduced himself, Mac asked if he was the son of Lord Albert. Surprised, Luke asked if Mac knew about him. Mac shared that he had heard of Lord Albert ordering his son to cultivate a vast wasteland, but was surprised after seeing the structures and crops in the village. While when Luke mentioned that he had built everything over half a year, the two doubted it and wondered if Lord Albert had built it for Luke, because there was no way they were believing this teenager casually spawned an entire civilization by himself. When Luke asked for the reason why the two came to his village, Mac then explained that since another big war was coming, they were looking for a place to earn some money during the winter. Their faces immediately glowed with happiness as Luke offered them to stay at his village. Thinking of the upcoming war, Luke guessed that House Albert must be fighting against the House of Shuan, since the two houses make up two of the great powers and the other neighbors were not exactly on good terms. Luke wondered if Raoul would be joining in the fight. When Max showed his gratitude to Luke, Manta whispered to him, pointing out that he was being too honest. Luke wondered what he would be doing if the roles were changed and he received the gift of holy swordsmanship. Luke wondered if he would notice all the suffering around him. Back then, Luke was so eager to live up to expectations, but now he could only think of it as stupid. Mac then decided to tell everyone about Luke's village, since they now have permission to live in the village. Bro basically preparing to spread the wasteland paradise allegations everywhere. A couple of days later, Luke greeted the villagers of Mao and welcomed them to his village. Seeing the crops in the village, Manta assumed that the rumors of Luke having a junk gift were false. Luke made the rumors become facts for Manta, as he indeed did not receive the gift of holy swordsmanship, and was ordered to cultivate a wasteland. After explaining to everyone that he instead received the gift of village building, which helped him a lot in managing the village, everyone was then notified that the hunters were back. The Mao villagers were surprised to see the hunters carrying 5 almirage. Seeing the Mao villagers, Cullen boasted of having more food for the winter, and suggested that they have a feast for them. Luke was curious why Sullen was boasting, but was surprised when they revealed that they had caught a great boar. Everyone from the Mao village was in shock since the hunters had brought back a more dangerous monster, because apparently this village's hunting trips were slowly turning into boss raids. When Luke asked how they were able to take the great boar down, Sullen explained that Noelle and Gort stopped the boar using their shields, which then gave her the opportunity to end the boar's life. Miak had to pinch Manta's face just to check if they were dreaming. As the villagers were dragging the dead great boar, Luke realized that the villagers of Mao may be tired from the trip, and he suggested that they can sit and relax for the time being. When Mac asked if they could take a spot for them to set up their tents, Luke forgot to set up a home for them, and used his gift to create more row houses. Mac and Manta were in total disbelief after seeing the houses showing up out of nowhere. Bro really hit them with instant real estate DLC. Luke reminded them that his gift was village building, which helps him make plenty of useful things. Mac and Manta, who were still in shock, were amazed at how insanely useful Luke's gift was. As Luke received congratulations for surpassing 1,000 villagers and reaching level 6, he felt a bit overwhelmed by how many people were now in the village. Since then, 92 people from Mao have joined their village, but the influx of new people did not initially stop Luke from accepting those in need, because Bro physically cannot stop collecting villagers like Pokemon. Slowly, people stayed in his village just to exploit his good-willed nature. The reformed thieves routinely patrolled the wasteland areas to ensure people could traverse it safely, which Luke guessed was the cause of the sudden increase in people visiting the village. Luke and the others had a meeting regarding the increase in their population, as they theorized that they would soon be a target for war. Bleklen and Milla were enthused about preparing themselves and granting powers to those who had hidden gifts. Luke rounded up all the villagers and told them that some of them may have gifts. After assessing everyone, Luke found that about 100 of the villagers had the potential for gifts. Luke was surprised upon discovering a variety of gifts, and 24 of those who had gifts were related to fighting. Excluding the children and the elderly, it left them with a total of 19 people. As the 2 new villagers celebrated that they may not need to work anymore since there were many people with gifts, Burley gave them a stern and friendly reminder that they would still have to work regardless of whether they had gifts or not, because nobody escapes the farming grind in this village. Luke knew that community-wide support was essential in making the most out of everyone's gifts, since there weren't many kinds of jobs in their village just yet. Luke knew that they couldn't just give everyone the one they recommended. However, Luke was able to help them with similar jobs, fostering a sense of community. Luke's remaining concern was that some villagers had a low status in village loyalty. Those with low loyalty would most likely leave the village. While observing one of the low-loyalty villagers, he was a bit confused since the man was getting along with everyone. But suddenly a group of women rounded up the man, asking who the woman he was talking to was. Everyone was then silenced when another woman showed up carrying a baby and informed them that the man was married. Low village loyalty leads to low village morale and creates all sorts of extra issues for Luke in the village, and our boy accidentally unlocked fantasy relationship drama management. Fortunately, some of those concerns could be resolved by asking them about their problems, which helped Luke nip some issues in the bud. Exhausted from helping each individual in the village, Burla tried encouraging Luke that the village would soon come together. While trying to fix things, Luke did not realize that they had managed to surpass the 1,000 villager mark and ended up gaining new types of facilities. Seeing a familiar facility, Luke recalled that apartments were quite normal in his past life. After reading through the amenities offered by the apartment complex, Luke eventually decided to make one since it had more value than the row house. Luke has not changed the areas enclosed by the stone wall, but with each level, their village area has increased to almost the entire wasteland. While thinking of making new facilities outside the stone walls, Luke noticed that Nema was exhausted as she passed by him. When Luke asked what the problem was, Nema shared that she was having a hard time rehabilitating 2 thieves. One was the boss named Doral, as everything Nema did had no effect on him. Nema could only guess that Doral may have had many life-threatening experiences that gave him more confidence and strength. Nema then shared the real problem of the 2, which was Bar. Seeing the kids that had helped in capturing him, Bar then taunted Nema and told her that he would never change no matter what. Bar's insults only enraged Nema as he received more beatings from her. Luke then noticed a weird sound and wondered if it came from Bar. As Nema kept on beating Bar, she eventually got annoyed. As it turned out, Bar was a masochist and loved the beatings he received from Nema, which somehow made the entire rehabilitation process infinitely more cursed than before. Luke and the others finally realized why Nema was having a hard time changing Bar. He was a masochist who enjoyed pain and humiliation, which somehow made this entire situation 10 times more unhinged than before. Understanding that causing pain to Bar could actually help them, Kalin realized they could use it as an incentive to control him. Knocking and stomping on Bar, Kalin tried to assert dominance by promising a reward if he listened well. However, Selin's tactics failed as Bar would just end up spitting on her face, bro treating rehabilitation like a side quest he was speedrunning for fun. Neymar explained that masochists may seem obedient, but they're by no means submissive. If one is not prepared to accept the proclivities of another, it is best to keep a distance. Luke and the others had no choice but to put the rehabilitation on hold for the time being. Annoyed at what just happened, Kalen's attention was caught by Doral, asking her if she was brought as Iceblade Princess. After questioning Kalen about her presence in the Wastelands, Doral shared that he had no intentions of following someone weaker than him. But Kalen guessed that Doral wished to be released as he would turn over a new leaf. However, Doral made it clear that he only shows respect to those who have bested him, and that if Kalen ever needed his help, he would answer her call. After informing everyone of what Doral had said to her, Sedina expressed the idea of having Doral as an ally since they would gain a strong asset. Sedina clarified to everyone that she does not fully trust Doral yet, but if something were to happen, she thought they could use him as their last resort. Noticing that Bar and Doral's status changed from mutinous to low, Luke thought Sedina might have a point, because somehow her accidental intimidation strategy was actually producing results. Luke and the others noticed that the public bath had been crowded lately. Ireland explained that since the weather had gotten a little colder, people were now craving a warm bath. Luke was happy that everyone enjoyed the bath he made, though he wished that he could make other types of baths. Luke then had an idea to use the facility customization to make the perfect bath for winter. After successfully upgrading his house and adding a bath in the garden, Burlet and the others were surprised and amazed by Luke's new home. Bro casually building a luxury spa arc in the middle of survival mode. As Luke was glad to welcome guests into his home, Milla and Selin, on the other hand, were now saddened as many people would spend more time with Luke. As Parn shared his opinion about the open bath, Luke tried explaining the benefits of having an open bath outside. Annoyed by their side comments, Luke ended up pushing them into his bath so that they could experience it for themselves. As Piron and the others found the bath relaxing, they asked if Luke was not going to take a bath. Luke smiled as he wanted everyone to enjoy the bath first. Luke smiled as he finally got the chance to have some time for himself without Milla or Selin around to bug him. As he washed himself and relaxed at the open bath, Luke could still faintly hear people's voices. Even though it was already late, realizing that his lonely days may be over, Luke was suddenly surprised by Milla as she sneaked behind him and offered to wash his back, because this man truly cannot go 5 peaceful minutes without somebody invading his personal space. Half a year had passed since Luke was ordered to develop the barren land. Milla and Luke had overcome many tribulations and built a village overflowing with love, a real picture-perfect fairy tale. Unfortunately for Milla, her fairy tale was immediately ruined as soon as they built the village with an influx of meddlers and villagers coming to live with them, because apparently privacy died the second Luke became successful. As the village grew, so did Milla and Luke's time together. Milla felt that something must be done as she no longer knew her purpose if she left Luke alone to fill the lonely void in his heart. Milla was willing to offer her touch. Salivating behind Luke, Milla told herself that she was not doing it for her own satisfaction, but for Luke's sake, which was the biggest cope she had ever told herself. Selin immediately karate chopped Milla's arm as she noticed that Milla was sneaking up behind Luke. As the two grabbed each other's faces and arms, they ended up arguing and making a scene in the bath. Luke wanted to peacefully stop the two, but they ignored him. Having had enough of Milla and Selin, Luke became mad and warned them that there would be no fooling around in the bath. Shocked by Luke's anger, the two immediately knelt, feeling remorse like they just got scolded by a raid leader. However, in the northern region of the Albert Domain, Governor Dantho received a report that people from another village had completely vanished. Governor Dantho was surprised that villagers had vanished again. He expected that a few would leave because of the new tax increase, but did not expect a whole village. The governor was curious if the villagers knew the hardships that awaited them outside of their region. The governor was then informed that the men who investigated the missing villagers heard a bizarre rumor. Governor Dantho became curious and asked what rumor it was. The knight mentioned that there was talk of a new village in the northern reaches that promises people safety, comfort, and even plenty of food to eat. Hearing the rumor, Governor Dantho thought of it as an obvious trap, as he remembered the area not being in conditions to be livable. Concerned that many people would attempt to journey to the said village, Governor Dantho gave an order to investigate the area, and if needed, he would personally go along with the investigation. Surprised that the governor himself would come along, Governor Dantho explained that it was a point of concern for him since the rumored area was the place where Lord Albert ordered his son, Master Luke, to develop. While having some snacks, Luke received a telepathic report that a suspicious group was observing them. Wondering if it were more immigrants, Satan mentioned that the group seemed more like scouts, since they're awfully calm. Kalin noticed Luke's worried look, which prompted her to ask what was wrong. Luke announced that a suspicious group was spying on the village, which alarmed the villagers as they wondered if the group spying on them were foes. Knowing how strong the villagers had become, Luke asked them not to let the spies start a fight with them so easily. Kalin agreed with Luke as she gained strength from Luke's words because our boy accidentally became everybody's emotional support mayor. A few days later, Governor Dantho, along with his guard, was in total shock after seeing stone walls out in the wasteland. The governor thought that it would be just a small village, but after seeing it personally, he pretty much could call the village a city. When one of the reformed thieves asked Governor Dantho what they were doing in their village, Governor Dantho introduced himself as the governor of Nori in the northern region and wished to speak with their village head. After opening the gates, Governor Dantho immediately assumed that it was some sort of trap. The governor's knight reassured him that he would be safe as his elite force was by his side. After entering the village, Governor Dantho was surprised to see vast crops behind the walls. The governor was even more surprised after seeing wheat, as he had never seen one grow at that time of year. Noticing the two-tiered stone walls, the governor knew that the village would need a substantial amount of capital and labor to build everything. The governor also noticed how healthy the villagers were, which finally made him accept that the village indeed was a paradise. When Governor Dantho was greeted by Luke as he introduced himself as the head of the village, he immediately recognized Luke, the son of Lord Albert, even though he had only met him once long ago. As Governor Dantho introduced himself, his voice was overshadowed by his knight as he was surprised to see a great boar behind Luke, because apparently even the local wildlife in this village looked like mini-bosses. Daryl, the elite force of Governor Dantho, wondered if the bones of the great boar were just picked up somewhere. However, their curiosity was immediately answered as a villager said out loud that the great boar they hunted was delicious. Boron and the others couldn't help but reminisce about how tasty the great boar was, while Burley thought that the bones were doing more harm than good to Luke's overall presence, because casually decorating your village with monster remains is apparently not peak diplomacy. As Luke remembered, there were more than 20 governors in the Albert domain. Land taken through war was usually put under the governance of those most loyal to the Alberts. However, if the existing governor bends the knee and pledges their loyalty to the domain, they are in some cases allowed to continue serving. When Governor Dantho apologized for greeting Luke quite late, Luke guessed that Governor Dantho didn't even know that Luke had been banished. Since Governor Dantho's region was close by, Luke suspected that they would be interacting with the governor a lot in the foreseeable future. Luke wanted to make sure they stay on friendly terms, so he prepared a welcoming feast in honor of the people of Nori. Walking through the village, Governor Dantho became curious about the structures, to which Luke explained the housing complex where their villagers live. The governor noticed that even though they have a large population, no trace of human waste is seen. Luke mentioned that they do their best to keep things clean and hygienic. When the governor asked about another unique structure, Luke explained that it was the public bath. Luke shared that each home had its own bath, but the villagers seemed to enjoy taking a dip in their spacious public bath. Governor Dantho's curiosity had reached its limits and asked Luke how he was able to make so much progress on the wastelands in such a short period. Luke shared with the governor that he had built everything with his village gift. After explaining to the governor Luke's gift and what had happened, Governor Dantho realized why Luke was sent out to the wastelands. Luke revealed to the governor that he only became aware of his ability after he was sent to the wastelands. Even Lord Albert doesn't know about Luke's gift's true powers. Luke knew that if the governor would tell his father about the village, it would cause an uproar because Raoul would absolutely start tweaking the second he heard Luke accidentally built a fantasy megacity. Understanding the meaning behind Luke's words, Governor Dantho accepted his explanation. Governor Dantho and his elite force were then served with plenty of vegetables and meat. Some were even surprised that the meat they were eating came from an orc. Milla then introduced Perwin and the others for their entertainment as they would portray their swordsmanship. Luke and the governor were surprised as Perwin and Barlot were really fighting each other seriously. Luke didn't want to bring up anything related to the church, but that option was no longer possible, since the villagers had displayed their magical gifts. After being shocked at what they witnessed, Luke guided the governor to the place where he could temporarily stay. When Governor Dantho asked for his knight's opinion of the village, the knight found everything an understatement and apologized to the governor. Seeing the governor's confused look, the knight explained that he had promised they would protect him. However, after witnessing the talents the villagers had, the knight doubted that the elite forces could take everyone on. The governor did not expect that the village would have so many gift wielders. Seeing the church outside, Governor Dantho wondered where Luke found the priest. Knowing what the church claims the gifts were, Governor Dantho knew that if the church learned about the village, they would likely take action. Though the knight asked the governor how he would explain the village to the lord of the domain, the knight was surprised when the governor responded that he just wouldn't. The governor knew that the moment he reported it to the lord, Raoul would hear the situation first. Seeing the village as a threat to his position, Governor Dantho also knew that Raoul would not hesitate to destroy the village. The knight reminded the governor that if someone found out he was keeping the secret, he would most likely lose his life. Governor Dantho has always done what he was told, turning a blind eye to the suffering of his people and enforcing strict taxes while threatening them with violence. As Governor Dantho shared how he would put his faith in the brighter future displayed in the village, none of them knew that Satan was listening to their conversation and telepathically reported it to Luke. Selen felt relieved after hearing the report, as she was fully ready to crash out if the conversation suddenly went bad. As morning arrived, Luke greeted Governor Dantho and asked if he had slept well. Governor Dantho responded that he had slept well. He then mentioned that he forgot to thank Luke for accepting migrants from Nori as he was so stunned yesterday. Governor Dantho was deeply ashamed since his citizens had suffered due to his inaction. The governor asked Luke if he could sell them some food since Nori had been going through a great famine and the citizens no longer had the resources or food. Hearing Governor Dantho's problem, Luke gladly accepted his request. because bro physically cannot stop accepting side quests from starving nations. Unfortunately, the governor also mentioned that they were currently short on money, and were hoping that Luke would accept supplies as payment. Luke did not mind and rather liked the idea since their village was still new and there were still many things they lacked. Governor Dantho was very grateful towards Luke. As a token of appreciation, the governor planned to dispatch their trustworthy merchant guild. The guild had multiple branches across Nori, and dealing directly with them would make trade smoother than going through the public office. As Governor Dantho and his elite force left the village, Luke thought that he should create a road that carriages could pass. Luke's action surprised the people of Nori as a paved road suddenly appeared beneath their feet. Bro really out here dropping infrastructure updates like patch notes. A few days later, news of the hunting party returned. However, Luke was surprised when he did not see Kellen and the others. Barlot explained that the others were still in the forest and that they only returned to give Luke an update. Barlot reported that they happened to find some injured elves. The others are escorting them back to their village before making their way home. Luke and the others were surprised by just the word elves being uttered. Tevin fantasized about elven women as he heard some rumors that they are stunning. Hearing Tever, Burlet lectured him that the elves have been abused for their beauty, which was the reason they avoid humans, instantly shutting down Bro's fantasy simulator. Luke then asked Burlet to give him full detail of what had happened. Barlot shared that they were just hunting as usual, when they suddenly heard yelling coming from inside the forest. As they made their way towards the noise cautiously, Celine and the others found elves fighting for their lives against mad grizzlies. Barlot and the others then joined the elves and managed to take the mad grizzlies down. Since many of the elves were severely injured, the hunting party decided to escort them back to their village. Barlot informed Luke that Kellen and the others are currently at the elven village and that they will most likely return the morning after. Glad that everyone was safe, Luke and the others wondered what the elven village looked like. When Kellen and the others had returned, elves were with them. As the elves greeted Luke, everyone was mesmerized at their beauty, which they then received a warning from Kellen because she could already tell the villagers were about to start acting goofy. The representative of the elves introduced herself as Philianix Mellabel Leonis Kellenarius, so that it would be easy for others. She suggested calling her Philia. Philia visited the village in place of their chief to express their gratitude. Luke was somewhat pleased that Kellenaria was at least able to break the ice. Philia still could not believe that a village was constructed in the wastelands, as she had thought that nothing would ever grow on barren lands. When Luke offered to show Philia around the village, Teor suggested that they show the bath first. Teor's request drew some negative reaction from the others at first, but after smelling the strong odor of one of the elves, they were now having second thoughts. Teoros pushed the bath idea, which everyone eventually agreed to. As Philia removed her weapons, some elves showed concern as they would be open to an attack. Philia reassured the other elves that everyone in the village would not harm them. If they did, then they would not be breathing at the moment, which was honestly the calmest threat imaginable. While Luke asked Celine to guide the elves to their designated baths, Philia was so excited that she ended up taking her clothes off in front of Luke and immediately headed towards the men's bath, because apparently elf culture skipped the entire concept of personal boundaries. When Philia opened the door and saw Donga, there was silence for a couple of seconds before Donga realized that he was staring at a woman. After hearing Donga's scream, a couple of men ran towards the room and were surprised to see an elf. Salian and the others had to take control of the situation since the bathhouse was becoming rowdy. Nema ended up hearing the commotion and menacingly asked if she should give everyone a good spanking, which somehow made the room even quieter. As the commotion died down, they instead used Luke's open bath. As Philia finally experienced the lukewarm water of the hot spring, she was very much intrigued since she no longer had to worry about the cold or about monsters. Philia and the others enjoyed the bath so much that they soaked for almost an hour, but there is still a serious need to work on the elves' nudity problem before the entire village collectively crashes out. Philia, still warm from overstaying in the bath, expressed her gratitude once again for the kind treatment they received after receiving help. Philia shared that they had underestimated the power of a mad grizzly, and were lucky that Celine and the others came to save them. As a token of gratitude, Philia gave Luke a gift. When Milla and Celine saw the gift, they immediately recognized it as a box full of potions. Luke and the others had mixed reactions upon receiving the gift, complimenting the rare medicine like they just unlocked legendary loot from an RPG chest. Philia boasted about their medicine passed down through generations, but mentioned that it couldn't bring back the lives lost. As Luke and Philia shook hands, a feast was held for the elves. Philia did not expect that they would also get to enjoy a meal. She then noticed her comrades' happy faces as they interacted with other people. Relieved to see the other elves lowering their guard, Philia asked Luke if she could use the comfort room. When Philia saw the toilet bowl for the first time, she was confused, feeling like she could just get inside it, because fantasy elves were absolutely not prepared for modern bathroom technology. Since Philia did not know how to use the toilet, she tried sitting on it, which resulted in her slipping. When everyone heard Philia's voice, they immediately ran to her aid. Before Philia could explain what had happened, the other elves already had their swords drawn for battle. Brad nearly started an international incident because of a toilet seat. After Philia explained what had happened, Luke explained to her that it was the bidet that spewed water at her. After learning the purpose of the bidet, Philia was intrigued and asked Luke how they were able to make one as she wished to bring one to her village. Luke could not give a clear explanation since he also did not know the bidet appeared when he created the toilet with his gift. After hearing Luke's explanation, Philia was a little disappointed that she could not take the invention to her village. For time went by, the elves finally decided to return to their village. Luke was about to send the elves off when he suddenly noticed that Philia was not with them. When the elves mentioned that Philia was going to use the toilet, Luke immediately wondered if Philia ate something bad since she had been in the toilet for some time. As Luke dashed towards the toilet to check on Philia, he ended up becoming confused as he saw Philia playing with the bidet. Girl really discovered advanced civilization and got addicted instantly. As Philia and the other elves finally left the village, Governor Dantho's tradesmen unexpectedly arrived at the village to trade for crops, clothes, and household goods. What Luke liked most in the trade was the livestock. The villagers were surprised that the tradesmen willingly traded their livestock for the village crops. Luke then created a livestock shed for the animals. Luke also assigned Newell to take care of the livestock along with others, since her recommended job was that of a breeder. As Luke and Tyor wished to drink milk and eat eggs, a cow immediately showed a displeased look. Newell then explained that one of the cows had recently suffered a heartbreak and did not like Luke and Tyor's comments. Apparently, even the livestock in this village had emotional lore now. Newell found herself in a dire situation as she was pursued by an orc in the forest. Since the traders arrived and brought resources, the village experienced prosperity. The villagers were thrilled to use fresh eggs for making pancakes and to acquire new clothing. Luke was pleased with the new supplies they had received, as until now they had to repurpose bed sheets and curtains for making clothes. Bro's village finally escaping the survival game starter pack phase. While Milla and Celine were enthusiastic about the village's future, Luke received a telepathic report that an elf was approaching the village. When the elf finally entered the village, she immediately sought help. Celine asked her to calm down and explain what had happened, and the elf revealed that orcs had attacked their village. The elf explained that orcs became extremely aggressive when searching for food, and though the elves tried to fight back, they were outnumbered. The elves were instructed to abandon the village while others bought time for their escape. After receiving the instructions, the elf ran towards Luke's village as fast as she could. Luke then instructed Satan to inform all the elves that they could take refuge in his village, and to update the villagers about the situation. Surprised by Luke's prompt response, the elf expressed her gratitude. After Luke's level of goodwill increased, the size of his territory also expanded. Luke planned to use his abilities to save the elves, but he was concerned about not knowing Philia and the others' whereabouts. Luke only hoped they were within the territory, because our boy was basically trying to run disaster relief operations and tower defense at the same time. As an orc was about to grab Philia, it was suddenly knocked away by a stone wall. Philia then heard Luke's voice and was told that they would be fighting with them. While Luke and the others guided the elves back to the village, Luke asked Philia to seek refuge as well. Apologizing for needing more help from Luke, Philia, Celine, and the others busied themselves preparing for the orcs. Luke and Celine's attention shifted to the watchtower as the villager posted there was surprised to see at least 30 orcs. With no other options, Celine and the others did everything they could to protect the village. Luke then instructed Philia to lead the orcs back to the village. Philia agreed but wondered if Luke and the others would be safe. As the walls created a path for Philia, it also became narrower. Seeing Luke at the end of the walls, Philia thought that Luke's plan was to fight the orcs one at a time. However, the moment Philia passed the walls using his customization ability, Luke squashed the orcs between the two walls. Bro literally turned the village into a giant monster compactor. While the villagers were excited after successfully defeating the orcs, Philia was still in shock about what had happened. Amazed by Luke's abilities, Philia could only laugh. However, danger still loomed over the forest, because in this story peace lasts about 3 business minutes before another disaster pulls up. Luke had finally defeated the remaining orcs and informed Philia that they were now safe. While tending to the wounds of those who were injured, Luke asked Philia if the orcs had always been aggressive around that specific season every year. Philia shared that they aren't hunted by orcs as they don't suit their tastes, but due to increases in their population, orcs have become less selective, so basically the monsters were running out of menu options. After learning new information from Philia, Luke planned to take extra precautions when going hunting for the time being. Philia told Luke that the village might be in danger since there were already so many gathered outside the village. Philia encouraged Philia that even though it was important to be wary of the situation, they also do not need to be so gloomy. Hearing Celine boast about her strength, Philia regained her courage, assuming that even if they get attacked by the Orc King, they would be just fine. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed throughout the wasteland. Curious about what creature may have produced that sound, Luke and the others were surprised when they saw a huge orc charging towards the village. While Celine and Philia were instantly regretting what they had said about the Orc King, Luke immediately started planning on stopping it. However, the Orc King was so fast that when Luke tried to build a wall, it was easily destroyed. Luke was now wondering what he should do next, since he used up most of his points from defeating the orcs earlier. As Luke had used up his remaining points, he could only close his eyes and wait for his impending end. Bro really got hit with the insufficient resources warning at the worst possible moment. Luke then heard a loud sound and was surprised to see Gort and Noel taking on the Orc King. Luke couldn't believe that Gort and Noel, who have gifts, were struggling against the Orc King. As the village was on the verge of being destroyed by the Orc King, Luke asked Satan for a favor. The combined forces of the elves and the villagers were still not enough to even damage the Orc King. Even with Klean's attacks, the Orc King still did not take serious damage due to its tough muscles. Perron and Lando tried sneaking an attack, but were just swatted away by the Orc King like they were background NPCs. Banlot had to step in just to save Lando. However, because of the Orc King's strength, Banlot could only evade the attacks. When Perron and Lando tried backing up Barlot, the two ended up being thrown off by the Orc King. As the villagers were gradually losing morale, a familiar voice asked them if they had gotten weak. Everyone was surprised, including Sleen, as Doral came to save them from the Orc King. Bro finally entering the battlefield like the delayed boss character reveal. Sleen was surprised by Doral's sudden appearance and asked what he was doing outside of jail. Doral explained that Luke had used Satan's ability and called him out. He then reminded Sleen that if they ever needed help, he would lend them a hand. Seeing Sleen's confused look, Luke explained that they no longer had any options, and he decided to bet on Doral, because at that point, Bro was throwing every available unit into the boss fight. Commending Luke's decision, Doral didn't expect that he would ever get a chance to fight an Orc King. When Doral dashed towards the Orc King, he was almost swatted away as the Orc King tried to intimidate him. Sleen and the others were worried that Doral had taken the Orc King's attack head-on as the area was covered with thick dust. Perron and Lando were shockingly disappointed when they could no longer see Doral, acting like their favorite wrestler just got deleted from the match. Masked within the thick dust, Doral launched a surprise attack and successfully landed a headbutt on the Orc King. Everyone was surprised as it was the first time they saw the Orc King stumble. Philia, foreseeing the opportunity, Sleen instructed everyone to immediately attack the Orc King while it was still regaining its senses. Though the others still couldn't believe that they were being saved by Doral, they were somewhat grateful that he had created an opportunity for them to attack. Everyone then took turns trapping the Orc King and damaging it with spears and swords. When Barlot landed another attack, Sleen saw an opening and used her ice magic to slow down the Orc King's movement. When the Orc King was finally getting tired, Luke coincidentally received his daily additional points, while basically surviving off emergency recharge mechanics. But after asking everyone to step away from the Orc King, Luke immediately used his points and created a cage using the stone walls, trapping the Orc King inside. Lando celebrated too early as he was surprised that the Orc King could still create powerful attacks inside the stone cage. Luke knew that trapping the Orc King wouldn't be enough, so using the facility upgrade to increase the strength of the walls, Luke planned to build a new facility on top of the stone cage and then remove the ceiling. When Luke executed his plan perfectly, he then called the move Facility Crush, which honestly sounded like a finishing move straight out of a low-budget wrestling game. Noticing that the orc had become quiet, Sleen confirmed the Orc King's death after double-checking its body. The villagers celebrated as Luke and the others successfully defended the village against a strong monster. As Doral wondered if they had completely defeated the Orc King, Luke called Doral's attention and expressed his gratitude. However, Luke still considered what would happen to Doral moving forward. An older elf approached Luke and asked if he was the chief of the village, and our boy immediately realized another conversation arc was about to start before he could even process the victory. The old elf then introduced himself as the chief of the elven village, Leoninus Male Lebel Rundelinus Elibula. When Luke finally met the chief of the elven village, his first impression was that the chief's name was insanely long, bro, sounding less like a person and more like an ancient spell. Luke was caught off guard when the elves along with their chief knelt and apologized for causing any inconvenience to him. Leonis and his fellow elves had no choice but to seek assistance from Luke's village, committing a grave error that endangered everyone in Luke's village. Luke didn't know how to respond to Leonis's words, other than reassuring him not to worry. As Luke knew, the elves would have helped. King and the other orcs targeted the village. As Luke glanced at the other villagers, he offered the elves barbecue, knowing they must have been hungry and tired after the orc attack. While others celebrated another upcoming feast, Leoninus, on the other hand, remained confused. Seeing her father's puzzled look, Philia reminded him that Luke was just a generous person. Philia reassured her father that no one in the village harbored any thoughts of accusing them. Realizing that Philia's words were true, Leoninus then announced to all elves that they were at peace with Luke's village and would accept their kindness, deepening their relationship. When Leon Polkasane wanted to help cook the meals, Milla was about to respond but was cut off when they immediately noticed their strong smell. They then suggested for Leon Plu and the other elves to check out the bath, because apparently every elf arc in this village eventually becomes a bathhouse episode. As Leon Plu and the other elves immersed themselves in the warm bath, they never imagined they would have the chance to enjoy a bath after defeating the Orc King. While the other elves relaxed, Leonantu wondered if it was truly appropriate to receive benevolent hospitality after everything they did. After finishing their baths, Leonantes and the others were then fed with delicious meat. The night ended with everyone celebrating and enjoying the feast, while Doral was put back in jail once again. Bors really got temporary raid boss privileges before being sent straight back to prison. After the feast, Leonidas complimented Luke's village, as it was exactly as great as the rumors he had heard. After extending his gratitude towards Luke, Leonidas was then informed by one of the elves that the state of their village was severely devastated. When Luke heard Leonidas's plan to have the other elves start rebuilding before winter comes, Luke offered Leonidas and the other elves refuge in the village until their village was fully rebuilt. Surprised by Luke's offer, Leonidas was now extremely ashamed of accepting more help from Luke. However, after hearing Luke's explanation, Leonidas accepted Luke's gracious offer. Leonidas kept to himself how ashamed he was of putting more burden on Luke, but they were yet again left with no choice, especially after Leonidas heard of a miraculous treasure in the village. When Philia announced that they would be returning to their village to repair it, Milla and Selene were a bit disappointed and wondered if Philia and the others could stay a little longer. Philia was grateful for the offer. However, she insisted that they now head out since they still had to deal with beasts on the way to their village. Luke thought of an idea and suggested to Philia and the others if he should build an underground tunnel for them to have a safe journey. Philia was surprised, wondering if Luke could really do that. The other elves somewhat doubted Luke since the distance between the village and the elven village was quite far. Luke immediately proved them wrong by making an underground tunnel that led to the elven village. Philia was very impressed since the village was already in front of them. Since Luke had limited control of the area, he was only able to reach the outskirts of the village. But if Luke wanted to, he could have connected directly to the elven village, bro casually unlocking fantasy subway systems now. Luke had forgotten about the skill to seize the location since he thought he wouldn't be using it. However, knowing that the skill may be able to help the elves, Luke thought that it might be fine to use it. After suggesting to Philia that he would connect the underground tunnel to the village, Philia and the other elves were very delighted to hear such good news. After observing the state of their village, Philia could tell that they wouldn't be able to prevent the beasts from coming into their village. When Luke wanted to offer assistance again, Philia stopped him as she wished for them to rebuild the village with their own hands. Luke understood Philia's wishes. Luke had grown so accustomed to his gift's convenience that he had failed to consider that others might prefer different methods. While thinking if his own villagers feel the same way, Philia and the other elves, on the other hand, were relieved that Luke had finally stopped because they secretly wanted an excuse to stay in his village longer. At the same time in the village, Milla gathered the people who had received gifts. Milla then announced that Luke was the chosen one sent by the gods to save the world. As they had yet to see Luke's full potential, Milla promised them that they would soon see it. The people that were gathered were slowly being manipulated by Milla. Now, with a completely unhinged look, Milla asked for everyone to devote their bodies to work for Luke, and the village would flourish. Everyone in the village shouted Luke's name repeatedly as they cheered for him, and honestly, the whole thing was starting to feel less like a village meeting, and more like the beginning of a fantasy cult arc. At Marquis Albert's territory, a group of people found themselves confined inside a cage. Raoul's retainer asked him if he was ready. After Raoul responded, he stepped outside only to be ridiculed by the people inside the cage for his youth. These individuals were criminals, wondering if Raoul was the one they would be fighting. The guards informed them that they could use any means to win. Some of the criminals, unfamiliar with Raoul, wondered what he had done to end up fighting them. As the fight began, it turned silent immediately as everyone saw how Raoul single-handedly killed every criminal attempting to attack him. Raoul really walked in and activated cutscene mode. Philia, one particularly terrified criminal, tried to run away, but Raoul was so fast that he immediately killed him with one slash. While the people were impressed by Raoul's swordsmanship, Lord Albert complimented Raoul and announced that Raoul would accompany him in the next battle. Feeling honored, Raoul promised to bring great results without fail. As the people cheered for Raoul, a messenger arrived and reported to Raoul that the governor had informed him that there were no villages in the barren lands after scouting it. Raoul laughed, knowing that there was no way a village could be established on the wasteland where Luke was stationed. Raoul was curious about why he was bothered by Luke, speculating that they would no longer see each other again. The only thing Raoul was disappointed with was that he was unable to witness Luke's supposed death. The messenger also reported that the house of Count Badrada has not been able to locate Selene yet. Annoyed, Raoul gave a warning that the Count better not hide Selene. Raoul then outlined the events after winter, anticipating his first real taste of action. He guessed that it would be a huge battle, unlike anything before. If House Albert wins the war, Lord Albert would acquire even greater territory. After that, Raoul would take over the current Albert territory. The vast land under Lord Albert's territory would then soon be Raoul's. Raoul already mentally spending land he doesn't even own yet. Meanwhile, at the village, Luke felt cold as the snow had piled up outside and the temperature had gotten even colder. After checking his abilities, Luke had finally found the defrosting feature, which he found very useful in winter. Luke was now pleased as the road was snow-free, no longer causing problems for the traders. Winter in the wasteland is very cold. The village was located farther north than Albert's northern territory, receiving heavy snowfall due to its proximity to the mountain range. Traders were grateful for Luke defrosting the road as getting to the wasteland was tough during the winter season. Since the village started trading, merchants had picked up quite a bit, leading to more people settling in the village. However, with every welcome, a farewell wasn't far behind. For Luke, the rebuilding of the elven village was progressing smoothly. But for the elves who preferred to enjoy and stay at the village, they were somewhat sad even though their village was being restored faster than expected. Luke then remembered that Philia was still a villager, saddened by her soon departure. Luke removed Philia's status as a villager, and honestly bro looked more emotional over paperwork than some people do over breakups. Meanwhile, at the bathhouse, two old men were relaxing and making pleasant conversation when an elf suddenly joined them. Surprised, the two old men immediately stood up and covered themselves, assuming a lady had entered the men's bath. However, they later realized that the elf was a man, instantly deleting the old dude's entire train of thought. The elf then squeezed himself between the two old men and shared what had happened to his village and how they ended up in Luke's village. When after expressing how great Luke's village was, the two old men then thought of how mystical and majestic the elven village might be, as they had heard that elves take great care of the forests and natural springs. They were somewhat disappointed after hearing the elf preferred living in Luke's village rather than in the forest. The elf then shared that the village was being rebuilt by the elves who chose to return. The elf then vowed that he would definitely live in Luke's village, as he told the two old men that they would soon celebrate once he becomes a villager. The two old men were a bit taken aback by what they had learned about the elves, but the one thing they all could agree on was that the village was exactly as the rumors said, because Luke accidentally built the fantasy version of a 5-star resort in the middle of nowhere. The elves have lived quietly in the forest, avoiding mingling with other species. They portray themselves as a noble race that treasures nature. However, the real reason is that the elves have many natural enemies, forcing them to hide for survival. After discovering Luke's village and realizing it is a safer place, the elf no longer plans on returning to his village, having found a more convenient way of living. Unfortunately, the elf knows that if he insists on staying, the chief will not permit it. He now plans to get the villagers on his side and have them plead for him to stay, bro literally plotting a social manipulation arc just to avoid moving out. The elf feels lucky as he plans to use his charm and attractiveness to win over the villagers. As the elf displays himself in front of everyone, he receives plenty of compliments from the villagers. Thinking his display is enough, he is so confident that he believes he has established himself in the village. Unfortunately for him, due to his nude display in the streets, Nima immediately arrests the elf for public indecency and puts him in jail. Leonis, upon hearing what happened, immediately apologizes to Luke, assuming it may have been a difference in culture. Luke only asks the elf not to do it again, because apparently the elves still hadn't unlocked the concept of please wear clothes outside. Ashamed of the elf's behavior, Leonis asks him why he did it. The elf responds that he only wishes to live in the village. Hearing their conversation, Luke tells them that it won't be a bother for them to stay since the village is made up of immigrants. After being told by Luke that they have to think carefully about staying in the village since it is not an easy decision, Leonis gathers all the elves and tells everyone that those who wish to stay in the village may choose to do so. To ascertain the number of those who choose to stay, Leonis asks them to stay behind Luke, while those who wish to return to the forest may follow him. Leonis is in deep shock when no one steps forward to follow him. After hearing the other elves' opinions, Leonis cannot believe that everyone would leave their roots, as he expected at least one or two to stay in the village. While the elves are extolling the benefits of living in the village, Milla is slowly whispering in their ears that Luke is cute as well, to which the elves eventually agree. Milla out here running propaganda campaigns like a full-time recruiter. When Philia encourages her father that the village would be safe since he would be there to protect it, Leon is surprised that Philia would also stay in the village, has no choice but to express what he truly feels, and that is to stay in the village as well. Luke then welcomes 238 people led by Leonis. As spring comes, the rebuilding of the elven village finally comes to an end. After some time, Luke is busy helping the others when he suddenly receives a message from Satan that a group is coming from the east. Luke becomes confused as there are only mountain ranges in the east. Based on their conversations, Satan guesses that the group is not normal humans, but possibly dwarves. The dwarves are skilled with their hands and excel in forging and craftsmanship. When the group and Luke finally meet, one of the dwarves first introduces himself as Dolan. After Luke introduces himself as the chief of the village, he then notices that the other dwarves are now talking about him. When Luke asks the purpose of their visit, Dolan shares that they've been living in the mountain caves ever since their ancestors were driven off to the frontier. But then, a monster suddenly appeared in the cave. The dwarves fortunately escaped, but they don't have anyone to turn to. As they wandered around aimlessly, they happened to see Luke's village from the mountains, and were hoping to get some food. Luke guesses that the dwarves may have experience interacting with humans, but he still wonders if they were persecuted in the same way as the elves. Philia suddenly pops out of nowhere and tells Luke that the dwarves deserve what happened to them. As Philia and the dwarves see each other, Philia reveals to Luke that both of their races do not get along very well. Philia shares how the dwarves wanted to rule the world, but due to divine punishment, the nation that the dwarves had built collapsed. After the two reveal that they have no knowledge of what the divine punishment was, Luke offers the dwarves to stay in the village after personally assessing them. Though Philia is annoyed at first after seeing Luke's kindness, Philia keeps quiet and trusts Luke. The dwarves who still have doubts wonder if Luke wants their bodies. Luke knows that it is hard to trust an offer out of the blue, to which he explains how the village has developed from a variety of people and welcomes those who wish to live in their village no matter what race they are. Luke then guides the dwarves through some of their facilities while waiting for the food. As the dwarves notice a group of people gathering in one place, they wonder if it is the forge. Luke explains to the dwarves that it is not a forge but rather a public bathhouse. After explaining what the bathhouse is, the dwarves feel scared and nervous as they assume that everyone must be perverts for taking a bath with so many people around. Bro's village culture continuing to traumatize every new species that walks in. Everyone must be perverts for taking a bath with so many people around. After surveying their surroundings, the dwarves decided to stay and live in the village. Luke was pleased but surprised when the dwarves expressed their wish to stay in the underground passage. The dwarves explained that they had been living in caves their whole lives, and that they also didn't like the sun. Bro recruited an entire race of underground gamers. Understanding the dwarves' preferences, Luke used his abilities and customized the underground passage to be more suitable and livable for them. After Luke shared what he added and changed in the underground passage, the dwarves were in total shock after witnessing the rooms being built in an instant. The dwarves were then impressed by Luke's gift after learning more from Milla. Titfihar to ease Philia's mind since she found it unpleasant that the dwarves were living in the tunnel connected to the elven village. As the feast started, the dwarves were surprised at the quality of the alcohol in the village. They were further surprised when two of Luke's villagers shared that there were many options to choose from. After announcing that the entertainment would begin, a villager noticed that a dwarf was silent. Suddenly, the dwarf let out a roar and all the dwarves became more lively after drinking alcohol, because apparently dwarves transform into party raid bosses the second booze enters the system. Luke and Philia were in total shock after witnessing the dwarves becoming so drunk. Morning came and Dolan was surprised to find himself naked. Dolan became mad as Philia accused them of over-drinking and causing a scene. As Dolan sought Luke's support, they slowly remembered what had happened. When Dolan was about to confirm it with Luke, they were surprised when Luke asked them to only drink underground moving forward. The dwarves were now embarrassed for realizing that they were the culprits of the chaos that ensued the night before. Luke still couldn't believe that the ashamed dwarves were just dancing around with faces painted on their stomachs last night. Bro accidentally hosted the weirdest frat party in fantasy history. After checking everyone's loyalty status, Luke felt glad since no one was particularly unhappy living in the village. With the increase in villagers from different races, Luke noticed that while dwarves and other refugees had latent gifts, the elves already possessed theirs. After being asked by Luke about the gifts, Philia revealed that it was thanks to their elven shamans. Philia explained that shamans can bless others with their gift of prayer, granting them a gift. Philia shared that only a few had the gift, as most in the village possessed archery, or albus magic. Albus magic is related to light and life, mainly focusing on illumination, purification, and healing magic. When Dolan overheard Philia's comment, he immediately ran towards her and shared that they were craftsmen by nature and had spent decades honing their skills to master it themselves. When Lucas decided not to give any gift unnecessarily, Dolan immediately changed his mind and wished to have one. Bro folded instantly the second magical perks were mentioned. As the dwarves gathered in the church and received gifts, Luke noticed one of the dwarves had a low loyalty status. Seeing that the dwarf named Donna was not yet of age, Luke could not bestow a gift upon her yet. When Luke walked towards her and asked if she liked weapons, Donna immediately turned around and showed Luke a stone tablet. Wondering if it was an ancient script, Luke asked if Donna could read it. Donna revealed that the tablet had been in the cave for a long time. She then pointed to a human form carved in the tablet, making Luke wonder if it was a golem. When Donna mentioned that it was an old weapon made by dwarves, Luke wondered if it was the armament to rule the world that Philia was talking about. Donna then mentioned that it was not an ordinary golem, as a person can ride inside it. This new information surprised Luke as he found it super cool, because our boy basically just discovered fantasy mecha lore out of nowhere. After learning about the ancient weapons of the dwarves, Luke knew that even with modern tech, it was still unthinkable that a person could ride and pilot such a weapon. Wondering if the dwarves used some fantastic technique that had been lost in time, Luke could not hide his excitement and decided to at least recreate the golem's shape. Using his customization ability, Luke molded the stone wall and finished the golem replica within 5 hours. Bro immediately turning into a mecha engineer the second he heard giant robot. Donna was very impressed with Luke's work as it looked like a real golem. Luke then used the facility transfer and made the golem move, ending up carrying him and Donna. As Luke and Donna decided to walk through the village inside the golem, the villagers immediately noticed that the ground was shaking. After turning around, they were surprised to see the golem. Their worry immediately vanished after Luke showed himself to everyone and apologized for making a scene. After sharing with the villagers how he was able to make the golem, they were very impressed. However, as soon as they saw the golem leaving, they were still amazed at how lame the movements were, because the thing moved less like a legendary weapon and more like a drunk refrigerator with legs. After finishing one lap, Luke and Donna were somewhat pleased with what they had accomplished. However, after a couple of seconds, the two ended up vomiting. As they had fun riding the golem, Luke wondered what it would feel like riding the real golem. Donna did not know what it felt like. However, she vowed to make the real golem someday. Luke had a gut feeling that after Donna received her gift, she might actually create the real golem. When Luke asked Donna why she wanted to make weapons, Donna responded that they were weak. Even though they stayed holed up underground, they were still chased out of their homes. Donna knew that if they had weapons, they could fight their enemies. After hearing Donna, Luke realized that an aversion to military force had grown inside of him. It was partly because he never liked fighting in the first place. Luke replaced the sorrow and anger of being exiled with an aversion to force. Even his village would have been destroyed if they didn't have any power. Luke agreed with Donna, but rather than using the weapon for harm, Luke wished to use it to protect themselves. Because our boy was slowly realizing peace only works when you can throw hands if necessary. Meanwhile, a certain exchange was taking place in the village. A man named Camer was fired and expelled from the kitchen. Camer was surprised and confused by the sudden release from work. The lady showed Camer a dish and asked him what it was. Camer explained that it was a creative dish that aimed for new textures and tastes. Unfortunately, the lady was not interested in Camer's experiment, as she did not want to waste food. Bro probably cooked something straight out of a medieval Hell's Kitchen nightmare. Little the population increased, the daily life of the villagers became more sophisticated. Villagers expressed themselves in various ways, mainly through business to showcase their skills. However, some have yet to make the most of their abilities. When Luke saw Camer looking depressed, he asked what had happened. Camer shared that he felt unworthy since he couldn't help even though he had already received his gift. Luke then remembered one place he was curious about. He then asked Camer and Solen to follow him to the watchtower. Luke then pointed out to Killian and Camer that there was a rocky area to the west. The Scott could be something since he couldn't access that portion of the village map, wondering if the area was already in someone's territory or if a person might be living there. Since no one was causing problems, there was no need to investigate further. Since the area looked tiny, Luke dismissed it as a labyrinth. Killian became excited and decided to escort Camer to the location. Since Cullen could not see anything that may point to a labyrinth, she asked Camer if he could see something, to which Camer responded that he could feel something strange. To get a closer look, Camer immediately ran towards the rocks, which he then excitedly called Cullen over as he found a dungeon, because apparently this village keeps unlocking side content like an open-world RPG. Reporting to Luke that they had found a dungeon, Cullen believed that what they discovered was likely an undiscovered or abandoned dungeon, as she couldn't find any human traces. Cullen also believed that they would be able to get their hands on some valuable resources. Luke guessed that the land was under the jurisdiction of the owner, the dungeon master. Luke believed that this was the reason he couldn't access the dungeon as part of the village. Philia shared the legends that dungeons are games created by gods. In every dungeon, a series of established principles govern the challenge. Among these principles lies the allure of treasure, the ultimate reward sought by all who dare to conquer the dungeon's depths. Listening to Philia, Luke thought it actually sounded pretty fun. Bro hearing deadly ancient labyrinth and immediately treating it like a weekend activity. Cullen commented that they would need to prepare before heading in. After assessing the dungeon to be narrow and complicated, Philia believed that a smaller group would be sufficient for the challenge. Not expecting to be given a chance to explore a dungeon, Luke then assigned Celine and Philia for the offensive. For their defense, Luke assigned Noel, carrying luggage and items. Luke called in Gort, thinking they would need his Herculean strength for healing. Philia planned to bring Sophia, who could also use white magic, which she deemed very useful. Luke then left the exploration in Camer's hands and his labyrinthine search ability. As the last member of the exploration team, Luke called for Saya, thinking that her sense of danger would come in handy. However, Luke was surprised when Saya outright refused Luke's request, explaining that she needed to watch the kids. Saya informed Luke that she would look for another person who bore the danger sense gift to take her place. Listening to Saya, both Luke and Cullen thought that people now took the concept of gifts too lightly. Saya then approached Marco to see if he was interested in exploring the dungeon. As Cullen observed Saya, she heard Mila crying, believing that she would once again be separated from Luke, because apparently this woman hears the word adventure and immediately starts preparing emotionally for tragedy. Lulling when Cullen mentioned that Luke would not be exploring with them, Luke was shocked. Seeing Luke surprised, Cullen explained that the dungeon claimed the lives of even the most experienced adventurers, and she believed Luke would be better off staying in the village. Luke told Cullen that he would not be a bother and would immediately turn back as soon as there was danger. However, Cullen loomed over Luke, informing him that she needed to remind him of the people who also said the same last words. Cullen then reassured the disappointed Luke that she would bring back tons of monster meat. As the exploration group entered the dungeon, they were able to witness the complex passages inside and believed they would have to do their best not to lose their way. Gort started to panic as he no longer had any idea where they were. Feeling the same way, Cullen asked Camer which way they should go next. Using his gift, Camer heard multiple sounds and then pointed out the path that he thought was best to continue. Hearing something coming from in front of them, Cullen and Philia immediately prepared for a fight. Recognizing the monster as a blood wolf, Philia took out its eye right away while Cullen dealt a devastating blow. After clearing the monster, Celine noticed Marco's worried look and asked what was wrong. Marco found it strange as he still had a bad feeling. Their attention was then diverted to the back, hearing someone scream. It was revealed that another blood wolf had appeared and was now behind Sophia. When Philia was about to shoot her arrow, she was surprised when the blood wolf was suddenly struck by an emerging wall. The blood wolf was then toppled over by multiple golems, which confused Philia even more. Alarmed, Kalin immediately used her ice gift to freeze the blood wolf in place. Recognizing the attack as similar to Luke's, another member of the exploration team shared that he had heard Luke was riding around in a golem the other day, and believed Luke might have sent the golems from the village to help them. However, Kalin thought differently as she heard Luke's gasp much closer. Putting her hands inside Gort's bag, Kalin confirmed her guess. After pulling Luke out from the bag, Kalin once again reminded Luke of the danger lurking in every corner of the dungeon. Luke's actions annoyed Kalin even more as he was placing himself in much danger. Bro literally smuggled himself into the dungeon like contraband. Luke apologized for what he did and explained that he intended to pull out when he sensed danger, but ended up missing his chance. But now that he was with the group inside the dungeon, Luke had learned that as long as he was close by, he could make any area part of the village regardless of its owner. This meant that Luke could use facility creation as much as he wanted. Hearing Luke, Kalin sighed inside as she was left with no option other than to have Luke around. Taking in the blood wolf hide for now, Luke was amazed as it was rare to see the hide in such nice condition. Moving forward, Marco reported that the ominous feeling was back, informing everyone that the monsters they would be facing would only get stronger. Selin instructed those who could not fight to stay in the middle. Luke became alarmed as he saw a minotaur headed their way. However, he was surprised when Gort and the others had a completely different reaction, calling the minotaur beef instead. Gort had heard that a minotaur's meat was super delicious. Noel also commented that the minotaur's meat was so soft it melted in the mouth, but not too gamey, so one could keep eating more and more. All of a sudden, Gort apologized to Luke, revealing that he was now sick and tired of orc meat. Kalin was not surprised by Gort's revelation as they hadn't been short of it in ages. Noel was also starting to question himself. With Kalin's lead, the group charged at the Minotaur. Kalin announced to everyone that they would be having a barbecue that night, because this entire dungeon raid somehow turned into a gourmet food expedition. A fairy claiming to be the great dungeon master woke up as she sensed that something was different. Believing that an explorer had finally arrived at the dungeon, the fairy planned to do her best. All of a sudden, the fairy heard emergency sirens informing her that the dungeon was experiencing erosion. The fairy was shocked to see Luke and the exploration team casually having a barbecue inside the dungeon. Bro turned a deadly labyrinth into a camping trip. Gort didn't realize that Luke could build facilities in dungeons. With houses and apartments, Marco believed that people could live normally inside the dungeon. Luke shared that he could only do it within a 50-meter range of where he had traveled. Listening to Luke, Philia believed that Luke's gift could completely change the world's approach to exploration. Kalin realized that they might not need to go back to the village to drop off their things. The fairy, still confused, could only observe the exploration group restarting their mission like they weren't completely breaking the laws of dungeon crawling. Entering a room full of monsters, Gort and the others recognized them as bad bats and saber snakes. Both Philia and Kalin took out the bats flying towards them, while Noel raised his shield to protect the others. Gort, on the other hand, was starting to get mad since there were too many bats for them to handle. Seeing that there were still more bats incoming, Luke made a quick hut for them to take shelter. After closing the door, the exploration team was left speechless about their situation. Gort was grateful to Luke, but now wondered what their next step would be. Kalin reassured Gort that they would be fine, as she had a plan for taking care of the bats. Casting ice magic outside, Kalin shared that if she kept releasing ice magic, the monsters would eventually all go away. Seeing the bats slowly retreating, the fairy believed that the current situation she was facing was not good, because her dungeon was getting cheesed harder than an online game exploit. Stepping out of the hut, the exploration team noticed that the monsters were mostly gone. Moving forward with their exploration, the team wondered what kind of monsters they would encounter next. Seeing a huge door, Luke felt differently about it. Kalin wondered if the door was the boss monster's room. Kalin told Luke that once they defeated the boss monster, they'd have cleared the dungeon. However, the monsters were usually much stronger than the other dungeon monsters. Luke was surprised to learn that they were already at the end of the dungeon. Philia laughed as she was not surprised, since they were an elite group. It was rare to get through a dungeon so easily. Philia explained that the boss monster was strong, but there was also a rumor that destroying the dungeon core granted a mysterious power akin to a gift. Listening to Philia, Luke had no clue that there were other methods to clearing the dungeon. Luke wanted to give it a shot, eager to receive the reward if they beat the boss monster. Opening the door, Luke and the others saw two minotaurs. Seeing the minotaurs as the beef they had just eaten, the group then changed their minds, thinking that the minotaurs in front of them might be on a whole other level. Kalin charged at the front while Philia prepared her arrow for an attack and Noel got ready for defense. Gort did not expect that they would be able to defeat the minotaurs so quickly. Though the minotaurs weren't particularly weak, Gort could tell that they were no different from the others they'd faced. Seeing the treasure chest, Luke immediately approached it, wondering if he could open it. Marco informed Luke that he could open the chest since he didn't feel any danger from it and did not think of the chest as a trap. Opening the chest, Luke and Gort were not excited upon seeing that it was just a steel sword. Luke still did not mind the reward as he had fun with their first dungeon, and thought it would be a good memento. Philia told Luke to stop and reminded him that dungeons have various rules and regulations. One of the rules was that the reward must be commensurate with the level of difficulty. One couldn't have a dungeon that didn't follow the rules, and it was the explorer who decided if it was worth it. Philia made it clear that disproportionate rewards should not be accepted. When Luke asked what would happen if they did not accept the reward, Philia responded that the dungeon master must guide the explorers to where they are. If they waited for a while, Philia believed that either a path would appear or the dungeon master would show up. Both Luke and Gord understood and immediately shut the treasure chest. After some time, the two then became disappointed since nothing was happening. Camera then called for Luke, informing him that the path they were looking for was a tiny path behind them. Shocked to see the path to the dungeon master, Philia believed that the dungeon master intended to avoid meeting them at all costs. Running down the stairs, the fairy laughed, stating that she had not broken any rules. The fairy was still surprised at how fast Luke and the others had cleared the dungeon, pointing out that Philia also knew way too much about dungeons. The fairy was annoyed since she could not prepare a suitable reward on the spot in a deserted place, believing that explorers should really take the dungeon circumstances into consideration. The fairy thought that dungeons were supposed to be about handsome heroes struggling valiantly. The fairy just wanted to lock up the handsome ones in the same room and see what they did. Bro was running fantasy reality TV experiments this whole time, wanting the dungeon to be famous. The fairy believed that for now it was impossible. Pretending that things did not happen, the fairy thought that the exploration team had probably just given up and left after taking a nap. To the fairy's surprise, Colin appeared in front of her. Curious as to how Colin got in, the fairy was even more surprised when more people started coming into her room. Luke explained that since the passage was too narrow, they decided to widen it. The fairy grew nervous as she had not expected Luke and the others would make a brand new path. Seeing the dungeon core, Philia asked if they should break it. The fairy became even more worried since she would die if the core were to break, and Girl's entire dungeon master aura instantly collapsed into pure panic mode. The fairy dungeon master pouted, unhappy with the events that transpired in her dungeon. Luke apologized for using his ability as he had no other option, though he still felt it was unfair. The dungeon master became angry with Luke, telling him that what he had done did not justify messing up her dungeon. Glaring at the dungeon master, Philia pointed out that the dungeon master was the first one to play dirty by exploiting a loophole. Even if Luke hadn't expanded the passage, Philia would have destroyed the dungeon regardless of the outcome. Luke was surprised to learn that the dungeon master was a fairy. Exchanging greetings with Luke and claiming to be cute, the dungeon master explained how she really wanted to prepare a more luxurious reward for all of them, but the steel sword was the best she could do in the deserted dungeon. The dungeon master felt ashamed and ended up hiding, versus running a whole dungeon empire with the budget of a struggling indie game developer. Nervous, Luke asked about the connection between the reward and the dungeon being deserted. Luke hoped that the dungeon master would reveal a scary story behind the reward and the dungeon. The dungeon master explained that if many people came into the dungeon, she would earn lots of dungeon points. With the points she gathered, she could prepare rewards and place traps and monsters. However, if the dungeon got cleared before the points came in, then they would end up in the situation they were currently in. Thinking they were quite similar, Luke revealed his gift to the dungeon master, and that he also needed points to build facilities. Puzzled about village points, the dungeon master wondered if it was a power derived from the dungeon. Angered, the dungeon master pointed out that Luke had not just created a hole in her room, but had also eroded parts of her dungeon. Luke was surprised that the dungeon master could detect the changes in her dungeon. The dungeon master explained that she and the dungeon were inseparable, like body and spirit. It would be natural for the dungeon master to notice if her body was overtaken, sharing how terrified she was when a part of the dungeon was being overtaken. Luke apologized as he understood the fear the dungeon master would feel. When Luke put things back to normal, he apologized once again, realizing that he couldn't revert things once they had turned into his territory. Luke's words only angered the dungeon master even more, because bro basically said "my bad" after accidentally annexing parts of her soul. Then enraged at having her body messed with, the dungeon master demanded that they leave immediately. Colin and the others began to get confused as they listened to the conversation between Luke and the dungeon master. When Luke asked the dungeon master if the area he seized was no longer under her control, the dungeon master, sensing that the area still accepted her commands, believed it would be fine. Since Luke would not be able to revert the changes he made inside the dungeon master asked him for a favor instead. Finding the dungeon very boring every day since no one had challenged it since it was created, the dungeon master wanted Luke to gather people to develop her dungeon. Others were not surprised that no one had tried exploring the dungeon as it was located in a deserted area, since they were able to defeat the monsters. Colin believed that other explorers would then have an easier time defeating the monsters that would be reproduced. Thinking of ways to attract people to the dungeon, Luke then informed Berlit of his idea of moving the village. Shocked, others thought they would be abandoning the village. Luke clarified that they would not be abandoning the village, but instead moving the entire village as is. Since the dungeon grows as more people enter it, Luke planned to merge the dungeon and the village so that the dungeon could grow and the village could also benefit from valuable materials and items. If Luke used his facility transfer, he believed he would be able to move the entire village. However, the last time he moved while inside the facility, he experienced severe motion sickness. With that experience, Luke thought they needed to figure out how to move everyone without making them feel sick. Luke then ordered the others to gather the people and discuss the matter. Testing out ideas for moving the village, Luke was informed that if they didn't manage it by walking on 2 legs or anything similar, they might be able to pull it off with minimal shaking. Concerned about the rocks along the way, Donga suggested they test things out with a facility modeled after the village. Using telepathy, Luke informed his villagers that he would be moving the village now. Since it was dangerous, Luke advised everyone to stay inside the facilities and hold on to something for safety. Luke managed to move the entire village safely so that even the communication officer was not disturbed by the move. A merchant couldn't hide his happiness, hoping to earn good money after preparing many valuable items. The merchant was shocked to see the entire village sliding. The merchant became nervous when he suddenly heard Luke's voice advising him to step back, since they were currently moving the village. Bro really turned the whole settlement into a moving fortress overnight. Luke reassured the merchant that they would reconnect the roads after they finished. After completing the move, Luke thanked his villagers for their cooperation. Confused, the dungeon master pointed out to Luke that connecting his village to the dungeon underground would not help in generating dungeon points. Luke then revealed his solution for the dungeon points problem, moving the dwarves' houses into the dungeon. Seeing the dwarves' fascinated expressions at having to live inside a dungeon, the dungeon master thought that the dwarves' presence would indeed help in generating points every day, but still wondered if they would be safe. As the dungeon could be quite dangerous, Luke reassured the dungeon master that he would fortify the area to make it safer for the dwarves. As the dwarves started moving their houses, the dungeon master couldn't help but be in awe after seeing so many people, believing that the dungeon points would pile up very quickly. Luke then advised the dungeon master to let Doral and the others know if anything happened so he could be notified. The dungeon master thanked Luke and told him that they could freely visit the dungeon anytime. The dwarves were a bit offended when the dungeon master requested that Luke also bring some handsome guys, because apparently this fairy still had her own weird priorities. After safely reconnecting the roads, Luke spoke with the merchant, apologizing for the delay. Although the village's location had changed a bit, there were no major inconveniences. A few days later, Milla approached Luke wanting to show him something. Seeing so much food in one place, Luke thought there was a festival and asked if something special had happened. Milla corrected Luke, revealing that the day marked exactly 1 year since the village was founded. The feast celebrated the memorable anniversary of the beginning of Luke's glory and greatness. Uncovering her surprise, Milla revealed a commemorative statue of Luke. With an angry expression, Milla then told the audience to cheer for Luke. While feeling confused by what he had witnessed, Luke's villagers started cheering his name, and our boy finally realized he accidentally founded a civilization and a fan club at the same time. Confused, Luke asked Milla to explain what he was staring at. Milla had been secretly making a statue of Luke to show him one day. Thanks to the dwarves' craftsmanship, Milla and the others managed to skillfully recreate Luke's dignified figure. As the dwarves asked Luke if he liked it, they hoped that he was pleased with their work. Though Luke had no idea what to say to them, he simply thanked the dwarves. Bro got hit with an entire surprise fan monument and didn't know how to process it. Milla revealed another commemorative item for Luke, showing him a book that chronicles his glorious journey. Luke was speechless as he did not expect that his villagers would write a legend about him. Thinking that what they had done was already too much, Luke was puzzled as to why everyone was on board with something like that. Milla informed Luke that the author of the book was Mr. Toddle, who had the literary gift. Toddle was glad that he was finally able to make use of his talent. Hearing Toddle, Luke realized that the statue in the book had helped everyone gain a sense of achievement. Upon revealing that Milla and Toddle planned to publish more books in the future, and hoped that they would reach outside the village, Luke's first thought was hoping that Milla and Toddle would not continue with their plans. Accepting the book, Luke immediately read it. Reading through the lines of the supposed chronicle, he was shocked as he did not remember saying some of the words in the book. Bro opened the novel and instantly realized they had turned him into a motivational quote machine. Sighing, Clan told Milla that she did not understand Luke at all and shared that Luke was not the type of person who would say something written in the book. Sullen explained how Luke was much more unreliable, but when push came to shove, Luke could stand up to any formidable foe. Listening to Sullen, Luke thought she was not serious. He thought Toddle could write something cooler, like the exhilaration of riding the golem. When Luke described the power and experience of riding the golem, Toddle immediately thought Luke was aiming for a comedic angle, which was not Luke's point at all. Both Milla and Toddle became excited, thinking of ways they could explore a variety of stories and even create a spin-off. Not pleased with what he was hearing from Milla and Toddle, Luke asked if it really had to be him as the model for the books. Nema then told Luke that being liked was often a blessing and a burden. No longer thinking about Milla and Toddle's plans, Luke was just happy to be able to celebrate with everyone. As the night of the celebration continued, somewhere in the forest a mysterious creature sensed an intrusion and was very curious about who dared to disturb its slumber. The next day, Luke received a congratulatory message for exceeding 3,000 people, leveling his village up to 7. With the arrival of spring, the village number had grown even more. The central area where everyone resided, which they also called the village, had expanded to encompass not only the entire wilderness, but also the forest to the north and the mountains to the east. Checking the new facilities that could be built, Luke thought that all of the available options were good and wondered where he should start. Going through his new skills, Luke was shocked to learn that his village appraisal level had increased, making it more detailed and confusing. Looking through the required information options, Luke noticed the criminal tendencies and thought that he needed that ability. Hearing a screech, Luke said that something had invaded again. Curious if it was a monster given its size, Luke called Satan telepathically, informing him that a huge monster was heading towards the village from the border. Luke ordered Satan to notify everyone immediately, which Satan complied with right away. Staring at the sky, Luke was shocked as he thought he was looking at a lizard-like monster. But as the monster fully revealed its face, Luke immediately thought of it as a dragon, because apparently the village difficulty setting got patched again overnight. After receiving the news that a monster was nearby, Philia immediately approached Luke. Looking up, Philia recognized the monster as a tree dragon, a plant-based creature that mimics dragons. Upon confirming that the tree dragon did not have the same aggressiveness as a true dragon, Philia told Luke that they couldn't let their guard down. Tree dragons, like plants and flowers, absorb nutrients from the ground and rarely move. However, Philia was very puzzled, since the tree dragon had gone to the trouble of leaving the forest and appearing in the wilderness. Thinking that something was wrong, Philia told Luke that they were in trouble since the tree dragon was headed straight for them. Seeing how huge the tree dragon was, Philia believed they wouldn't stand a chance against it. Luke immediately ordered everyone in the village to take cover underground. As the villagers ran for safety, Luke, who was nervous, was confused after seeing the tree dragon stop its movement. Meanwhile, Salan, along with Luke and Philia, was curious about what was happening with the tree dragon since they had been hiding for an hour already. Seeing that the tree dragon was situated in their field, the three wondered what the tree dragon wanted. The villagers were shocked at how huge the tree dragon was. Seeing that the tree dragon was not moving, Luke thought it might be feeling unwell. Luke asked Nella, who had the gift of animal's heart, if he knew anything. Nella was having a hard time understanding the monster since it was also part plant. Nella believed that the tree dragon was harmless as it had a content expression. Though the tree dragon might be harmless, the villagers were still annoyed because the tree dragon was lying on top of their crops. Bro really pulled up like a giant overgrown cat and chose the farm as its nap spot. Luke was relieved to learn that the tree dragon was not hostile, but he was still curious as to why it had gone out of its way to come to the village. Nella could only guess that the tree dragon liked the field and the village. Nella discerned that the tree dragon had been woken up by the smell of the delicious soil. Luke and the others were impressed by the soil in the village, as it was able to awaken a sleeping tree dragon. Though Tior was upset about what had happened to his crops, he was still pleased that a tree dragon appreciated his soil. Bro got his farm personally reviewed by a mythical creature. Luke and Tior tapped the tree dragon's snout as it tried to build a connection. He ended up getting his head bitten. Nella then informed everyone that the tree dragon forbade weaklings from touching him. Nella believed that the tree dragon planned to rest in the field as it looked very sleepy. Luke thought that if they did not approach the tree dragon recklessly, they should be fine. All of a sudden, a round object bounced on top of Taysher's head. Philia immediately recognized the round object as a tree dragon's seed. Relaying the message from the tree dragon, Netzwell told Taysher to eat it and nurture his intelligence. Taysher instantly getting called dumb by a plant dragon was absolutely brutal, because since then the tree dragon has remained in the field, occasionally giving the village its seed. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon master was sighing, envious of the tree dragon's power and its ability to bear fruit. The dungeon master's mood suddenly changed when Luke noticed that the dungeon had grown quite a lot. Proud of herself, the dungeon master revealed that she had increased the difficulty. Moreover, the floors had expanded from 2 to 5. The dungeon master had been considering placing a bunch of strong monsters and traps at the beginning to heighten the challenge. Listening to the dungeon master, Luke pointed out that if the dungeon became too hard, people would retreat immediately, causing the dungeon master to earn no points. Luke suggested making the first floor easy to encourage people to stay longer. Tons of people would gather in the dungeon for monsters and materials. Luke believed that it was best if the difficulty increased with each floor. Listening to Luke's comments, the dungeon master was offended, thinking that Luke considered her dungeon unfun to conquer. Though the dungeon master aimed to create a cool, strong, and awesome dungeon, she also saw Luke's point. The dungeon master finally decided to create an approachable dungeon, because apparently Luke was out here teaching customer retention strategies to magical cave systems. While Luke and the dungeon master shared ideas on what monsters to place on the floors, Luke's name was suddenly called by the dwarves. Wanting Luke to see something, Luke was surprised by the weapons the dwarves had laid out. Luke was impressed by the beautiful works of the dwarves. Considering the dwarves' idea of selling the weapons to the visitors of their village, Luke thought it would help adventurers with their dungeon exploration. As the three discussed ideas, they realized they were actually creating a dungeon economy. Luke and the others became excited to immediately work on their new idea. Several days later, a group of adventurers arrived at the village. The adventurer mage named Hazana did not expect that people actually lived in the deserted land. Alec told Hazana to always trust reliable merchant information. While the team scout was amazed by the village, Guy suggested that they set up a base for the meantime. Receiving a report from Satan about the people entering the village, Luke became excited after checking their abilities. The dungeon master was amazed at how Luke was able to learn so much about the adventurers with just telepathy. Knowing the capabilities of telepathy, the dungeon master had doubts about how Luke obtained such detailed information. In the end, Luke admitted that he had turned the adventurers into villagers, which then granted him access to their information. Though Luke tried to explain his reasoning to the dungeon master, he still couldn't escape her lecture. Annoyed, the dungeon master made it clear to Luke never to turn her into a villager without her permission. Luke approached Alec and introduced himself as the village chief. As the two exchanged pleasantries, Luke confirmed with Alec that the place did indeed have a dungeon. Before proceeding with their dungeon exploration, Luke asked if they wished to take a look around the village. Alec and the others were amazed, unable to believe that the village had everything. Upon seeing the prices of the weapons, both Hasna and Dill asked Luke who his supplier was, since the weapons were considered to be of high quality, yet were being sold so cheaply. When Luke revealed that the weapons were made by dwarves, the adventurers were surprised, as dwarves were so difficult to come by. Alec wondered if the village had been developed to cater to adventurers. Luke revealed that Alec and his group were the first adventurers to visit their village. After discovering the dungeon, Luke hoped that it would provide an opportunity for everyone's skills to be put to good use. Alec was beaming with laughter as he praised how amazing the village was. Bro stumbled into the fantasy equivalent of an all-inclusive starter hub. Conversing telepathically, Luke informed the dungeon master that the adventurers were as handsome as she had expected. Excited for their first dungeon explorers, Luke was curious about what the dungeon master had prepared in the big hall at the end of the path. Both Luke and Dolan were shocked to learn that the dungeon had such an instruction. Believing that the adventurers would include a handsome guy, the dungeon master had placed a rule that those who entered could not leave until they had whispered sweet things, because this fairy really built a romance side quest into a death dungeon. The adventurers were confused about the purpose of the bed inside the dungeon. The dungeon master explained that the room also serves as a safety area where one can sleep. Though it was easy to understand, Dolan thought that others would find it more confusing. Instead, Hosena asked her group to wait as she needed time to prepare herself. However, she was ignored as her teammates proceeded to enter the dungeon, because apparently self-preservation was optional for adventurers. Going through without any problems, Alec hoped they had not overlooked anything. Stepping into the dungeon, Alec was surprised to be immediately greeted by a flock of bad bats. Calling Hosna's name, Hosna quickly understood what to do and used her fire magic to defeat the bad bats. Believing they had succeeded in clearing the bats, they were surprised to learn that another flock of bad bats was headed toward them. As the adventurers were getting overwhelmed by the swarm of bad bats, Hosna came to their aid, instructing the others to dodge Luki. In the end, the group managed to defeat the bad bats, but they also got themselves burned. Alec noticed that whenever they stepped on an unstable floor plate, the bad bats would come and attack them. Upon learning about the traps inside the dungeon, Hosna realized they might not have enough magic for the dungeon, since there was still a long way to go. Alec found relief upon learning that the plates deactivated once stepped on. Now more cautious, the group slowly made their way, fought monsters, and marked the path they had taken. Seeing fur and claw marks on the path, the group expected they might encounter several beasts with claws. Alec decided for the group to head back for now since they had explored the general terrain up to their current location. Back in the village, Alec enjoyed a cold drink, still unable to believe that they could get high-quality food while clearing a dungeon. Himena and the others were pleased to hear that they were the only adventurers in the village, having all the treasures to themselves. Thinking it a waste, Alec informed everyone that he had already sent a message to all of his other adventurer friends about the village and dungeon. Bro accidentally became Luke's unpaid marketing manager. Hearing this, Luke's eyes brightened as their plan had worked. Several days later, thanks to Alec, the number of adventurers started to increase. Both Dolan and the dungeon master were very excited as their plan had been a big hit. Stepping outside, Luke encountered Alec and asked if he was headed to the dungeon. Alec responded affirmatively and shared with Luke that they had recently made it to the second floor. Knowing what Alec and his teammates were capable of, Luke thought they might perform even better if they were blessed with gifts. When Luke asked Alec if they were not going to receive a blessing, Alec was bashful, telling Luke that they were just normal villagers and believed they would not be rewarded with gifts. Luke was speechless upon hearing Alec and then revealed that they could get a free blessing if they visited the village's church. Since it sounded very shady, Alec thanked Luke for the information, but decided to refuse. Luke tried to persuade Alec, but he remained adamant about not trying out the church, because free magical powers honestly sounded like the setup to a scam quest. In the end, Alec and his group visited the church and received their very own gifts. Hyzena obtained the gift of rub magic, Dill received enemy detection while Guy got albus magic. For their leader, Alec received the gift of greatsword skill. Noticing Alec's expression, Hosena asked him what the problem was, as she thought Alec had always wanted to receive a gift. Alec explained that receiving a gift felt anticlimactic, as he had always thought only nobles could be gifted. Realizing the bigger picture about the gifts, Alec apologized to Luke for doubting him, and thanked him for allowing him to obtain his dream. Meanwhile, in the wilderness, rumors spread of a village in the deserted land that had gained attention with many people visiting it. Entering the village, the governor of Nori, Dantho, and his guard were shocked to see that the village was now bustling. Everyone looked well dressed, and the village now had an abundance of food despite it being the dead of winter. Dantho's guard knew the rumors of the village, but with the activity they had witnessed, they were sure the village could no longer hide itself. Dantho cried, believing that Luke had gone a little too far because our boy somehow turned exile punishment into the hottest fantasy tourist destination on the continent. Even at hearing Dantho's voice calling his name, Luke was very pleased. However, he did not expect that Dantho and his guard would already be relishing the foods being sold in their city. Dantho explained the reason for his visit, which was to report important news to Luke. In the most recent war, the House of Albert had managed to defeat the Kingdom of Schneger. The news surprised Luke as he had thought that the war had just broken out the other day. Dantho agreed with Luke and further shared that the House of Albert concluded the war within a month. The House of Albert's army captured Schneger's cities one after another and made their way to the capital in the blink of an eye. The fiercest battle took place in the capital, where the Albert army overwhelmed the enemy and won. Luke still could not believe that a large-scale war would end in just 1 month. Since the House of Albert has taken over Schneger, they now hold the greatest power in the kingdom. Dantho also shared that Raoul, Luke's younger brother, contributed greatly in his first campaign. Raoul has been entrusted with the administration of the former Albert territories moving forward. Bro speedran his military career like he was farming achievements. With Lord Albert focusing on consolidating his rule over the Schneger territories, Dantho pointed out to Luke that the rumors of the village could not be kept secret forever, and that only time would tell when Raoul would find out about the village. Dantho suggested thinking of countermeasures before it was too late. Dantho admitted that he was now overstepping his boundaries, but still offered advice to Luke, the ruler of the village. With a large number of villagers and a stable supply of commodities, the village would be sought after. Thinking of his younger brother, Luke wondered if Raoul would truly come to his village and take it away. Milla, who surprised Luke, told him that Raoul would certainly come as he is that type of person. If Luke is seen as a minor threat, Milla was certain that Raoul would come and squash Luke right away. Though everyone thought that the task assigned to Luke would be impossible, he was still able to create a livable village in the middle of nowhere. Milla was certain that once Raoul found out about the village, he would take immediate action. Kamit Lenin also voiced her concern, agreeing with Milla that Raoul would certainly come and take what is Luke's. Kamit Lenin reminded Luke how Raoul would throw stones at servants just to entertain himself. Thinking about his brother, Luke realized that he did not know much about him as they couldn't get along because of their different status. Luke also realized that he was at fault for not interacting with Raoul earlier and for being influenced by the people surrounding him. With so much negativity between them, Luke and Raoul's relationship became shallow. The Hoff siblings' relationship reached a point where Luke would just watch from afar to check on Raoul. Luke then kept wondering about the possibilities that would have happened if he had reached out to Raoul even more. A few days passed and a messenger from the House of Basrata came to pick Sullen up, confirming that there were rumors of the village spreading. A servant of the House of Basrata had not believed in the village at first and wanted to investigate, but was surprised when he actually found Cullen. When Cullen told the messenger that she would not be going home, the messenger told Cullen how her father was so worried about her. Annoyed by the image of her father, Cullen then brought out delicious food and persuaded the messenger to move to the village. With Cullen's tactic, she was able to convince the messenger to live in the village and become a villager. Cleon's father, who was happy to know that his daughter had been found, was enraged when he learned that the messenger he sent wished to immigrate, because Bro got defeated by good food and decent living conditions. Salas, Seline's younger brother, reassured their father that he would bring Cleon back. In the past, Salas could never defeat his sister. However, after entering the battlefield and fighting with House Albert, Salas gained experience and increased his confidence. Salas also witnessed Raoul's strength firsthand, making him believe that Cullen must submit to Raoul. The head of House Basrata calmed down and relied on Salas to bring his sister back. Back at the village, Cullen received a telepathic message that her younger brother, along with guards, was visiting the village and was not hesitating to fight. Recognizing Salas's plan, Cullen scoffed and was eager to teach them a lesson. When the village learned that Cullen would be fighting with her family, news of it spread quickly and immediately gathered people who would support Cullen and fight alongside her. At this point, the villagers were ready to defend Cullen like she was the final boss of their found family arc. When Celius finally reached Luke's village, he was shocked to see for himself that there was actually a town in the middle of nowhere. Seeing his escort's reaction, Celius told them not to be intimidated by the village. When asked by the guards about the purpose of his visit, Celius introduced himself as a member of House Basrata and stated that he intended to take his sister away. The guards believed Celius and allowed him to enter the village. Celius and his escorts were in shock when they saw how lively the village was. The escorts also noticed how rugged the gatekeepers looked and thought that they were bandits but could not confirm it since they wore proper clothes. Celius was then greeted by both Luke and his sister Cullen. Knowing the reason for her brother's visit, Celius went straight to the point and told her brother that she would not be going home. Surprised, Celius told his sister that he would not accept such an answer, and then shared how worried their father was. Celia knew that their father did not really want her to come home, but intended to use her to strengthen their family ties with House Ba. Celius, who saw the reason for their father's actions as a way of caring about their family's future, told Celius that as a noble woman, it was her duty to follow the will of the patriarch. Not caring if her father disowned her, Celia made her point clear that she would never go back to their home. Jar, seeing no other option, Celius drew his sword, planning to use force to bring his sister back. Seeing how a fight was about to break out, the whole village became wild. Celius and his escorts were shocked to see tons of villagers appearing out of nowhere. Celius became mad at the villagers for thinking of their family problem as entertainment. The brawl pulled up for a serious family dispute, and the village instantly turned it into pay-per-view content. With the fight about to start, both Nema and Satan appeared and started commentating on the fight. Celius initiated the fight with his aggressive strikes. As an observer, Satan immediately noticed that both siblings had the style of dual-wielding, with the only difference being their secondary gifts. Nema was impressed with Celius's extraordinary speed and believed that his skilled control over wind using Virtus magic was the reason Celius could move so fast. Now increasing her pace, Kalin used her Livinus magic that allowed her to control ice. Celius became overwhelmed by Celia's magic and hastily dodged all of the ice coming toward him. While Celius was distracted, Celius had already distanced herself, giving herself an advantage to use long-range attacks. Meanwhile, Celius's escorts started a fight of their own, charging at the villagers who were supporting Celia. With the villagers easily blocking their attacks, the Basrata soldiers were surprised by the villagers' heavy strikes. Though the soldiers slowly gained an advantage through numbers, their momentum was stopped when the villagers started showing their true skills. The villagers' counterattack surprised the soldiers, making them think that the villagers possessed gifts that only nobles should have. Seeing how the ground was easily destroyed struck fear into the soldiers' hearts. The villagers laughed and looked smug, very pleased with teaching the soldiers a lesson for underestimating them. Seeing his sister distracted, Celius grabbed the opportunity and launched a surprise attack, annoyed that his sister was looking away while they were in the middle of a fight. Charging towards Celius boasts to his sister how he has won wars. However, Celius was not impressed with Celius's achievement. Celia's ice magic once again created an opportunity for her to distance herself. However, Celia's action proved to be fruitless as Celius's extraordinary speed allowed him to catch up to Celius and even surround her from all corners. Celius became cocky since his sister could not keep up with his movements. Raud started moving like he unlocked Ultra Instinct after one military campaign. However, Celia thought that Celius was still naive and surprised him by pinpointing his location and launching a counterattack. Celius did not expect Celius to freeze a large area around her at random. Celia, who's good at endurance battles, asked her brother how long he could keep up with his speed. Angered, Celius calmed himself and believed that he was still in control of the fight since Celia had only been on the defensive. Celius, who had put his faith in their soldiers, thought that they had already achieved victory. However, Celius was shocked when he saw that the soldiers were now lying on the ground unconscious. Celius could not believe that his soldiers who were experienced in battle lost to common villagers. Celius told Celius that the escorts he brought were way too confident, which ended up getting them folded by villagers who basically train every day like it's boot camp DLC. Thankraged, Celius told Celius how he refused to believe that a village capable of defeating their experienced soldiers could be made up of common villagers. In a matter of seconds, Celius also faced defeat at the hands of his sister. Celius was frustrated upon learning that he still had not closed the gap between him and Celian even though he had been training so hard for the past year. As Luke offered to patch up the injured, Celius felt humiliated for receiving hospitality from their foes, asking Luke how long he planned to look down on them. Philia appeared and shared what Celius truly felt. She then went on and ordered Celius to accept his loss and comply. Celius became mad at Philia for touching him so casually, but was shocked when he saw that Philia was an elf. Valf. Philia, who had gotten accustomed to the village, had made herself forget how elves usually interact with humans. Celius, who was in shock, could not believe that he had finally seen an elf. Since Celius only knew of elves as a race in legends, he became curious as to why an elf was in the village. Seeing Celius's reaction, Celia remembered how her brother used to be obsessed with elves back then. Celius admitted that he admired the elven race but felt that talking about them while an elf was present would be insensitive. Seeing how knowledgeable Celius was about her race, Philia laughed and stated that she expected no less from Celia's brother, and was relieved to see that Celius was a good person. When Philia offered to patch Celius up, Celius was unable to speak and silently accepted the offer. Bro went from angry noble swordsman to awkward elf fanboy in under 5 minutes. In the end, Celius sent out a letter to his father that he would not be able to return home for the time being. The letter shocked the head of the Basrata household as he could not believe that both his children had now left him. Meanwhile, Raoul asked his servant if they had received any reply from the governor yet. Although they had sent out several letters of summons, the governor had not sent any responses or visits at all. With Raoul feeling betrayed, his servants then informed him that they had brought him a servant who worked in the governor's mansion. The governor's servant, who told Raoul that he had risked his life to uncover the governor's secret, presented proof of the governor's disloyalty. When Raoul saw and read the report that was sent during their investigation about the village, Raoul laughed in disbelief and claimed that such a town would be impossible to build in just a year. Raoul then became nervous as he knew that building a huge town should have been impossible. Yet he sensed something ominous about the village. Raoul then dispatched some spies as he planned to conduct an undercover investigation. When the spies finally reached the village, they were shocked to see castle walls standing in the wasteland. All of a sudden, the spies fell into a pit, completely catching them off guard. Unbeknownst to them, Nima was just hiding in the dark, probably grinning like she just unlocked new victims for her favorite hobby. When the spies turned around, they were puzzled when they saw Nima in front of them. One of the spies pointed out that Nima was behind prison bars, which led the others to ask if Nima had been caught. Nima flared up and told the spies that they were the ones getting caught, after which she asked the spies the reason why they came to their village. Shocked, the three spies immediately started lying through their teeth like their lives depended on it, which honestly they kinda did. When Nima asked the three if they were not lying, the spies responded that they were not. Satan then telepathically told Nema the truth. Upon learning that the three were spies from House Albert, Nema asked for more details from them. One of the spies then noticed that there was something beyond the bars. When the spy looked closer, he immediately broke into a cold sweat after seeing multiple torture devices lined up like a nightmare starter pack. Nema then asked the spies if they knew what would happen if she found out they were lying. Before the trap pit closed, the spies' cries echoed throughout the prison trap. Looking at the visitors' statuses, Luke confirmed that the danger showing from the spies had disappeared, confirming that the discussion apparently went very well according to Nema standards. After the incident, House Albert continued to send several more spies, which surprised Luke that Raoul would go so far as to send multiple spies to check on his village. Looking at his status board, Luke saw that there was a large group of people headed toward the village. Meanwhile, in Albert territory, Raoul had a merchant kidnapped in order to extract information from Luke's village. Perwell warned the merchant that his house would be investigated and that anything related to the wasteland would be confiscated. Though Raoul had sent out multiple spies to gather information about the village, he did not expect that he would gain more knowledge from the people who had gone to the village before. By forcing the merchants, Raoul confirmed that the village was in fact real. The truth enraged Raoul, thinking that Luke was getting in his way again. Raoul was crashing out because his exiled brother accidentally built Fantasy Las Vegas in the wasteland. Upon seeing so many people near the village, Kidyun asked Luke if those were refugees. However, Luke believed that they were not, since they were too organized. When Luke had an unexpected visit from Dantho, he was surprised to see so many soldiers behind the governor, and asked him if something had happened. Dantho shared that Raoul had found him suspicious, which made him decide to escape from Raoul's territory and stay in Luke's village for safety. Dantho shared a nasty rumor that Luke was gathering forces in the wasteland to rebel against House Albert. The rumor shocked Luke and he told the governor that the rumors were false. Dantho believed in Luke. However, he was worried that the rumors would continue to spread and become more credible. Because of the rumor, Dantho thought that Raoul would attack the village, which made him decide to bring his soldiers to aid Luke in the fight. Luke was touched by Dantho's genuine offer of an alliance against House Albert. Luke asked the governor if he was certain about allying with him against House Albert. Dantho explained how he really had no other option since his future looked cooked either way. However, from the moment the governor visited the village, he had decided to side with and stay in Luke's village. After receiving more villagers, Luke received a notification that he had reached level 8 and that he had surpassed 10,000 villagers. Knowing that getting depressed was not an option in their time of crisis, Luke shared with Dantho that they had captured multiple spies that came from House Albert. When Luke asked Nema about the status of the spies they had captured, Nema told Luke that the spies no longer harbored any ill will and had become more obedient. The spies had become more adorable and were now eager for the food that Nema brought. When one of the spies asked the identity of the person beside Nema, they were shocked to learn that the young kid was none other than Luke Albert, the village chief. Seeing the spies' surprised reaction, Nema asked the spies if they did not recognize Luke's face. The spies explained that Luke was someone who could not be easily met and had only been seen from afar. After understanding everyone's point of view, Luke made a request to the spies and wished to learn about Albert territory in detail. Seeing Luke's sincerity and his determination to protect the village, the spies who had once vowed not to share information decided to tell Luke what he wanted. Not wishing for the beautiful village to be destroyed either, the spies offered to share even more information with Luke. With the rumors of the village flourishing, it was already planned to attack the village with a certain number of soldiers. When the spies mentioned a certain amount, Luke assumed that Albert would only be sending a small group. However, the spies corrected him and revealed that around 5,000 soldiers were planned for the attack on the village. Elves are a legendary race that disappeared from the public eye due to constantly being targeted for their beauty and the mystery surrounding their longevity. Knowing the history of the elves, Celius, who was completely mesmerized by Philea's fighting, vowed to protect the elven race at all costs. Bro got one glimpse of an elf girl fighting and instantly unlocked Knight in Shining Armor mode. But Celius was surprised when his sister ordered him to return as soon as possible. Celius had a feeling that Celius would suggest they surrender. Celius, agreeing with what Celius said, shared that surrendering was the most peaceful and bloodless solution. Knowing what type of person Raoul was, Celius was certain that Raoul would never back down once he set his sights on something. Wanting to protect Luke at all costs, Celius and the others were left with no choice other than to fight Raoul and his 5,000 soldiers. Celius agreed with Celius that surrendering was technically the safest option, which was exactly why she did not want him demoralizing the troops before the battle even started. Philia, who had been listening quietly, told Celius that he could leave if he was against fighting Raoul. Philia clarified that they were simply trying to solve their own problem and that he did not need to burden himself over it. Celius turned away as he could barely handle how kind Philia was being toward him. In the end, Celius decided to stay and fight, stating that he did not want to abandon his older sister. Bro folded instantly after the elf kindness combo attack, absolutely zero resistance. Meanwhile, at Governor Dantho's mansion, Raoul arrived with his soldiers and was surprised to see that the place was completely empty. Raoul could not believe that the governor was the first person to abandon the city and flee. The Raoul then ordered his men to stock up and prepare thoroughly as they would begin a 5-day journey toward Luke's village. On the other hand, Luke was panicking, unsure what to do against Raoul and his 5,000 soldiers. Seeing Luke's expression, Celius told him not to be afraid. Celius then asked the villagers if any of them wanted to escape, reminding everyone that they were now facing a direct member of House Albert. Luke felt touched when everyone gathered around him and declared they would protect Luke and the village no matter what. However, behind all their smiles was pure nervousness because deep down everyone knew they only had one option left: win or get wiped. As night came, Luke sat on top of the walls staring at his map, wondering why things between him and Raoul had reached the point where they were now preparing to fight each other. When Celia saw Luke sitting there, she suggested he get some rest since they already had lookouts monitoring Raoul's army. Luke was worried about the false rumors spreading around, especially since they were now being used as justification for war. Luke wondered if Raoul truly believed those lies himself. Wanting to understand Raoul more and somehow resolve everything peacefully, Luke came up with an idea. Meanwhile, at Raoul's camp, he received confirmation that the walled city actually existed, which only made him angrier. Raoul calmed his soldiers down and explained that Luke's village probably lacked manpower and proper military training since it was mostly made up of refugees and civilians. Raoul then advised everyone to rest before they marched into the wasteland in the morning. While laying on his makeshift bed, Raoul could not sleep at all because his anger kept him awake like Brawl was rage buffering all night long. To Raoul's surprise, he suddenly saw Luke's face right in front of him, which scared the life out of him for a second. Raoul immediately asked Luke where he had come from. Luke told Raoul that he only wanted to talk and explained that he had no intention of bringing down House Albert. Luke expressed how much he loved his village and how he simply wanted to live peacefully without taking anything from Raoul or inheriting House Albert. Raoul was shocked at first and assumed Luke had come to surrender in order to protect the village. However, Luke immediately denied that and explained that he had no plans of surrendering. He only wanted to know more about Raoul himself. Raoul, however, did not believe a single word Luke said and became convinced that Luke was trying to force his ideals onto him. However, Raoul could land an attack. Luke quickly escaped back underground. Riding away inside his golem, Luke realized that trying to talk things out with Raoul had been an absolutely terrible idea. Raoul, however, really pulled up for therapy talk. No jutsu and almost got packed immediately. However, staring at the spot where he last saw Luke, Raoul pressed down and heard a rumble. Opening his tent, Raoul was able to pinpoint the location of Luke's village. When the soldiers saw Raoul still awake, they asked him if there was a problem. Raoul shared with his men that Luke had appeared inside his tent and immediately ordered them to dig. The soldiers dug through the area where Luke had been standing, but they never found a trace of him, making them believe Raoul had seen some kind of illusion magic or hallucination. However, Raoul was convinced that he had truly seen the real Luke as he remembered how Luke panicked the second he drew his sword. Raoul also heard movement underground heading back toward the wasteland after Luke disappeared. After listening to Luke's words earlier, Raoul began wondering just how overpowered Luke's gift had actually become. Raoul started realizing his older brother might secretly be running creative mode while everyone else is stuck on survival difficulty. Raoul thought that if he had fallen asleep, Luke could have ended his life instantly. With his paranoia increasing, Raoul informed his men that Luke might possess the ability to manipulate the environment with absurd precision, and that they could already be trapped within Luke's control without realizing it. Meanwhile, back at the village, Luke's heart was still pounding loudly from the encounter. To Luke's surprise, both Celia and Amila were already waiting for him, and radiating an absolutely terrifying aura. Glaring at Luke, Celia reminded him that they were literally in the middle of an emergency, and demanded to know where he had disappeared to. Luke awkwardly explained that he could not sleep and decided to go on a short walk, which was the weakest cover story of all time considering Bro casually tunneled into enemy territory. Reassuring the two that he was fine, Luke noticed Mila staring at him with concern after she had spent forever searching every corner of the village for him. Feeling pressured, Luke finally admitted that he had gone to meet Raoul directly, instantly shocking both women. Upon learning that Luke had infiltrated enemy territory alone using his gift, Celia immediately scolded him for being reckless and insisted he should have brought guards with him. Luke explained that he wanted the meeting with Raoul to stay private, which was why he visited him directly in his quarters. Mila then asked Luke how the meeting had gone. Luke admitted that he had only managed to make Raoul angrier and was now certain Raoul would be far more cautious moving forward. Even though the conversation completely failed, Luke still did not regret trying. Bro really attempted peace talks and accidentally unlocked Raoul's maximum paranoia stat instead. 4 days later, Luke and the others finally spotted Raoul and his army approaching. Both sides immediately ordered their troops to move. As Luke met Raoul on the battlefield, he initiated the fight by launching a cannonball, However, the attack failed to hit anyone since the enemy was still out of range. Even though Luke missed, he still ordered everyone to continue the assault. With Milla worried for Luke's safety, she immediately asked him to return inside the castle, which Luke agreed to do. Seeing Luke retreat back into the village enraged Raoul, who took it as a sign that Luke was underestimating him. Raoul and his soldiers then launched their own attack and charged directly toward the village walls like they were speedrunning bad decisions. When Raoul finally reached the door Luke had disappeared through earlier, he immediately started tearing it apart. To Raoul's surprise, all he found behind it was another gigantic wall that stretched almost all the way into the sky. As he looked around, Raoul suddenly noticed movement from above. He quickly realized the motion was coming from the ground itself, and finally understood that the path they had entered was a trap. Raoul immediately ordered his men to look upward, warning them that the ground beneath them was moving farther and farther away from the village. He then ordered everyone to destroy the walls as quickly as possible. Soon after, Raoul's soldiers reported that they had discovered multiple doors hidden throughout the structure, but every single one only led to another dead end. Then Lawton says, unbeknownst to Raoul, he and his entire army had already been trapped inside a giant maze created by Luke. A few minutes before Raoul noticed what was happening, Seelan informed Luke that the village was now completely surrounded. Though the village itself was protected by multiple layers of walls, Seelan doubted Raoul and his men would ever actually reach them, which Luke also agreed with. Raoul thought he was pulling up to a normal siege, while Luke had already turned the whole battlefield into a modded puzzle map. Luke believed that if Raoul's 5,000 troops were allowed to move freely, they would become a serious problem. However, since they were all following Raoul's orders and advancing in one direction, Luke found them much easier to control now. Seelan pointed out the soldiers in the rear, which Luke guessed were already struggling to advance and could no longer communicate properly with the rest of the army. Although some of the others thought Luke's strategy was a bit cruel, Milla completely disagreed and even praised Luke for the plan. Firing the cannon earlier and intentionally missing had all been part of Luke's setup to lure Raoul and his soldiers closer before trapping them inside the maze. Luke reminded everyone that they still needed to stay alert because he was certain Raoul would never give up that easily. Feeling overwhelmed, Raoul could not shake the growing discomfort inside him. While watching his soldiers slowly start losing hope, Raoul received a report confirming that the walls surrounding them were not illusions but actual physical structures. The soldiers admitted they had no idea how many people Luke needed to build all this, but they were convinced Luke's side must have burned through ridiculous amounts of magic power to pull it off. Agreeing with the report, Raoul then noticed the walls had stopped moving, which made him believe they finally had a chance to retaliate. Raoul ordered each unit to split up, explore the surroundings, and destroy the walls as they advanced. As the soldiers continued tearing down walls, some slowly realized the entire structure was laid out exactly like a maze. Upon moving forward again, they ran into another dead end. What shocked them even more was discovering that the path they had used earlier was now blocked off by yet another wall. With Luke making his final move and sealing the ceiling shut, he was very pleased seeing his plan work perfectly. Even though Seelan was not the biggest fan of Luke's strategy, she could not deny how effective it was. Luke only hoped they could exhaust the enemy soldiers and lower their morale before they ever reached the village. Bro basically hit the entire army with infinite loading screen tactics. Even though trapping the soldiers in a loop was effective, Luke knew they could not continue the strategy forever. Since their ultimate goal was still a peaceful solution without excessive fighting, Seelan stated that they needed to hammer that reality directly into the enemy's heads. As the day slowly faded away, Raoul completely lost track of time wandering through the maze alone. When Luke suddenly appeared in front of him, Raoul immediately smiled and charged straight at him. Believing he could finally reach Luke, Raoul instead triggered another trap and quickly warned his men to retreat. However, when Raoul turned around, he realized the paths had shifted once again, separating him even farther from his soldiers. Now defenseless and surrounded by elves aiming arrows at them, Raoul's soldiers began panicking and scattered away from him. Raoul became furious and ordered everyone to hold formation, but fear had already taken over and nobody listened anymore. At this point, the entire Albert army was getting mentally diffed by walls and hallways. Luke then approached Raoul and calmly explained that neither Raoul nor his men could kill him. Luke once again tried to convince Raoul that he had no intention of bringing down House Albert and only wanted to live peacefully with his village. Even though Luke spoke with complete sincerity, Raoul only stared back at him with pure anger written all over his face. Luke and his citizens were shocked when they saw Raoul literally running across the water and charging straight toward them. When Raoul was about to land an attack on Luke, Noel arrived just in time and used his shield to shove Raoul away. Seeing his own men hesitate, Raoul angrily asked them if they were seriously trying to embarrass him in front of the enemy. Raoul was crashing out in real time because his army was getting folded by villagers in geometry. Unable to disobey Raoul directly, the soldiers turned around and charged toward Luke and the others. Seeing the soldiers rushing at them, Luke reminded everyone to follow exactly how they had practiced. As the soldiers began attacking the villagers, they were shocked by how ridiculously strong the villagers had become and realized they could not even push them back properly. No matter how elite Raoul's soldiers were, Luke knew they were already getting exhausted from constantly using their skills. Another huge advantage Luke possessed was the ability he unlocked after surpassing 10,000 villagers called Village Enhancement. The skill temporarily boosted the stats of all villagers under his control. The stronger the enhancement, the longer the cooldown afterward. But as long as someone was counted as one of Luke's villagers, he could buff them freely. Basically, bro turned the entire village into a raid party with stat boosts active. Once else, after showing off their enhanced strength, the villagers started mocking and teasing the enemy soldiers. When Kellen noticed how cocky everyone was becoming, she immediately warned them that acting careless in battle could still get them killed. Raul was shocked when he spotted Kellen fighting alongside Luke, clearly not expecting her to fully side against him. Seelan immediately retaliated by launching ice magic directly at Raul and his men. Raul's forces were steadily getting pushed back and were also struggling to keep their footing because of the unstable terrain Luke kept manipulating. As if things were not already bad enough, a dragon suddenly appeared behind Raul's forces, instantly causing mass panic among the soldiers. When the soldiers realized the dragon was only targeting them, they assumed Luke must have some kind of monster tamer on his side. Even while facing overwhelming disadvantages, Raul still stubbornly tried to fight his way through the battlefield. Seelan was honestly confused how Raul was still going after his army of 5,000 had basically shrunk down to almost nothing. Raul refused to uninstall Pride even after the entire battle became a disaster movie. Before Raul could get close enough to attack Seelan again, Luke stopped him by manipulating the earth beneath him. After taking a heavy hit to the head, Raul slowly started losing consciousness as the battlefield around him completely fell apart. When Raul was still a young boy, he always felt like he had been trapped inside a fog. Raul constantly faced mockery and insults, even from the housemaids who called him a peasant because he could not even eat properly. The only person who comforted Raul and believed he deserved to become the next head of the family was his mother. No matter what Raul tried to do, everything somehow went wrong and only created more problems for his mother and the adults around him. Raul's mother originally served as a maid for House Albert, but she was later chosen as a concubine after the Lord's legal wife struggled to bear a child. However, shortly after Raul's mother became pregnant, news spread that the legal wife was also expecting. Raul got dragged into noble family politics before he could even walk properly. As the concubine's son, Raul was labeled the second son, despite Luke being born only a few days after him. From Raul's perspective, Luke was perfect at everything. Unlike Raul, who constantly caused trouble, Luke received non-stop praise from everyone around him. Wanting to become more like Luke, Raul started copying everything his older brother did. Unfortunately, nothing changed. The staff simply assumed Raul was copying Luke out of jealousy. Raul then tried a different approach and started getting closer to Luke himself. Seeing Raul practicing swordsmanship, the soldiers commented that if Raul failed to excel with the sword, there would be no place left for him in House Albert. Imagine being a kid and hearing your entire future depends on whether you lock in with a sword or not. Absolute nightmare tutorial level. Since imitating Luke was not enough, Raul eventually convinced himself that defeating Luke would finally earn him praise. However, instead of being praised, Raul received a harsh scolding. Young Raul had no idea what was even happening anymore, and out of frustration, shoved the instructor away before continuing to beat him with the sword. Seeing the instructor bloodied and beaten, Raul strangely felt the fog clouding his vision begin to clear. For the first time, he felt like he had found a purpose. From that point onward, Raul started acting like a delinquent and constantly caused trouble throughout House Albert. While everyone around him saw a violent child spiraling out of control, Raul himself genuinely believed he was simply surviving in the easiest way possible. While bullying another child one day, Raul suddenly froze after accidentally striking Luke. After the incident in the inner garden, Luke started quietly keeping an eye on Raul from time to time. Just when life had finally started becoming easier for Raul, Luke's involvement made him feel like everything was collapsing again. Damn. To Raul, Luke's existence itself became a source of misery. After Luke told him that he should stop doing terrible things, Raul expected him to continue talking or maybe even understand him better. Instead, Luke simply walked away afterward. That moment honestly tilted Raul harder than anything else, because in his mind, Luke acted like he understood him while never actually staying long enough to reach him. And afterward, despite being so beloved, not a single person stepped forward to defend Luke. A man told Raul how Luke was always portrayed as some incredibly kind and noble person. However, the man admitted that all he ever saw in Luke was someone weak-minded, which was exactly why he wanted to use Luke's strength for himself. The man expressed how relieved he was that he could finally speak honestly now. When Raul casually told the man that he was right, the man lit up with happiness like Brode had just received validation from his favorite celebrity. The man then started ranting about how unfair it was that Luke kept getting spoiled simply because he was the firstborn son. Even after years of education, Luke's swordsmanship was supposedly terrible. According to the man, Luke was never some genius who deeply understood others or always made the correct decisions. The day after listening quietly, Raul suddenly smirked and threw his glass directly at the man's head. Completely confused, the man asked Raul why he had done that. Instead of explaining himself, Raul simply laughed. Seeing everyone around him frozen in confusion, Raul asked what the problem was and told them they should all laugh with him. Terrified of the consequences, The maids and the man awkwardly forced themselves to laugh along too. That entire mansion was basically surviving on fear and fake smiles at that point. The only person who stayed loyal to Luke after his exile was a single maid. Slowly, Luke's name disappeared from conversations around the mansion. As time passed, Raul began hearing his own name more and more instead, even from his father. Looking back on it, Raul realized he never actually cared about praise or approval, as long as Luke was gone. Then one day, Raul suddenly heard rumors that Luke had built a utopia in the wasteland. People everywhere started talking about how Luke's village had endless food and accepted anyone who came seeking refuge. The rumors spread rapidly among the commoners. Raul immediately broke into a cold sweat because to him it felt like everything was starting all over again. Raul really thought he escaped the Luke comparison arc only for the sequel season to drop harder than ever. At first, many people dismissed the rumors as some scam using the Albert family name to lure people in. Others mocked the commoners for believing such ridiculous stories. However, because Luke's name was attached to the rumors, people slowly started wondering if the stories might actually be true, wanting answers. Everyone began hoping Luke himself would appear and confirm it. Raul started panicking internally and desperately wished Luke and all the people talking about him would just disappear again. Eventually, the doubts vanished entirely as more people began wishing the rumors were true and even hoped they could one day join Luke in the paradise he had created. Knowing Luke's personality, many people believed he would gladly welcome anyone. When Luke later told Raul that he only wanted to talk, it completely reignited Raul's rage and made him feel like Luke was once again standing in his way. Seelan suddenly sensed something dangerous and immediately turned toward Raul. A massive explosion erupted nearby, forcing Seelan to shield Luke. Confused, Luke wondered what had happened since the wall he created had suddenly been destroyed. Raul had finally snapped completely and lost control of his anger. Seelan Philia sensed an overwhelming killing intent coming from Raul and instantly drew her bow while warning everyone to stay back. As Raul charged toward them, everyone was ordered to shoot him down. However, every arrow crumbled apart with a single swing of Raul's sword. Philia immediately told Luke to retreat while they protected him. Raul No jumped in front of Raul and used a shield bash to stop his attack. Fueled entirely by rage, Raul swore he would never lose again. Raul's strike was so powerful that it blasted Noel away instantly. After launching another devastating attack, Raul sensed danger approaching from his right and immediately blocked Seelan's sneak attack without even looking. While observing him, Seelan realized Raul had completely stopped caring about defending himself. She was shocked when Raul suddenly ignored her entirely and dashed away instead. Seelan immediately chased after him and used her ice magic to try restraining him. To her surprise, Raul did not even bother dodging anymore and fought as if he genuinely no longer cared whether he lived or died. Raul had officially entered full crash-out berserker mode. Seeing Raul charging directly toward him, Luke quickly generated another wall to stop him. However, Raul smashed through it effortlessly like the wall was made of cardboard. Acting like a complete madman, Raul shouted that he already understood what Luke was thinking. Raul accused Luke of still refusing to kill him because he did not want blood on his hands. Raul believed Luke had never truly taken him seriously his entire life. Swinging his sword wildly, Raul screamed at Luke to kill him and stain his hands for once. Raul warned Luke that if he refused to act first, then Luke would absolutely die instead. Swinging his sword wildly, Raul ordered Luke to kill him and finally dirty his hands. Raul warned Luke that if he refused to strike first, then he himself would absolutely be killed instead. Screaming at Luke in pure rage, Raul demanded that Luke take his life already. Raul swore that he would force Luke to stain his hands one way or another, because bro was genuinely tweaking at this point and fully committed to the crash-out. Suddenly, Raul stopped after sensing something nearby. Turning around, he saw a golem standing behind him and immediately realized he had been captured. Luke tried to explain that he did not want to kill Raul and did not want to die either. Raul dismissed the golem as just another weird trick from Luke's gift and managed to free himself through brute force and swordsmanship alone. However, when Raul looked upward, he was shocked to see the golem immediately charging after him again. Raul quickly dodged and tried creating distance, but Luke kept controlling the golem and repeatedly used it to restrain him. Frustrated beyond belief, Raul ordered Luke to release him. Luke refused because he knew that if he let Raul go now, he would absolutely regret it later. Confused, Raul pointed out that Luke should already regret it because they were literally fighting to the death. However, Luke clarified that it was not about the battle itself. Up until then, Luke had always believed Raul simply hated him. But after seeing Raul that desperate and emotional, Luke realized there were far more complicated feelings buried underneath all that hatred. If that was truly the case, Luke decided to confirm his suspicions directly. While Raul was still restrained, Luke suddenly confessed that he had tried incredibly hard to behave properly back in House Albert, but many of the things he did only ended up making situations worse. Raul was left completely stunned and confused by what Luke was suddenly saying. Luke continued and admitted that he became afraid of making things even worse, so he convinced himself that staying distant was the better option. Luke admitted he never truly tried getting closer to Raul or understanding him the way he should have. As Luke started apologizing sincerely, Raul immediately snapped and screamed at him to stop talking. Now pulling out his sword again, Raul tore himself free and began stabbing the golem repeatedly while yelling at Luke to shut up over and over. Raul finally realized why Luke's words angered him so much and accused Luke of being a hypocrite who only talked without truly understanding anything. Despite Luke trying to solve everything peacefully, Raul told him it was already way too late for that now. Raul screamed that he wished Luke had never been born because then his own life would have been perfect. Luke remained completely silent and only stared sadly at Raul. Using every ounce of strength he still had left, Raul managed to stagger directly in front of the kneeling Luke. Luke finally told Raul that he never truly cared about winning or losing back at House Albert. People constantly expected him to become the next head of the household, so he simply followed the path others laid out for him. However, Luke now accepted that things were different. This time he would fight using his own will in order to protect the village and everyone living inside it. After all, Luke himself created that place. Luke explained that the village represented a peaceful home where everyone could live happily together, the hope he placed his entire heart into. Grabbing Raul's hand, Luke pleaded with him to just talk honestly, and asked Raul to finally share something about himself for once. As Raul let go of his broken sword, he suddenly remembered a dream he once had as a child. In that dream, Luke stood far away in the distance and turned back to look at him for the very first time. Remembering that moment caused Raul to smile faintly. No longer feeling pain anymore, Raul assumed that he was finally dying. However, he comforted himself by believing that at least he managed to destroy the person he hated most. When Raul finally woke up again, he was shocked to see several people staring at him while scribbling furiously onto papers at maximum speed like he was some rare museum exhibit. Completely confused, Raul immediately jumped off the bed and demanded to know who they were. Panicking, everyone ran away screaming that their model had noticed them. Raul woke up and instantly got treated like a celebrity caught lacking by fangirls. Luke then entered the room and called Raul's name while asking how he felt. Luke explained that they healed his injuries using potions, although he still wanted Raul to avoid moving around too much for now. Completely stunned, Raul muttered in confusion and asked himself where he even was, and what Luke meant by potions. Looking at his hands, Raul noticed there were no wounds left anywhere on his body. Raul could not understand why Luke would waste such valuable medicine saving someone like him after everything that happened. Glaring at Luke suspiciously, Raul asked what exactly Luke thought he was doing, and pointed out that he was not even chained up despite being an enemy invader. Raul called Luke unbelievably naive for acting that way. Luke was caught off guard by Raul's reaction while Nima, standing beside him, calmly asked Raul to relax before he popped another blood vessel. Luke finally confronted Raul after the battle ended. While looking at Raul resting in bed, Luke remembered how Philia strongly opposed using the potion on him in the first place. After witnessing Raul rampaging across the battlefield like a final boss with anger issues, Philia believed reconciliation would not come easily at all. Even after healing him, Philia admitted that a part of her thought it would have been easier to simply let fate handle Raul instead. Selena agreed and reminded everyone about all the destruction Raul caused. She believed that even if Raul woke up peacefully now, the hatred inside him could still push him to attack them again later. If that eventually happened, Celine honestly thought it would have been better if Raul had simply faded away quietly instead of surviving. Luke, however, told everyone there was still something important they needed to see first. Luke then revealed a massive great boar tooth in front of Raul. Holding it up proudly, Luke explained that if Raul visited the town square later, he would see the rest of the giant beast displayed there too. Luke casually claimed that the village only managed to defeat the monster thanks to Raul himself. Apparently, after Raul crashed through the battlefield and lost consciousness, a great boar from the dangerous forest appeared and attacked, so Luke spun the entire incident into a heroic monster subjugation story. Raul immediately realized what Luke was trying to do and stared at him in disbelief. Raul asked if Luke seriously planned to bury the entire war under the excuse of a monster attack. However, before the conversation could get even heavier, Luke suddenly pulled out a giant steak from a minotaur and started cooking it right in front of Raul. Raul switched from peace negotiations to mukbang warfare in under 10 seconds. Luke struggled to hide his drool while slicing the meat into perfect bite-sized pieces, then told Raul he could not eat any of it yet. Unfortunately for Raul, his stomach immediately betrayed him and started growling loudly while Luke happily devoured the steak in front of him. While Luke enjoyed the food, Nema casually commented that the savory flavor and saltiness were perfect for exhausted bodies. Furious and confused, Raul finally demanded to know what Luke was actually trying to accomplish. Between bites, Luke calmly explained that he came to negotiate peacefully. Nema chuckled beside him and informed Raul that the steak became available only after the discussion was finished. Luke reminded Raul about his original wish to simply live peacefully in the village. To avoid shaking up the political balance too much, Luke wanted everyone to accept the monster attack explanation and quietly move on from the incident. Raul was left speechless after hearing the proposal. Luke clarified that he was not being naive and explained that the village was already compromising enough by providing proof like the great boar remains, while asking for nothing else in return. Luke pointed out that too many people and hidden agendas were involved now, so dragging the conflict further would only create more chaos. More than anything, Luke wanted everyone to go back to their ordinary daily lives without further bloodshed. However, Luke also reminded Raoul that the healing potion used on him was incredibly valuable, and that Raoul now owed him heavily for it. Nema backed him up immediately and explained just how rare the potion actually was. After laying everything out clearly, Luke and Nema suggested finally eating together. Smiling warmly, Luke raised a toast and asked Raoul to seal the agreement peacefully. Raoul initially rejected the idea and insisted that he did not need anyone's pity. He swore that he would repay Luke tenfold someday. Hearing that response actually made Luke happy, so he immediately shoved the steak directly into Raoul's mouth, before the man could keep talking. Honestly, food diplomacy ended up becoming Luke's strongest skill at this point. Soon afterward, Raoul and the remaining soldiers left the village peacefully. Everyone celebrated the successful agreement except Celentiro, who jokingly complained that they should have simply thrown Raoul into the rehabilitation center to fix his personality permanently. Nema sighed and said that idea already fell apart during discussions. Still, she warned Luke that nobody truly knew what Raoul would do in the future after returning home. Their agreement was nothing more than a verbal promise, and Raoul was under no obligation to honor it forever. Even if Raoul personally kept his word, Nema pointed out that many other people were involved behind the scenes, meaning the conflict sparks could still grow larger later. Luke agreed with her concerns completely. However, no matter what happened moving forward, Luke promised that he would protect the village's peace and never allow anyone to destroy the home everyone built together. Not long afterward, reinforcements finally arrived and rushed into the village expecting total disaster. Phileas and Selen's father panicked at first because he feared supporting Luke might destroy House Bejrata politically if the truth spread. Still, despite the danger, he chose to back Raoul and protect his territory anyway. Thankfully, Silius happily informed him that Luke already won the battle and that Silius was perfectly safe. Realizing his children willingly chose that place themselves, the father awkwardly forced a smile while trying to act calm about the whole situation. Back in the village, Milla announced that the celebration feast was finally ready. Luke thanked everyone sincerely for surviving the crisis together before raising a toast for the entire village. As the celebration began, Silius spent time showing his father around proudly and explained that the village now had elves, dwarves, and even fairies living together peacefully. Hearing that, Silius's father could only stare around in amazement and call the village absolutely delightful. In the city of Manhwa, absolute chaos was unfolding as buildings everywhere got completely wiped out, like somebody rage quit the entire kingdom. Inside the ruined city, one man quietly admitted that everything was over now that the rebel army had been annihilated. While staring at his family portrait one last time, the man apologized softly before ending his own life. Yeah, House Albert was not playing around anymore. Even after House Albert secured victory over House Schneiger, they kept steamrolling through the remaining loyalist forces like they were trying to finish every side quest before logging off. However, once Lionel Schneiger took himself out, the resistance completely collapsed. At that point, there was basically nobody left capable of opposing House Albert anymore. Originally, the kingdom had 5 major factions fighting for power, known as the 5 Great Powers. House Albert and House Schneiger controlled the north and southeast, while the duchies of Kian and Talister ruled the southwest and northwest. The royal family sat in the center acting important, but now that House Albert absorbed Schneiger, they basically became the kingdom's final boss faction overnight. Even the royal family started looking nervous. A messenger from the royal court soon arrived and informed Lord Edel that the king wished to reward him with the title of Duke for his recent victories. The messenger also requested Lord Edel's presence at the royal palace. Unfortunately for him, Lord Edel immediately responded with the energy of a guy declining a spam email and flat out said he had no interest in such nonsense. The messenger was completely stunned and started ranting about how becoming a duke was one of the kingdom's greatest honors. Bra really thought he was delivering the acceptance letter to Hogwarts. However, Lord Edel shut him down instantly and said the royal family already lost control to corrupt nobles long ago. The messenger started panicking and accused him of treason, but Lord Edel simply stood up and walked toward him, radiating enough aura to make the poor guy fold emotionally in real time. With every step Lord Edel took, the messenger got more terrified. Lord Edel asked how long the royal family planned to keep pretending they still ruled the kingdom. The pressure alone forced the messenger to kneel. Touching the man's head, Lord Edel told him to return to the king and deliver a very simple message. Either hand over the throne peacefully, or House Albert would storm the capital and send everybody to the afterlife. Bro skipped diplomacy and went straight to villain arc patch notes. Meanwhile, back at the village, Kellen and Silius were informed by their father that he planned to return home soon. He asked if they truly intended to stay behind instead of returning with him. Phileas immediately got annoyed and told him to stop talking and just leave already. Phileas tried defending their father, but Phileas reminded him that he was literally sent there to drag her home in the first place. Phileas awkward, Siliab and Julie admitted the real reason he wanted to stay in the village. Apparently our boy caught feelings. When their father asked about the woman's background, Silius nervously explained that she was extremely noble and also led her own people. Hearing that instantly activated proud dad mode and the count became ridiculously excited. While after thinking it through, their father surprisingly agreed to let both of them remain in the village. Selim reminded him that she also came to the village chasing after Luke, but their father immediately called her out and said she mainly ran away to dodge an arranged marriage. Honestly, bro was cooking her a little there. Count Basrata eventually realized that supporting Luke might actually be the smartest political move after Raoul's defeat. He proudly announced that as their father, he fully supported both of their romances and would even leave the lands in their care. Both siblings were shocked because they expected at least 3 more episodes of family drama before getting approval. Luke then noticed Count Basrata sprinting toward him like a man who just discovered free tax exemption. After checking his village system and confirming that Count wasn't hostile, Luke relaxed a little. Count Basrata immediately grabbed Luke's hand and started praising him for creating such an incredible village so quickly. He also admitted he was genuinely worried when Luke first got sent to the wastelands. The Count then casually dropped the line that Keelan was a lovely fiancé, basically speedrunning relationship confirmations before Luke could even process what was happening. He told Luke he looked forward to future dealings with him, while Luke just stood there trying to survive the social damage. The full month passed after Raoul's army retreated. Since the dangerous rumors stopped spreading, immigration to the village increased rapidly again. Before long, the population exploded to 15,000 villagers. At that point, Luke's small settlement had basically become a fantasy civilization simulator, with DLC unlocked. Luke realized that they had already outgrown the label of village, especially since they were not paying taxes to House Albert anymore. Dantho then appeared and reminded Luke that after defeating Raoul, they had every right to be more assertive now. Dantho also explained that a new governor would soon take over the Northern Territory, meaning future negotiations could become messy depending on who got appointed. Dantho offered to personally handle any future negotiations for Luke, which immediately reassured him. Honestly, Dantho out here acting like the village's exhausted HR manager trying to prevent another political disaster every week. Meanwhile, Dantho admitted that his own life was still hanging by a thread, especially with his wife now refusing to move again after realizing how comfortable the village was. At the northern district of Ritson, the office workers were drowning in paperwork and stress after the former governor got replaced. Honestly, the whole place sounded like a fantasy DMV running on zero sleep and bad vibes. Right in the middle of the chaos, a man walked in, greeted the staff politely, and introduced himself as Michel, the newly dispatched governor. The staff immediately welcomed Michel and explained that the district was severely understaffed, so they were relieved he finally arrived. Michel then asked about the rumors involving a mysterious village in the wastelands where people kept disappearing to. After receiving a report about the place, Michel read through it and realized the deal sounded way too good to be real. Bro basically found the fantasy version of those escape the 9-to-5 and move to Bali TikToks. Michel asked if he could interview anyone who had actually visited the village, but the staff revealed that every investigator who went there ended up quitting their jobs and moving permanently. Hearing that, Michel burst out laughing because the rumors were obviously true now. However, his mood suddenly changed as he pointed out that they could not simply allow some random wasteland village to steal all their citizens. Meanwhile, Luke was talking with Dantho when Satan suddenly relayed a telepathic message that a messenger from Reason had arrived. Apparently, the new governor wanted to personally greet Luke after hearing all the reports. Dantho immediately warned Luke that Michel was not some ordinary noble or warrior. Instead, he climbed the ranks entirely through skill and political ability, meaning the guy was probably dangerous in a smiles while plotting your taxes kind of way. Dantho explained that Michel previously governed the Western District before being transferred north after recent incidents. Since he was trusted with the Northern District during such unstable times, Dantho suspected Michel was extremely cunning. Luke agreed to stay cautious. A few days later, Michel finally arrived and introduced himself to Luke personally. Dantho was immediately caught off guard because Michel acted incredibly casual despite his position. Luke politely introduced himself as the village chief and thanked Michel for traveling all the way to the wastelands. Michel brushed it off and clarified that he was merely a second of House Albert. But after looking around the village, he could not stop praising it. Michel commented on how beautiful and lively the village felt, especially since there were no beggars or miserable people anywhere. He also noticed how delicious the food was, and how comfortably the villagers lived. After seeing everything firsthand, Michel completely understood why immigration to the village kept exploding. Bro basically walked into fantasy Costco mixed with a utopia simulator. Then out of absolutely nowhere, Michel bowed directly in front of Luke and begged him to absorb the entire northern district into the village. Everybody immediately got hit with emotional whiplash. Michel pointed out that Luke's village already surpassed reason in industry and military strength, and he feared the northern district would lose all its people unless they joined Luke now. Luke nervously asked whether doing something like that was even allowed. Michel casually responded that it absolutely was not allowed and even admitted his superiors specifically warned him to avoid involvement with the village. Dantho nearly short-circuited after hearing this because Michel basically admitted he wanted to make illegal political deals quietly behind everyone's backs. Dantho immediately warned Luke not to agree because secret agreements could easily be betrayed later. Michel, however, insisted he was not trying to dodge responsibility and instead saw this as a long-term security strategy. He explained that the village would gain the northern district while he personally benefited from stability and development. McMusso then revealed his real goal. He wanted Luke to use his powers to rapidly develop the Northern District too. Specifically, he asked for giant crops, fertile land, bathhouses, and all the overpowered village upgrades. Luke casually handed out like DLC content. Dantho got furious and basically screamed, "Are you even a governor, bro?" To everyone's shock, Luke calmly admitted he actually could do everything Michelle requested. By now, Luke's village territory had expanded so much that it already covered the entire Northern District. Technically, Luke could convert every resident there into villagers whenever he wanted. Yeah, our boy accidentally unlocked civilization admin privileges. Even so, Luke hesitated because he was unsure whether he should really go that far. Eventually, he decided he wanted to build a good relationship with the Northern District anyway. Michelle immediately got hyped and started requesting even more upgrades like giant crop seeds, fertile soil, and public bathhouses. Brow wasted zero time stacking expansion packs onto the agreement. When Luke finally accepted the Northern District residents as villagers, he gained an absolutely ridiculous 9,351 new villagers instantly. Dantho quietly whispered to Luke that Michelle looked exactly like the type of guy who would betray them later if necessary. Luke awkwardly admitted that the current migration crisis was kind of his fault to begin with. Now that the Northern District belonged to the village network, Luke decided to upgrade the roads first. Using facility upgrades, he transformed the roads with cobblestones that dramatically increased movement speed. Michelle was stunned when he suddenly started moving faster without even realizing it. Once Michelle stepped onto the upgraded road himself, he freaked out after realizing how insanely fast he could travel now. Dantho tried catching up but accidentally zoomed past Luke entirely. Everybody became confused because walking still felt perfectly normal, yet the scenery flew by around them like they unlocked fast travel cheats. Luke casually mentioned that he planned to extend the enhanced roads all the way to Rit. Dantho nearly collapsed after hearing how far the roads would stretch. Michelle once again praised Luke's abilities, but then suddenly grew serious, realizing something terrifying. Luke could have conquered reason whenever he wanted and nobody would have been able to stop him. Michelle admitted that the idea was honestly horrifying, but also said it was an honor to speak with someone as powerful as Luke. After finishing the road work, everyone realized they already traveled all the way to Reason with barely any fatigue at all. Dantho immediately pointed out that immigration rates were going to explode now. Michelle disagreed though and explained that easier travel might actually reduce immigration because many people still love their hometowns and simply wanted convenient access to the village instead of permanently leaving. Honestly, Michelle might secretly have been the only politician in this kingdom using more than 2 brain cells. Hearing Michelle's request to make similar facilities like the ones in the village, Luke thought that he might be able to make a few of them. But before granting Michelle's request, Luke asked Michelle if he had any specific requests for ones he really needed or places to put them. After visiting Luke's village, Michelle was most surprised by the high level of cleanliness. To prevent the spread of disease, Michelle wanted public toilets and bathhouses. Michelle preferred more inconvenient locations to avoid conflict. As Michelle guided Luke to the location, Dantho suddenly brought up the fields, instantly hijacking the conversation like Broward had farming DLC on his mind 24/7. Dantho added that crops did not grow so well in Reason. Hearing such news, Dantho mentioned how he would feel glad to see some fields similar to those in Luke's village in Reason. Michelle's grin grew wider as he pestered Dantho and asked if the crops were the result of Luke's gift. Michelle thought there was something special about them. He was also thankful that his predecessor Dantho was a nice fellow to tell him about it. Dantho became annoyed with Michelle and clarified that he wasn't telling him, but rather consulting with Luke for the sake of the people. Luke asked the two to settle down and suggested that they take a walk around Reason and build some facilities to make life easier for everyone. After Michelle pointed to a spot, Luke immediately went to work and added a facility in the exact location. Checking the inside, the folks from Reason were quite puzzled after seeing a toilet for the first time. Luke continued adding more structures as well as fields for Reason. Finally seeing the power of Luke's gift, Michelle understood how Luke managed to build a village in the wasteland in just a year's time. With such amazing power, all Michelle could do was laugh. When Luke mentioned that he would be adding more, Dantho was shocked as he could not believe there was still more. Curious, Luke asked Dantho why the houses had cracks in their walls. Dantho explained to Luke that Reason was a city with a long history, so there were many old buildings around. Luke couldn't believe people would still dare live in buildings looking one sneeze away from collapsing. Though Luke wanted to help out, it didn't feel right to him to swap the buildings for impersonal apartment complexes. Luke wondered if there was something he could do about it. While checking through his abilities, Luke found the facility customize feature. Luke thought he could only use it on facilities that he made with his gift, but he guessed that he could apply it to any facility standing in his village. Luke tried taking an undamaged portion of a wall and placing it into a new one. Michelle was very impressed with how Luke fixed their walls. Looking through his abilities, Luke also learned that he could use the facility upgrade and increase not just the comfort, but also the security, air freshness, and sturdiness. After finishing the repairs, Luke then stated that the house was now much easier to live in. Michelle never expected that Luke would do so much for them. The rumors of Luke rebelling against House Albert that spread unnaturally the other day sputtered out just as abruptly. Michelle doubted that Luke was really planning an all-out offense. However, Michelle also now understood and guessed that it wouldn't be strange for someone to see something like that as a threat and take action against him. If Marquis Albert had known of Luke's gift from the start, Michelle was certain the Marquis would have never let Luke go. Michelle was just beyond grateful after receiving Luke's help. Luke responded that helping them out wasn't that big and mentioned that all he did was just the beginning. Michelle was confused by what Luke said. Seeing Michelle's reaction, Luke also became confused and asked Michelle again if they were talking about the entire Northern District. Though Michelle was shocked by what Luke said, he remained composed and confirmed that it was the case, and remembered that he had indeed asked Luke to make the Northern District a part of his village. However, Michelle had completely assumed that Luke would only be helping out with Ritson, their largest city. Luke smiled as the only thought he had was that he could increase his level once he added the Northern District. Raoul heard entire district and immediately started min-maxing XP gains like a city-building sweatlord. Michelle really thought all he requested would be a burden for Luke, but yet Luke proved him wrong with his persistence. Michelle laughed as he told Luke that he would take up his kind offer. Since there were too many unknown variables for Michelle to move forward with, he decided to play along as the last thing he wanted was to have Luke as his enemy. Since it had gotten late already, Michelle suggested that Luke take a rest. Though the City of Reason was not quite at the level of Luke's village, Michelle promised they would do their best to accommodate him. The next day, Luke immediately went to work and impressed the townsfolk by fixing the broken roof in the blink of an eye. Just like in Reason, Luke laid down roads and remodeled facilities in other lands of the Northern District, and received praise and gratitude for it. Each time Luke added the residents to his village, he also gained points, which eventually let him reach level 9, exceeding 30,000 villagers. For achieving a new level, Luke received 300,000 village points, additional facility options, and the village area increased. Luke also acquired a new skill called 3D Move. Confused as to what the new ability did, Luke dove in further and learned that he could now move the facilities up and down. Until now, Luke's Move facility ability only allowed movement on a flat plane. If there was another facility in the way of where he wanted to move it, that one would have to be moved out of the way first. But if Luke were to use 3D Move facility, it was now possible to move it above a facility that he had already built. Though Luke found the skill a boring improvement, it might still be a real spectacle to do it in reality. Luke thought of an idea and wondered if he could get the golem to fly as well. Luke became excited and planned to try it out later. Receiving more perks for his new level, Luke got a cold storehouse, art museum, and theater. Seeing lots of large facilities, Luke also noticed dams. Thinking of dams, Luke asked Michelle if there were any lands in the Northern District that suffered from floods. Not expecting such a question from Luke, Michelle responded that the rundown village they had passed by earlier was one. Michelle further explained that once every decade or so, torrential rains submerged the entire area, and the village they passed by and their fields were especially affected by catastrophe each time. After hearing that, Luke suggested that they head back there immediately. Luke shared that he had a facility they could probably use to avert any water damage. Both Dantho and Michelle were shocked to hear such information. In no time, Luke created a huge dam. People then gathered, curious as to what kind of facility Luke had used. Luke explained to everyone that the facility he used was called a dam, a facility that creates a giant reservoir upstream, and they could adjust the flow of water downstream. Dams did not just prevent floods, they could also use the water stored up in times of drought as well. "That's incredible," said the people of the Northern District, and honestly they looked ready to start a Luke fan club at this point. But Michelle approached Luke and told him that it might be a little too late for him to ask if it was alright for Luke to be using his gifts so casually like that. Michelle pointed out that Luke had incredible power and that it must be exhausting for him, as Michelle assumed there was a limit to it. Luke immediately responded and told Michelle that his ability was not limitless. However, as for the facilities, he could keep going for a long time, which was perfectly fine for Luke. A long time, said Michelle. It did not matter much to Luke since he had just leveled up and received 300,000 bonus village points. Adding to that were his villagers, which now exceeded 30,000. Every day, Luke would get more than 30,000 points. After solving the flood problem, Luke asked if they should head back to Reason for a bit. On the way, Luke told Michelle that if he needed something, he should not hesitate to ask. Their conversation was abruptly stopped when they heard a rustling sound from the bushes. From the bushes, a beast appeared. It caused panic among the people, warning those who were not informed that a blood grizzly had appeared. The others realized that they might have strayed too far into the forest. Dantho called upon Luke, warning him that the monster was dangerous and suggesting that he leave the problem to them. "Run away while you still can," said Dantho. Luke screamed, "Wait," and reassured everyone that it would be all right, as he too would fight. In Luke's mind, it was his chance to try out the 3D facility move skill. Bro saw a deadly monster and immediately thought, perfect test run. Beaming with confidence, Luke asked for everyone to stand back. Meanwhile, Dantho was too shocked, wondering why such a thing was happening. Michelle thought the same and wondered if Luke had completely lost the plot. Facing a new threat, Luke was now up against a blood grizzly. Thinking on his feet, Luke first customized a stone wall for defense and summoned a golem afterward. The townsfolk were shocked and impressed after seeing a clump of stones turned into a golem. Michelle too was surprised as he never expected that Luke would also be capable of making monsters. Moving on with his tactics, Luke used his new skill, 3D Move Facility. The skill then allowed Luke's golem to raise its body up in the sky. Both the Blood Grizzly and the people around were shocked, not expecting such a move from a golem. But as Luke ordered the golem to let the Blood Grizzly taste a beatdown, the golem flew straight at the Blood Grizzly. However, the Blood Grizzly managed to dodge the golem at the right time. Seeing the golem landing in the bushes, Luke looked very confused and tried doing his tactic again. Unfortunately for Luke, every time he used the golem for an aerial attack, it either got swatted away or dodged by the Blood Grizzly. The townsfolk who were witnessing the fight thought the movements looked goofy as hell, like bro was beta testing physics mid-battle. Luke became frustrated since the golem was originally a body made from a stone wall, and it was quite hard for him to control it in 3 dimensions. The Blood Grizzly grabbed the opportunity to attack Luke while he was still too preoccupied with his mistake. Concerned, Dantho called out to Luke, telling him how it's too dangerous if things continued as they were. Accepting that his tactic had failed, Luke created a stone wall between him and the Blood Grizzly to defend himself. That this act momentarily stopped the Blood Grizzly, which gave Luke a chance to crash the golem into its side. With the combination of the golem and stone wall, Luke had finally managed to defeat the ferocious beast. The people who were worried for a minute after witnessing the battle let out a sigh of relief. Some were quite impressed with Luke and even wondered if the golem required some kind of secret ritual, or if our boy was just casually out here becoming fantasy Iron Man. Luke, on the other hand, was quite frustrated, since he wasn't able to use the 3D facility move skill very well. Michelle, who quietly observed the fight, thought about the golem's strange movements, Luke's calmness when confronted by a monster, and how Luke looked sad even after defeating the monster. Michelle gasped as he realized something. Approaching Luke, Michelle told him that though the fight was a close one, it was still a really cool golem. Hearing praises about the golem, Luke's sour expression was replaced with a bright smile. And so the maintenance of the Northern District concluded with no issues. Luke and Dantho left the Northern District, saying goodbye to Michelle. Meanwhile, at Luke's village, summer was drawing near and the temperature had gotten much hotter. Luke observed his villagers and noticed how the heat was really getting to everyone. Tara commented on how it was hard to stay motivated when the weather was cooking everybody alive like rotisserie chickens. Luke wondered if he had any facilities that might help with the current situation. When it came to cooling down, Luke thought that a pool would be best. Michelle asked what a pool was after hearing it from Luke. Luke then explained that it was similar to a bath but without hot water. A facility filled with water for people to swim, cool off, and have fun. Hearing Luke's explanation, Tyr asked if it's like playing in a river. Luke explained the difference, which was that a pool was a facility for leisure and exercise. Michelle also mentioned that the people who would go in would have to wear swimsuits, and that it was a facility both women and men could enjoy at the same time. Tyr became excited upon hearing women were involved. Grolb heard mixed swimming and immediately unlocked full NPC dialogue mode. When asked what swimsuits were, Luke told Tyr they were made to be easy to swim in, so they were fitting and elastic. Tyr guessed that nobles enjoyed such pastimes. Meanwhile, Melia, who had served Luke long before being banished, had never heard of such a pastime. Luke stated that he would be able to make the facility easily, and decided to ask some people at the clothing and food workshop if they could make some swimsuits. As Luke left, Tyr was still in a daze, thinking about playing with women. Several days later, the people on the farm were still getting exhausted from the heat. Their attention was then called as they were told that swimsuits were now made for all of them. The tailor told everyone that Luke provided them with a lot of inspiration and suggested they pick whichever one felt right for them. That with the swimsuit issue now solved, Luke then proceeded to work on making the pool. With the facility now done, Luke pointed to another facility and told them there was a room for changing and showers. The ladies were quite pleased to have a variety of swimsuits to try out and were happy since it made it easy to move and also looked very cute. Mulia called for Luke, asking him how it looked on her. Salin, on the other hand, wondered if the swimsuit was supposed to fit that way. The ladies in swimsuits drew lots of attention, especially from the men. Luke then told Salin and Melia that they both looked great. Concerned, Salius pointed out how the clothes were a bit lewd. However, that comment sparked anger from Taor, who stated that children needed to butt out. Taor then mentioned how Salius also wanted to see Philia in a swimsuit. Listening to others talk, Melia admitted to herself that the level of exposure was a bit unsettling, but judging from Luke's reaction, she was certain it was the proper attire for pools and not something silly. In any case, Milla didn't want to let the chance slip past her. Milla became excited at the thought of having Luke's attention fully locked onto her and planned to have him wrapped around her finger officially. Luke suddenly gasped as he called Philly out, telling her that she needed a swimsuit and not just randomly walk around naked. Since they would be splashing around in the water, Philia asked why she would have to wear clothes for that. Michelle was instantly pissed off since her entire strategy just got hard countered by elf logic. Meanwhile, Teo's vision suddenly turned red as Celius's blood spurted right into his eyes. Surrounded by beautiful flowers, Celius wondered where he was. In the corner of his eye, he saw Philia calling out his name. Completely mesmerized by her beauty, Celius ended up drinking from the cup that Philia was holding. Reality kicked back in, and Celius finally woke up to Luke feeding him a drink and telling him to wake up already. Getting himself back up, Silius asked what had happened to him. While Luke was relieved that Silius had finally regained consciousness, Celine, on the other hand, looked completely embarrassed and annoyed that Luke had to waste a potion on her brother's legendary nosebleed combo attack. Holding a tiny underwear piece, Malia asked Luke to wear the swimsuit, to which he immediately responded, "Pass." Everyone then enjoyed the cold water together. Even though it felt a little chilly at first, Luke and everyone else had no complaints since the pool felt amazing in the summer heat. When Taylor challenged everyone to a race, he became shocked after seeing Luke swing his arms so widely through the water and asked what kind of swimming style that was. Luke explained that the style was called freestyle. After teaching it to the others, Luke guessed that freestyle probably wasn't the standard way of swimming in this world. Looking around at everyone having fun, Luke felt genuinely happy seeing the villagers enjoying themselves so much. It even made him think about adding floaties and maybe even slides later on, because bro was already turning the wasteland into a full fantasy water park arc. Finally changing into something more appropriate, Philia asked Luke if what she was wearing was acceptable now. Luke was pleased after seeing that Philia was finally wearing a proper swimsuit for the pool. When Luke mentioned that everyone would be bathing together, Philia pointed out that the swimsuit honestly wasn't much different from her usual outfit anyway. With Philia now properly dressed, Luke thought it should finally stop Silius from reacting so dramatically. Unfortunately, that theory got folded instantly because Slee suffered yet another nosebleed after seeing Philia in a one-piece swimsuit. Yeah, he's definitely not okay, Luke thought while staring at the poor guy crashing out for the second time today. After putting Sleece back in bed, Tissa climbed out of the water and announced that he was hungry, saying now was the perfect time for that. Luke agreed and told Tessicar to inform everyone. Tior then excitedly revealed that they had chilled watermelons inside the cold storage house. After taking a bite, Cyan commented that the fruit tasted even better chilled. Once everyone finished eating, Tior suddenly started a seed-spitting contest. Luke found the whole thing pretty entertaining and decided to join in too. However, right as Luke was about to spit his seed, Malia suddenly moved close to his face. She stared directly at his mouth before quickly backing away after Luke awkwardly asked what the problem was. Gasping, Malia panicked and told him it was nothing at all. Turning his attention back to TR, Luke admitted that seed-spitting contests were pretty fun, though he then asked everyone if they knew about the watermelon smashing game. Curious, TR asked what kind of game that was. Luke explained that the player would wear a blindfold and walk around swinging a stick while everyone else guided them toward the watermelon, using their voices. Hearing that, Celine thought it sounded fun and immediately asked if she could try first. Luke agreed and started preparing the watermelon. Unfortunately for him, Celine had already taken a battle stance before he even finished setting it down. The second Luke stepped away from the fruit, Celine instantly sliced the watermelon clean in half with her weapon. The sight completely shocked Luke, Tior, and everyone else watching. Holding one half of the watermelon, Celine proudly commented that the game was easy. Luke immediately started scolding her, telling her that using a real sword was insanely dangerous and that she could have hurt somebody. Celine calmly reassured Luke that there was no problem because she could easily sense a watermelon's presence. Luke just stared at her in complete confusion because bro had no idea what watermelon presence was supposed to mean. Phoenixfelia then approached the group after noticing everyone having fun and asked if she could try too. The moment Luke turned around after hearing her voice, he noticed she was covered in blood and immediately asked if she had gone near Salius again. Philia casually admitted that she did because he looked sick, but apparently the moment Silius woke up and saw her, he fainted again instantly. Yeah, that tracks, Luke thought, while mentally accepting Silius's fate at this point. Taking out her bow, Philia then announced that it was her turn. Luke quickly warned her that using a bow sounded dangerous and suggested she just use a stick instead. Philia stopped him and confidently reassured him that there was nothing to worry about. Pointing toward the watermelon, she claimed that sensing a watermelon's presence was a very simple task. Once again, Luke became completely puzzled over whatever superhuman watermelon detection skill these people apparently had. With almost zero effort, Philia sliced the watermelon perfectly in half. Even though Luke was impressed, he still reminded her that this wasn't how the game was supposed to work. Wanting his own chance, one boy loudly declared that he would skewer 10 watermelons at once using a spear. Another contestant bragged that he would smash the melons apart with a hand-strike shockwave. Luke desperately tried telling everyone to calm down because the game was starting to become absurdly dangerous. However, Salin casually reassured him that everything was fine and that if somebody missed and caused actual danger, they would simply re-educate them afterward. Luke immediately fell silent after witnessing watermelons getting obliterated by swords, spears, arrows, and shockwaves all over the place. At that moment, the only thing going through his head was that this definitely was not the watermelon smashing game he remembered from his old life. Meanwhile, Milla was still secretly searching around for the seed Luke had spit out earlier like it was some sacred artifact. A healthy baby boy was finally born in the village, so Luke congratulated the couple on the safe delivery. However, instead of accepting the praise, the parents became emotional and thanked Luke instead, because the mother had been terrified about giving birth before moving into the village. Living there had reassured her so much that she finally felt safe enough to bring a child into the world. Hearing that made Luke happy all over again that he had built a clinic with his gift because bro accidentally turned the wasteland into fantasy universal healthcare. The couple then asked Luke to name their child since, in their eyes, their son only existed thanks to him. Luke immediately got nervous because that felt like a ridiculously huge responsibility. Still, after awkwardly thinking for a moment, he combined parts of both parents' names and came up with Baluk. The couple instantly exploded with happiness, fully convinced that Luke had used his own name as inspiration for the baby. Luke quietly decided not to tell them it was just a coincidence, because they looked way too happy to ruin the moment. Rillet proudly commented that he was one of the first villagers in the settlement, only for Milla to immediately cut in and remind everyone that she was actually the very first. Turns out, Milla had sprinted over the second she heard Luke was naming babies. Donga then stepped forward and shamelessly asked Luke to name his future child too. Apparently, he and his wife had just found out she was pregnant, and he also thanked Luke because the healthy lifestyle in the village basically had the entire population entering their family arc. And just like that, a whole crowd suddenly rushed toward Luke, asking him to name their future kids too. Luke instantly felt overwhelmed because Bro accidentally unlocked the local baby naming NPC side quest. Trying to escape the situation, he jokingly suggested naming them after his golems, but the entire crowd collectively rejected the idea because nobody wanted their child sounding like a medieval siege weapon. Luke struggled to live up to everyone's expectations, though Milla confidently reassured him that she had already thought of plenty of names for their future kids, which immediately made Luke nervous for completely different reasons. Unfortunately for Luke, the breeding boom wasn't limited to humans either. Before he knew it, he found himself surrounded by tiny farm animals running all over the place. Nanlu explained that many villagers had brought livestock with them when they immigrated, and thanks to the livestock sheds, the animal population had absolutely exploded. Luke nearly jumped when he heard a loud rumbling noise nearby, though Nanlu casually explained that it was just one of their cows. Luke then saw the creatures and realized these cows were built like absolute fantasy boss monsters. Nilu didn't even blink at their gigantic size because apparently they produced insane amounts of milk. Luke was still trying to process the existence of kaiju cows when he spotted enormous chickens wandering around too. Once again, Nilu excitedly explained that the chickens laid tons of eggs every single day. Luke felt relieved after seeing that the eggs themselves were at least normal-sized, but his peace lasted about 3 seconds before he learned each chicken laid nearly 50 eggs a day. Brosa realized the village's breakfast economy was permanently secured. Or eventually, Luke somehow accepted the fact that oversized livestock was just a normal thing in his life now. He even jokingly wondered if staying near the livestock sheds long enough would make him grow taller too, though Nellie immediately shut that idea down before he started experimenting with magical cow genetics. Instead, she asked Luke to build more sheds because the baby animals were growing quickly and needed additional space. Luke agreed and promised to build 10 more sheds while expanding the pasture too. Just when Luke thought the situation couldn't get crazier, Nail casually dropped another bombshell by revealing that the tree dragon had also given birth. Naturally, the two headed over to greet the dragon, and Luke noticed the giant creature had become surprisingly attached to Nail. She then showed him several tiny tree sprouts nearby. At first, Luke assumed they were just ordinary plants, but the moment Nail called out to them, the little twigs suddenly started moving around on their own. As the tiny sprouts happily greeted Luke, Nell explained that baby tree dragons resembled treants during their early stages of life. Luke found the tiny creatures weirdly adorable at first, though he immediately paused after remembering these little guys would someday become gigantic dragons the size of buildings. The horrifying thought made Luke wonder whether dragons reproduced every single year. Realizing that line of thinking would absolutely destroy his sanity, he immediately decided not to think about it any further.